This is the Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate what if Naruto saved an immortal femme-vampire. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
As their owner tried to recall what had transpired prior to their most recent closure, Blue Eyes opened weary. The eyes belonged to a girl who appeared to be only 10 or 11 years old. With long blonde hair and a slightly tanned complexion, she was dressed in a gothic Lolita-style black frilled top, black leather boots, and a slightly ripped and tattered black cape to finish the look, but appearances were very misleading. This was the powerful vampire Evangeline aka McDowell. The Nosferatu Maga, the mage who never dies, the night's queen. Mistress of shadows and ice, the master doll, whatever name she went by. It always evoked the same emotions: awe and fear. She was a daywalker of unparalleled power and an ancient Shinso vampire. She was actually older than 600 or 700 years. Though she didn't really care because she couldn't remember the precise date. For a long time you'll last forever, so why count the years as time passes? Evangeline was without a doubt one of the most powerful black sorcerers in history, if not the strongest one. Even so, she snarled as she recalled what had transpired prior to closing her eyes. She had been defeated. As she pieced together what had happened, everything quickly came back to her. She had pursued a young mage who had caught her attention and turned out to be a hero. She pursued him, harassed him, and even had a slight crush on the mortal. He had finally retaliated against her, though, because she had finally worn him down. She believed it would be simple. Here she was, a centuries-old vampire unmatched by anyone, taking on a young hero in his 20s. Nevertheless, the unthinkable occurred. She lost. Not only did he lose, but the young man in the tan cloak with the red hair completely humiliated him. They referred to him as the Thousand Master. Nagi Springfield was his equally well-known name. With the help of his abilities and a few allies who went by the name Alarubra, he had twice saved the magical realm of Mundus Magicus. However, none of that had mattered to Evangeline, who had only seen what she desired: a strong, somewhat attractive mage whose abilities had captured her interest despite her centuries of experience and knowledge. They possessed skills that far exceeded hers. "Ah, you've woken up. How ya feeling, Eva-chan? Didn't it happen that if you talk about the devil, he will show up?" With a growl, Evangeline turned to confront the man who had assaulted her and got to her feet. However, she then noticed he was taller and looked down to see her in her childlike form. She yelled, "Why am I like this? What have you done to me?" With a faint English accent. Grinning, the man rubbed the back of his head and gestured to her with a big wooden staff in his right hand. "Well, I undid that super illusion that made you look like an adult, and then I thought about what to do with you before I figured I'd bring you here," he said, shaking his finger slightly in response to the girl's growl. I should also mention I put a really powerful seal on you. You can't use your magic as long as I'm nearby. Can't have you going nuts while I try to explain things, can I?" He joked. The girl didn't believe him and began to call on her magic and chant a spell to seal the great Evangeline. Who does he believe he is? The vampire gaped though when something caught her immediate attention. No spell was used. The great ice lance she called out to run through Nagi's grinning head was absent. She chanted out her spell again to the same effect. She tried a different spell, but still nothing. Evangeline was growing worried and began running through spell after spell, some not even related to attacks or combat entirely, but the result was always the same. No magic. She was truly sealed by him. As she held him by his cloak and shook him back and forth, the man calmly explained, Now Eva-chan, don't worry, it's only temporary." This was the only thing she could do with her powers locked up, since she was obviously incapable of harming him in this state. It was also the only thing Nagi was willing to allow her to do. "You will give me back my powers this instant." He sat down in a chair and gestured around them after the girl dropped him. "Maybe later I should explain everything first." In all honesty, the girl had been too busy getting Nagi to lift her apparent seal and paying attention to it to notice or even care. "Haven't you noticed where we are?" she asked. She was in some sort of office. When she looked around, she had been lying on a couch. Across from a bookshelf on one side to his right was a desk with an even bigger chair behind it, and Nagi was seated in a chair in the middle of the room. An elderly man smoking a pipe and dressed in white robes was sitting in a chair, seemingly observing her. A white four-pointed hat with the kanji for fire in a red corner was perched atop his head. She had no idea where she was, so she asked dryly, "Okay, where are we?" The elderly man was the first to respond. "You were in Kanahagakure no Sato of Hai no Kuni." Nagi chirped. "We're in the fabled third world, Eva-chan." Which caused the girl to gape. For many, there were only two worlds: Mundus Magicus, the magical and illusionary world based on a dimensional pocket created on Mars, and Mundus Vetus, the ordinary world of Earth, which was populated primarily by mortals and non-magical people. Evangeline was actually a native of Mundus Vetus, having been born there as a human long before the vampire curse was placed upon her. The two worlds have been the only constants in her long life. Yes, it was changing, but it was always there with her. She persevered while nothing else did, but lately, she had started to hear about a third world. Before actually trying to use her magic to find and travel there, she initially paid little attention to them. After witnessing the same to emerge from the shadows for the past few centuries, it never hurts to see some fresh scenery. However, in spite of her strength, she had failed to locate even a hint of this legendary third world. She had therefore written it off as a myth and a fool's dream, and Nagi was telling her now that they were in the dream of that idiot. That much was clear. Nagi was a fool. Nevertheless, Kanahagakure, and Hi-no Kuni, as the older man had described it, didn't sound familiar. Evangeline had never heard of or seen any places with those names in all her travels. She might have been in the third world. If there was one, then she would know why she had never heard of them. Nagi nodded, and the vampire repeated, "The third world. Yet this place is different in that they don't even have magic. They use a different energy source they call chakra for their spells. Technology-wise they're kind of behind, and culture-wise they're very similar to the old Japan, even speaking the same language we know as Japanese." Nagi clarified before turning to the other individual, "This guy here is actually very important. He's one of the 5 strongest in the world and leader of this place and its military." He nodded as he introduced himself, and Eva nodded in return. "My name is Hiruzen Sarutobi and I am the Sandaime Hokage." He seemed powerful, and since power was one of the few things that could pique Eva's interest in these long days, she at least respected it. Kanahagakure, or Konoha for short, is the shinobi village and military center of the country of Hi-no Kuni. The country itself is led by a daimyo during times of peace, while I lead it during times of war. As we are currently at peace, I simply lead this village to make sure our forces keep the country and village safe from minor threats. There are many countries here, but there are 5 major powers, of which Konoha is currently on top of. The 5 greats, as we are called, are each led by a shinobi known as a kage. Like myself, we are worldly recognized as the 5 strongest shinobi currently alive and are tasked with ensuring our respective villages are kept safe and strong," the man continued. Nagi complimented them while Evangeline scoffed at the notion, "And like I said, they don't use magic, they have something else, and yet this old-timer here is almost on par with us. I'd bet if he was in his prime he'd be able to beat us even." She continued to deny that Nagi had beaten her. Before putting down his pipe and performing a brief 3-symbol sequence and then exhaling a tiny stream of fire in her direction to illustrate, he explained, "We use chakra, which is the combination of the body's physical and spiritual energies, and unlike you who chant for your magic, we use hand symbols to release our jutsu." Ignoring the little fire show, the woman turned to Nagi and said, "That's nice, but why am I here?" "Well, I couldn't let you keep chasing me and attacking me," began Nagi. "So I figured I'd seal you somewhere for a few years and then come back and see if your attitudes improved. But then that brought up the question of where to seal you. I was thinking of a couple places back on Mundus Magicus, but those all came with different problems, like the bounty hunters and other mages after you that would put those people at risk. So then I thought, why not a place that people don't even know exists? Here in the third world, the other 2 are a secret known only to the 5 kage, passed down from leader to leader in private. To us of the other 2, the third world is a myth that nobody can reach. In reality, I discovered it by accident a couple years ago and met Sarutobi-san here and struck up a little friendship. He also owes me a favor since I saved his life when I came here last, so he's agreed to keep an eye on you here. Since nobody back in our worlds knows how to reach this one, you'll be safe from the people after you, and these people will be safe from you going wild to defend yourself," Nagi explained as Eva growled. "And if I don't want to be here?" As the girl snarled once more, Nagi began, "Well, that's why you can't leave." She gaped when Nagi said, "I put more than that single seal on you, Eva-chan. You are sealed to Konoha as a whole. You can travel up to 1 mile outside the village walls before you'll hit the edge and be thrown back. Also, while I'm within the village walls, your powers are completely suppressed. When I'm not, you're limited to around 50%. If the current Hokage grants permission, then you can be returned to full strength for a short time. What's to stop me from getting that permission and then breaking your seals and going home?" Nagi smiled and said, Many fail-safes, this seal is my masterpiece. Now, there's a couple more things I should explain before I leave and you work out living arrangements with Sarutobi-san here. First is that the seal is tied to the village in such a way that if the village is destroyed, you will lose your powers forever, so if anything happens, you'll have to help defend this place. The second is that if when I come back you're still the same as you are now, then I'll just leave you here again for some years. Knowing she would have to follow his rules for the time being, Evangeline snarled, "How long?" He said, "I'll be back in 15 years hopefully," and stood up. He chirped, "Anyway, I better be going, thanks for doing this, Sarutobi-san. And then hurriedly chanted a spell in Latin while brandishing his staff. He gave the irate blonde girl one last smile before disappearing in a flash of white light. 4 years later, a woman with long red hair and violet eyes ran up as the blonde woman stopped and turned around, saying, "Hey Eva. Where've you been?" She wore black pants and a red battle kimono top over a green vest, which was typical of the village's jonin. She had fingerless red gloves on her hands and a few red weapon pouches at her sides. Her favorite color was red, and everyone could see it. Evangeline said, "You need something, Kushina." She had her illusion activated while she was in the village, giving the impression that she was a tall, attractive blonde in her late teens, roughly the same age as the girl who had called out to her. Strangely enough, Kushina was the vampire's first friend in Konoha, with her boyfriend Minato being her second. "No, just wondering where you've been lately. I mean, I know you can't leave the village because of..." "Well but Minato and I were wondering where you've been. You haven't even been in your secluded little cottage recently." In fact, the two had met by chance when Kushina got lost while searching for someone close to one of the village's numerous training grounds and happened upon a little cottage on the outskirts of the village. She entered, wondering who owned it, and Evangeline attacked her right away. After fighting back until everything was resolved, Kushina apologized and walked away. She had returned 3 days later, requesting a spar because the mage had been such a formidable foe. Eva had only consented because she was getting bored, but over time, Kushina had developed into a friend. Evangeline's network of contacts expanded beyond the Hokage after the girl introduced her to her boyfriend and a few of her own friends. The red-haired Jonin asked, "So where've you been?" Evangeline grinned. "I've been in my home the entire time." As the vampire maintained her smirk, Kushina yelled, "No way. Minato and I searched that place top to bottom and you were nowhere to be found." Kushina simply smiled as the woman said, "It's something I've been working on for a few months and finally finished. Come by this Saturday with the annoying blonde and I'll show the two of you. It's something I think the two of you will find immensely useful and enjoyable." Eva laughed at Kushina's verbal tick and said, "You got it, TT Ebane. Instead, at least they never get old." 8 years later, Eva asked, lounging in her time chamber's artificial sun, "You want me to be what?" It appeared to be a glass ball with a diorama of an island paradise inside from the outside. She could, however, use some of her magic to move herself or other people inside it, making a full day in the sphere seem like just 1 hour outside of it. Because it was a distinct pocket dimension and not a part of the seal, she also had complete access to her magic within. She used all of her strength to simultaneously slap Minato and Kushina while grinning when she first brought them inside. It had been hilarious to watch the blonde scream like a child and then teleport away after dropping a whole glacier on him. As she relaxed beside a man with piercing blue eyes and spiky blonde hair, Kushina reiterated, "We want you to be the godmother to our soon-to-be-born son Naruto." He wore his work clothes, a white trench coat with red flames on the bottom, over Konoha's typical Jonin attire, while she wore a blue dress. The kanji for Yondaime Hokage, a title he had attained at the close of the Third War a few years prior, was displayed on the back of the trench coat. Minato sighed, and Eva questioned, "Why me? Why not that Tsunade woman?" "Tsunade-sama left the village because of her pain and won't come back. If something were to happen to us, we'd want our son to be taken care of by someone that stays here in Konoha. We've already asked Jiraiya-sensei to be godfather and he's agreed to do it," the man clarified before Evangeline closed her eyes and pondered. As Kushina nodded, Eva grinned and joked, "All right, fine. Wouldn't want the boy to grow up under that pervert. I'm surprised you turned out as well as you did under him." "I know, right? How that perverted bastard managed to make my husband like this without corrupting him is a miracle." Minato hung his head and muttered, "Sensei isn't that bad." Kushina and Evangeline exchanged a quick look before turning back to face him. "What's his favorite pastime? What kind of books is he writing now?" Minato asked, perspiring as they pointed out his sensei's serious shortcomings before ending the argument. October 10th, Sarutobi snarled, "Why didn't you help against the Kyuubi?" Evangeline was seated on the couch, and he was once again seated in the Hokage chair. "Nagi specifically told you that you were to help defend the village." Not wanting to acknowledge that she had been lounging in her resort for a few hours, days to her, and had only learned of the attack after leaving, she lied and claimed, "I was indisposed. One of my magical contraptions went slightly haywire and I used too much power subduing the problem without raising an alarm." Sarutobi snarled once more before letting out a sigh and calming down. "I see," as the Sandame pulled out his pipe and lit it. Evangeline questioned, "How did Kyuubi even escape? I was under the impression that with Minato there, Kushina's seal was in no danger of breaking." She waved it off, so he took a few drags before responding. "You mind?" he asked. Evangeline nodded before shifting the topic. "I have a few Anbu looking over the site, but they haven't returned yet. I'll let you know if something comes up. I'm unsure as to how the beast escaped from Kushina. I know Minato has died. He sealed Kyuubi back up into his son. What about Kushina though?" "Dead." Eva looked down and the man sadly confessed when she got home, she was definitely going to drown herself in sake. "And what of Naruto? They made me the boy's godmother and I promised I would watch over him if something happened to them. Where is he?" the vampire inquired. She missed the brief smile that briefly appeared on Sarutobi's face before his somber expression took its place because she was staring down. The woman nodded before getting up and walking away. The baby died shortly after Kyuubi was placed into him. Apparently the raw demonic power of the Biju was too much for he newborn. "I'm sorry, Evangeline." As the door closed, the reinstated Hokage smiled. He could simply lie and say the boy would be well taken care of after persuading the man that his spy network would be more important than raising a child with Jiraiya. But Evangeline was another story. There was nothing stopping her from taking care of the boy since it was her responsibility as godmother. Lying and claiming he was well cared for wouldn't matter. Therefore, he had to pretend to be dead. When combined with Minato and Kushina's deaths, she probably wouldn't become aware of the lie for some time. If at all, that would guarantee that the boy would grow up to be the ideal Jinchuriki, a demon weapon that is only loyal to him. 5 years later, Evangeline frowned as she made her way home through the streets. She was strolling down the village's main street after placing an order for the supplies she would require for several more months. Some of the men gave her lustful glances because she was acting like a teenager, but she disregarded them since she was capable of defeating everyone if they attempted to harm her. For the previous 5 years, the woman had been depressed. It had been painful to lose her 2 best friends. Her mood only got worse when Nagi didn't show up for his 15th birthday, but when a young child ran past her while being pursued by some inebriated people who called him a demon, she was startled out of her reverie. But it wasn't the inebriated insults that had drawn her attention, it was the spiky blonde hair and the vivid blue eyes. It was a shade and combination she hadn't seen in 5 years. "Minato?" She shook her head after giving it some thought. No, the man had passed away. The boy seemed familiar in some way, but something still didn't feel quite right. When she chased after the drunks, she discovered that they had cornered the young boy in an alley. Now that I think about it, Naruto would have been around that age by now. When they saw her, they made some inebriated remarks about her, but she chose to ignore them as she observed the boy. He had short blonde hair that was exactly the same shade as Minato's, and it was incredibly bright and spiky. Additionally, his eyes were the same shade of blue as Kushina's, but they were rounder. The woman with the man's hair resembled the boy. If that wasn't enough of a warning, she could also feel the power within him. Kyuubi, this boy possessed the same power that Evangeline had become used to feeling in Kushina. However, that ought to be impossible. Kyuubi would be gone from the world for at least a few more years if the demon had been sealed into Naruto and Naruto had died. Unless, Evangeline frowned, rapidly realizing that there was more going on here than she had previously realized, but it would have to wait because the boy was being approached by the drunks. The woman never hurt a child, not even in her darkest and most heinous moments. Before chanting another spell that caused spears of ice to form behind her, she swiftly chanted one to put him to sleep. She placed the sleeping boy in her cottage's guest room and had someone keep watch over him for an hour. She also affirmed that the boy was Kyuubi. She would have her answers tomorrow, but Sarutobi was going to pay if that was what she believed. When sunlight streamed in through the window and disrupted his sleep, Naruto moaned and rubbed his eyes. Despite trying to turn over, he was unable to fall asleep. He reluctantly opened his eyes at last, but then he noticed something. The blanket covering him was fluffy and warm, and the bed he was in was incredibly soft. The despised orphanage child did not possess those things. After rubbing the last of the sleep from his bright blue eyes, the blonde with spiky hair opened them and surveyed his surroundings. He was in the center of a rather large bed with black sheets on it. A couple of black curtains, which were currently drawn back to let in the bright sun, hung from the bedpost. Speaking of, he had his clothes folded neatly on a desk beneath the window to his right. Where sunlight was streaming in, there was a dresser on the opposite side of the room, and 2 doors directly across from him, one closed and the other slightly open to reveal a private bathroom. When the blonde lifted the covers, she saw that the wound he had sustained the night before was covered with a tiny bandage. He scowled before recalling last night in an attempt to find some hint as to who might have assisted him or brought him to their house. Night before, Naruto Uzumaki was a cheerful person at all times. Even though almost everyone hated him, his Oji-san and a few kind people at a food stand were always happy for him. Like many others who lost their parents in the Kyuubi attack 5 years ago, the blonde lived in the village orphanage. But he wasn't treated the same way as everyone else just because he was like them. Everyone detested him for reasons he was unable to explain. He was told he couldn't play with other children, was given the worst clothes or other items, and was always the last to receive food. Sometimes only scraps. He never understood why, but he continued to smile, believing that eventually people would like him. He could sneak out of the orphanage to explore the city because he was rarely watched, which he did frequently everywhere he went. He continued to receive glares, but he ignored it. For the simple reason that there had been more to see last night than on his previous runs through the village, it had been more enjoyable. 1 week remained until the annual Kyuubi festival on October 10th, and preparations were already underway. When Naruto ran around and saw people setting up food stalls, game areas, and a few stages for plays and performances, all he could do was smile. Naruto had neglected to return to the orphanage for the night because he was so engrossed in his wonder, but the boy wasn't bothered by it. He had previously done this and spent the night away from the location. He never liked it, but he didn't mind, and the people who visited the orphanage didn't seem to mind either, barely noticing his absence. Naruto had spent the entire night exploring the village's sights before he happened upon a bar. The boy didn't go inside because it smelled weird, but he did peek over a windowsill to see what was inside after hearing the cheers and shouting. He noticed that the source of the unpleasant odor was being consumed by a number of men and women, some of whom were shinobi and others were civilians. Before they began yelling at him, a couple of irate men in one corner had seen him and pointed him out. When they emerged from the bar and continued to yell at him, Naruto moved away from the window and began to walk away. When they attempted to grab Naruto, he fled quickly even though he had no idea what they wanted. Every living thing has a fight or flight instinct that tells them to flee from danger. As a result, the nearly 5-year-old boy fled, and the irate inebriated people began to pursue him. More people watched the boy being chased as they ran, and instead of assisting a helpless little child, they encouraged the men and even joined the group. When Naruto finally took a turn, he realized right away that he had erred. He had reached a dead end. The boy whirled around, staring fearfully at his assailants who had caught up and blocked the way out. They all started yelling at him for being a demon and killing the Yondaime, and one of them punched him to the ground. The blonde was scared and had no idea what they were talking about. Naruto curled into a ball, clutching the wound in agony as one man slashed his side with a knife. A voice caught their attention as the crowd pressed in on them. Even Naruto peeked his head out of the ball he had curled into to see the drunks stop and turn to face the person who had interrupted them. "What the hell are you doing?" they exclaimed. A woman in her late teens, dressed in a black dress, with long blonde hair and blue eyes, was the one who yelled. After giving the drunks a quick glance, she turned to face Naruto. Her eyes briefly widened before she squinted and returned her focus to the adults who had been torturing him. "I said, what the hell are you doing?" As many of the other men stared at him in lust, one slurred, "Just taking care of the local demon problem, cutie." She snarled back, "The only demons I see are the ones okay with hurting a child." The men appeared offended by her remark. As one yelled that they would be heroes for solving the demon problem, another responded, "Don't let the demon's disguise fool you." As she snarled, he said, "Tell ya what, if the demon scares you then we can keep you safe, honey." The woman looked at Naruto and said, "Boy, you're going to go to sleep right now. This is not something you want to see." She pointed at him and chanted something without waiting for a response. The boy was having trouble staying awake, and his eyes started to feel heavy. Large spikes of ice formed behind the woman as she chanted some more words he didn't understand, and that was the last thing he saw before fainting. Naruto whispered, "That pretty lady saved me," before touching the wound and finding that it was surprisingly painless. Inquiring as to where the wound had disappeared, he prodded it once more after removing the bandage to reveal nothing more than a scratch. After a while, he shrugged and turned to look around. Without anticipating a response, he asked aloud, "Did she bring me to her house too?" "Yeah, she saved you and brought ya home, Whiskers. I didn't know Master liked strays though." As a result, the boy jumped in fear when he saw one, then frantically searched the area for the source of the small voice. "Down here, by your clothes, Whiskers." Naruto looked to where the voice indicated to see something he had overlooked before, a small doll. The doll, who resembled the woman who had saved him the previous evening, had big eyes, short green hair, and a black dress with a big loop of white ribbon around her neck. Naruto stared at the doll for a moment when its mouth moved. "Hiya, Whiskers." It chirped. After going through a traumatic event, Naruto reacted as many people would when they saw a talking doll. He screamed and jumped off the bed, away from the source of his shock. "Yo, you can TT talk," he shouted as he peeked over the bed to see the doll laughing at him with a large grin. "You're funny, Whiskers," she chirped as Naruto noticed the voice was that of a young girl. "Why are you so scared of little ol' me? I don't got anything to hurt you with." the doll asked as Naruto got back onto the bed and crawled over to the other side to get a closer look at the doll. The boy pouted and said, "I'm not scared," because he didn't like being teased by a toy. However, it was clear that he was terrified because he refused to approach the talking figurine. The doll just laughed as he boasted, "You just surprised me and all." The blonde shakily picked up his clothes and hurried to the bathroom, unwilling to change in front of the odd little toy. "Whatever, Whiskers, get dressed. I'm supposed to lead ya to master once you got up." After a few minutes, the boy emerged and tapped the area where his clothing had been fixed because the hole from his slash wound had disappeared. Naruto paused before the doll, gazing at it for a while. "Okay. Where's this master of yours?" To the amusement of the dolls, Naruto picked her up gently and held her away from him, but the doll retaliated, saying, "I can't move, Whiskers, you've gotta pick me up so I can lead you to her. You know I'm not gonna hurt ya, Whiskers, I don't even have any of my knives to stab you with." She laughed. "Did that comment help you in any way?" She sighed when she noticed that Naruto was still holding the doll while he was still looking at it fearfully. Naruto obeyed her order and then followed her instructions out of the room and into a hallway. "Just spin me around so I can see where we're going and I'll lead ya to master." Naruto saw that it was a rather unremarkable but lovely two-story house as he proceeded down the hall and then down a set of stairs. Other than the occasional shelf holding additional dolls, there were no pictures on the walls or distinguishing features, though none of them really spoke to Naruto's quiet relief. He finally arrived at a tiny kitchen space where a young girl, who appeared to be 10 or 11 years old, was sitting cross-legged at a table sipping tea, flipping through a book, and muttering to herself. The doll chirped, "Hiya, master. Whiskers is up." Glancing up, the girl smiled and gestured for the boy to place her doll beside the book. As Naruto put the doll down and examined the girl, she remarked, "I see Chachazero brought you like I told her to." She had blue eyes and long blonde hair that cascaded down her back in waves. She was barefoot and dressed in a gothic Lolita-style white dress with yellow and light blue accents. Naruto simply moved to the chair across from her and gestured to the now identified Chachazero. She dismissed it as if it didn't matter, and he said, "Yeah, kinda weird seeing a talking doll though." She joked, "I made her years ago." Then she fixed a serious gaze on Naruto, as though he were a puzzle she had to solve. The boy tilted his head to the side in perplexity as she said, "Now boy, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Afterwards I'll decide what to do with you." He then asked his own questions. The girl grinned and gestured to herself when he said, "Well, okay, but where's the pretty lady that helped me last night? I want to thank her for helping me. She'd be your Ne-chan, right?" She told him, "I'm the one who helped you last night, boy." Naruto looked at her for a moment before laughing, which irritated her. "What's so funny? You can't be her. She was really pretty and tall and stuff. You're barely older than me," he exclaimed, making Chachazero laugh as well with a clenched jaw. The girl snapped her fingers and vanished in a burst of white light. The woman from last night was seated in her place when it cleared. As Naruto apologized and she transformed back into a child in another flash, she explained, "I told you, I'm that woman. I use this form when I leave the house because people won't take me seriously otherwise." She sighed and shook her head, saying, "You aren't the first to make that mistake." Naruto smiled and gave himself a thumbs up as she said, "Anyways, my questions first, what's your name?" The girl narrowed her eyes and muttered something under her breath that he was unable to understand before she raised her next query. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki." "How old are you and who are your parents?" Naruto asked, grinning at the first question before frowning at the second. As the girl growled, causing him to look at her bewilderedly, Naruto explained, "I'll be 5 on the 10th. And I don't know my parents. I'm an orphan. Oji-san told me they died in the Kyuubi attack when I was born, but he won't say who they are. He says they were really strong but had a lot of bad people after them, so if I was told they'd come after me too." She got up and began stomping around the kitchen in rage, shouting, "That lying old monkey. I'm going to kill that son of a bitch. Next time I see him I'll freeze his ass and shatter him into dust." While Chachazero smiled after hearing her master discuss eviscerating the Hokage in various ways, Naruto sat in his seat, a little alarmed as the girl was leaking some murderous intent. What a vicious little doll. Before she noticed anything, the girl eventually calmed down. "Wait a minute, boy, who's this Oji-san you mentioned?" "The old man in white with the funny hat, she inquired, and Naruto furrowed his brow in contemplation. He described it as, "You know, kind of like a box lid. It's white except one corner is red and has this mark on it." The boy waved his hands in an attempt to let her know who he was referring to. The boy flinched as the girl, who had recognized the description, growled. She yelled, "That fucking bastard," as Naruto raised his hands in terror, as if it would be beneficial if she did choose to strike. The girl relaxed and let out a sigh upon witnessing his response. "I'm not going to hurt you, boy. I am going to hurt your Oji-san though for lying to me 5 years ago." Naruto yelled, What? You can't hurt Oji-san. He's the only one that's nice to me. The girl turned to face him, perplexed. As she sat down once more, she asked, What do you mean? Naruto glanced down and then shook his head. Naruto glared at her, saying, Why should I tell you? You want to hurt Oji-san? I don't even know who you are. Lady. She had witnessed worse from people much stronger than a 5-year-old with no combat experience, so it didn't really affect her much worse. He did have a point, though even though she had taken him into her home and saved him last night, she had not yet introduced herself and was inquiring about him now that it had been pointed out to her. It was a bit impolite. When she decided to play with the younger boy, she said, My apologies, boy, I forgot to introduce myself. I am Evangeline aka McDowell. And I'm a vampire. The boy's response was unimpressive. As she and her doll laughed, he quickly went pale and fell out of the chair in his haste to escape her. She hadn't had anything to laugh about in 5 years. It was pleasant. A vampire? Chirped Naruto in terror. Yes, he did hear the tales. To frighten the younger children, some of the older children at the orphanage told them stories at night. Tales of blood drinking, bat transforming, shadow walking superpowers that were more formidable than the cages by draining people of all their blood. They were said to be able to hypnotize them more effectively than any genjutsu and transform them into vampires themselves. It would be an understatement to say that the 5-year-old was frightened to meet a real one. His cry was, "SSSS, stay back." As he crawled back onto the ground, Eva simply chuckled a little more and shook her head. You can come closer, boy. I already said I'm not going to hurt you, and I meant it. She stated to him. Evangeline sighed, got up from her chair, and walked over to stand over him after he stopped moving away but didn't approach the table again. Look, if I really wanted to hurt you or drink your blood or any of that other stuff, wouldn't I have done it by now? She said when she grabbed his arm and pulled him to his feet. Naruto didn't flee but instead followed her back to the table because he had to concede that she had a point. Now listen, the man you call Oji-san. He lied to me 5 years ago about something very important. It was something I was asked to do by 2 of my closest friends. However, he told me that I couldn't do it, and I believed him because I was depressed since my friends had just died in the Kyuubi attack. Naruto chirped, like my parents, as she nodded. Yes, now what I'm about to say will shock you and I doubt you'll believe me, so allow me to explain first. You see, I'm not really some little girl like I look. I'm hundreds of years old because I'm a vampire. I have many powerful abilities that I may show you later. Because of this, my friends asked me to take care of their child should something happen to them. When they died during the Kyuubi attack, I asked the old man about that child so that I could do as they asked and take care of it. He however told me the child also died in the attack. I was so sad my friends had died, I didn't look into it and just accepted what he said. He had never lied to me before, so I had no reason to think he would then. Eva said as Naruto nodded, had been following her. Eva smiled slightly when she saw that and then gestured to him. His eyes grew wide as she nodded in agreement. When I saw you last night it made me think of my friends since you look like them. And your name and age match theirs. The boy was crying and about to say, You, Naruto, are the boy I was supposed to take care of. I'm your godmother. They were interrupted by a loud knock on the door. Recognizing the chakra of the one at the door, Eva narrowed her eyes. She gestured to the side and said, Naruto, I want you to hold Chachazero and go stand over there. She said, I'm going to cast a spell that will make you invisible, so I need you to be quiet. No matter what you hear or see, you must be quiet, understand? The boy nodded and picked up the doll, holding her close because he was preoccupied with Eva's admission and instructions rather than her earlier comments about stabbing. Eva chanted under her breath and then pointed at him as the blonde approached the side. Naruto had the impression that someone had simply covered him with a blanket and then looked down to gasp. He could no longer see himself, so he muttered, Cool. Eva stood up and glared for a moment. She hissed, Quiet, and went to the door down the hall. An Anbu with white hair and a dog-style mask said, We found them like this, Hokage-sama. The elderly Hokage sighed as he saw about 10 men impaled on spikes of ice that were slowly melting in the alley. They were all dead civilians with puddles of blood underneath them. The large light blue spike through their chests simply drove the others to the ground, while a couple were impaled into walls. The Anbu said, Witness reports of last night say these men were chasing the demon brat around before there were a few screams and the brat was carried away by a blonde woman. We think the demon finally lashed out and killed them, sir. His voice was clearly filled with hatred whenever he brought up the demon brat. Sarutobi shook his head and sighed. No, Kakashi, this was not his doing. As the man pointed to the ice, he inquired further, Sir? As the Anbu removed his mask to reveal a one-eyed face, the man pointed out, Tell me, do you feel any chakra in that ice? Demonic or otherwise, can you sense anything from it? Use your Sharingan if you wish. from the nose down as a mask, and his headband, which featured a metal plate with a spiral leaf mark on it, covered his left eye. He grasped the headband and raised it, revealing a red eye with 3 black tomo encircling the pupil. I don't sense or see any chakra, Hokage-sama. How is that possible? The elderly Kage shook his head when Kakashi turned to him for an explanation. Because this wasn't the work of Kyuubi, Naruto, or any shinobi. There's only one person in Konoha that uses ice, and she's also the only person without chakra as well. She did this, and I have an idea why, especially if these men were chasing Naruto, as you said. The person I am speaking about is an A-rank secret of Konoha that I don't feel you need to know about for now. I want you to clean the alley up, identify the men, and inform any required parties. Simply tell them it was a murder and that the suspect has been put to death, but say nothing about who it is or that they were chasing Naruto. I don't want this getting out to any more than it already has. Yes, sir. What about the woman you mentioned? Before disappearing in a shunshin, body flicker, he gave the order. I will go speak with her myself. If Naruto was truly involved, then this needs to be handled in a very specific way that I must do myself. Now get to work. Kakashi then began working alongside the other Anbu to remove the bodies and blood. Evangeline, disguised in her adult form as a safety measure in case the man was accompanied by someone else, Sarutobi nodded and grinned slightly as she opened the door. Sharing her true appearance with someone she didn't trust or who she already knew wouldn't be appropriate, the woman sneered but let him in as she started to go down the hall to her kitchen area. May I come in? I need to speak with you about something. As he sat down at her table and she transformed back into her true form, Sarutobi trailed behind and shut the door. Knowing exactly what it was about, she wanted to hear it directly from Sarutobi, so she asked, "What's this about Sarutobi?" In order to monitor him, she also made sure that Chachizero and Naruto, who were invisible, were seated behind him. It was clear that she could see through the spell since she cast it with a little sigh. Sarutobi crossed his arms on the table and the girl leapt back into her seat. Last night a group of men were apparently killed. They were discovered impaled on spikes of ice that had no chakra residue at all. As the only ice user in Konoha as well as the only user of a non-chakra energy, it's quite obvious you're either the culprit or had a hand in it via some other manner. I merely wish to know what happened that made you impale them, he said while examining his face with eyes that were narrowed before responding. Quite simple really. They were chasing a young boy with the intent to kill him. Even at my lowest and darkest point I never willingly harmed or went after children. It angered me, so I killed them to protect the boy, she clarified as Sarutobi smiled. The man thanked him before shifting the subject. I thank you then for stopping them. Had they been discovered by my shinobi, then the punishment would have been the same. Incidentally, what happened to the child? He inquired. Before responding, the vampire pondered, and here we go. I put him to sleep before killing them so he wouldn't see the obviously traumatic slaughter I committed. I then brought him here and applied what little healing I know to remove the bruises and cut he had received from the mob before I arrived. I then let him sleep. She told it like it was. Sarutobi nodded, and she lied. He's still in bed at this very moment. As Evangeline narrowed her eyes, he said, "Thank you for sparing him that grisly sight. Would you mind if I saw the boy? Perhaps I may recognize him and can have him taken to his family." He took on a bewildered expression as she snarled, "You mean his dead parents?" While Evangeline snarled, the man inquired, "I'm sorry? Cut the bullshit, Sarutobi. You think I wouldn't recognize the boy on sight? Spiky blonde hair of that exact shade with bright blue eyes? Outside of myself, the only people with that combination in Konoha are the Yamanaka, and this wouldn't have happened if the boy was theirs. No, he's their son. He's the godson you told me died 5 years ago," she claimed as the man's eyes widened. As she slammed a hand on the table, he calmly informed her, "I'm afraid you're mistaken. That child died, just as I said that day." She yelled, "I said to cut the bullshit." She yelled, "You still want to deny it? Then deny the beast within him. Deny that his surname is Uzumaki, just like his mother Kushina. Deny that his name is Naruto, the exact name they told me their son would be called." While the man continued to stare at the smaller figure, the Hokage glared at him and said, "That boy is my godson Sarutobi, and you will not deny it. My only question is, why did you keep him from me?" Before shaking his head, he whispered, "Evangeline, you never should have left your house last night." She snarled. The girl started to shake with anger at Sarutobi, and he confessed, "Yes, it's true. That boy is Naruto Uzumaki, your godson. I lied to you that night for the greater good of Konoha. You see, Kushina never became the weapon she was meant to be. Interference from my students and Minato ensured it. However, with Naruto there was another chance. I told his godfather that the boy was being well taken care of and that his spy network was more important, so he accepted it and hasn't even laid eyes on the boy. You, however, are different. There was nothing keeping you from raising him, so I lied to you." You were so devastated by the loss of Minato and Kushina that you accepted it without question and ignorantly left the boy to me. I decided I would have him raised in a specific way to ensure his loyalty to me so that when he was trained he would be the weapon. His mother was meant to be a perfectly loyal and subordinate Jinchuriki that would only obey me," Sarutobi declared as Evangeline was silent in her chair. She was practically snarling at him. The man grinned and pointed to the door, asking, "And how would you do that?" "As you saw, the villagers wanted to harm him. I informed them of his status as a Jinchuriki but not of his parentage, ensuring none of them would honor his father's wish to see him as a hero and would instead see him as the demon. They would hate and scorn him, and then I would come in, the one source of kindness in his life. It would give me his undying loyalty, and then when he was older he'd be trained to be the ultimate shinobi, and yet throughout it all I'd ensure I was continually the only one to be kind and caring to him. At the end of it all he'd be willing to do anything I asked, and if he ever discovered my plans he wouldn't believe them and adamantly continue to follow me." Sarutobi broke down in tears. "And that is why you shall hand the boy over to me," she snarled. "Like hell I will. I am his godmother and I will take care of him as I promised his parents. You stopped me from doing so 5 years ago, Sarutobi, but there is no way in hell I'm going to allow you to twist their legacy into your puppet." The man growled as she laughed. "Oh, and if you try and force it then I will kill you and anyone you send. Do not forget that in your age I am more powerful than you. Even restricted by the seal as I am currently the most powerful person in this village and can take on the entire shinobi force at once and still have enough energy afterwards to laugh and dance over your corpses." She chided the cage as he pointed at her. "So long as you are within Konoha you are to obey me, and I demand you hand Naruto over." Even as Sarutobi flared his chakra against her, Eva retaliated, "I am not one of your tools to command mortal," and started to spill her magic into the air. "I may be trapped in Konoha with restricted powers, but so long as the village stands I am free to do as I please. The only way you will ever overpower me would be to slaughter your village to activate the seal and strip me of my own. But you won't do that, will you? One Jinchuriki or your entire village? Take your fucking pick," she instructed him as the man abruptly got up, overturning the chair. Eva squinted as he snarled, "This isn't over." Sarutobi glared at her for a moment before turning and rushing out of the house, causing the walls to tremble as she slammed the door behind him. "Get out of my house." After letting out a sigh and taking a seat again, Evangeline turned to face Naruto in an attempt to break her delusion, but instead of standing as he had, the boy was on his knees, holding Chachazero to his chest while shedding unrestrained tears over the revelations he had just heard. Muttering, "Naruto." She stood up and approached him. When the boy didn't answer, she gave him a tender embrace. "You okay?" In between sobs, the boy stammered, He lied to me," in an attempt to soothe him and stop his tears. Eva patted the boy's head while he leaned into the embrace. "I thought that he cared about me." The boy shook his head, knowing that he probably wouldn't have before hearing it directly from the man. "I'm sorry, Naruto, but it wouldn't have been right to keep it from you. I don't think you would have believed me had I told you either." Naruto probably would have responded as Sarutobi suggested, denying the charges and giving his Oji-san full faith. The boy nodded, so she pulled him to his feet and escorted him back to the bedroom. "Listen, Naruto, you're going to stay here now, okay? I'll make sure you're safe and fed and everything, okay?" she said as Eva took Chachazero from him and put the doll on her shoulder. The boy crawled under the covers and said, "Just go back to sleep for now, okay? We'll talk more once this has all sunk in more, got it?" After everything he knew was turned upside down, Naruto fell asleep and mumbled a thank you that made Eva smile a little before she left the room. Eva scowled as the doll said, "Master, what do ya plan to do about the old monkey?" As Chachazero cocked her head to the side, she said, "For now, nothing. He's going to make an attempt here and there to recover Naruto, try to recondition him to his liking, so for now I'll be staying here and protecting the boy." "Then what about after, huh? You just gonna let the kid stay here forever?" She gave a small shrug after admitting, "Well yeah, kind of. I'll also teach him things and how to fight. No doubt he'll want to be strong like his parents once I tell them who they were. I'll also need to do it so that he can protect himself against Sarutobi's minions when they come after him and I'm not around. He'll need to learn how to defend himself." Evangeline continued with Chachazero, "I'm also going to try and get in contact with the pervert before Sarutobi can. No doubt the bastard will lie to Jiraiya and say the boy was kidnapped or something along those lines. The man needs to know the truth before he can be turned against me so that he can help me protect Naruto and train him. Humans here don't have magic after all, and I don't have chakra, so I can't help him in that regard." The doll asked, "How are y'all gonna do that?" Eva grinned as an idea struck her. Before putting the doll down, she said, "By going through someone that hates Sarutobi as much as I do right now." As Chachazero bounced her head back and forth, she said to the doll, Give me a few minutes, then I'll fill you up so you can run an errand for me. I have a letter to write. She then left for her study. She called out to her master, I hope I get to stab something. Naruto didn't wake up until that night. He let out a choked sob as the events of the morning flashed through his mind. His Oji-san was only taking advantage of him. It seems that he had an elderly vampire who looked young as his godmother, and that the vampire was friends with his parents, though he was unsure of who they were. Naruto got out of bed and walked around, fighting back tears, until he reached the kitchen, where Eva was making herself some tea. She pointed to the table after noticing the blonde. His stomach rumbled in response to her question. Just wait a moment, you hungry or anything? She sighed, and the boy laughed sheepishly before running to her refrigerator to get some leftovers to reheat for him. She muttered, just like Kushina. Naruto began by saying, thank you. As Naruto continued to speak, she responded by humming to indicate that she was paying attention, for taking care of me last night and right now too. She poured herself some tea and offered the boy a glass, saying, you're my godson Naruto. I promised your parents I would, and while I'm a few years late I plan on honoring that promise. After saying, thank you, Naruto took a sip and put it down. As Eva paused her little cooking and gave him a quick glance, he said, Could you tell me about them? About your parents? She inquired. The girl shrugged and brought the plate of pasta to him after heating it up. Why, yeah. Well, first off, you look almost exactly like your father, though your face is shaped more like your mother's. Although neither of them had the whiskers like you do. I have an idea as to where those came from, but I'll get to that later. Your mother was a beautiful woman with long red hair and violet eyes named Kushina Uzumaki. She was a bit of a tomboy in that she acted like one of the guys and never bothered with the girly things like flowers or makeup. She just wanted to have fun and loved to play pranks or spend time with her friends. Her favorite food in the world was ramen, and she had never been happier than the day she found out she was pregnant with you. Naruto smiled at the description as Eva took a sip of her tea. The boy thought he sounded exactly like her. Ramen was also his favorite food, and he enjoyed pulling practical jokes. How about my dad? Your father was Minato Namikaze. He was serious, determined and loyal. He always thought things through and would have an answer to any problem that came up. He was also completely whipped by Kushina and would do whatever she said. I don't think he ever won an argument between them. The vampire thought as Naruto laughed. Both of them were shinobi too. Your mother was a very powerful jonin, while your father was the Yondaime Hokage. The boy gasped. Dad was the Yondaime? For a variety of reasons, the Yondaime was his hero, the Kyuubi, the supposedly strongest kage in history aside from the Shodai Hokage Hashirama Senju, was vanquished by him, making him the hero of the Third War. The boy smiled when Eva simply nodded at his startled expression. Wow. It didn't matter much to me. I met them before they became that strong, and I could always beat them when we would spar. Plus, I'm not part of the village's shinobi force, so the position your father held didn't do anything for me. It just cut down on some of the time he could spend with his wife and friends, since he'd be busy in the office more often than not. Kushina would usually whine about that, but was still proud of him for achieving his dream. Eva clarified as Naruto smiled and turned to the girl who was hundreds of years old. He said, could you teach me? And she arched an eyebrow. She had anticipated it and knew exactly what he was asking, so she wanted to hear him say it. As Naruto spoke, she pretended to be ignorant and asked, teach you what? Eva smiled slightly at his statement. Teach me to be strong like they were. I want to make them proud of me. She nodded and thought, I'd be willing to bet they already are. Naruto, I can teach you, but you need to know a few things first. Eva raised a hand and began tallying items on her fingers, asking, like what? First off, I don't use chakra like ninja. Do I use something called magic that you don't have? Since I don't have chakra, I can't teach you how to use it, just like since you don't have magic, I can't teach you to use my spells. She clarified as the child nodded. Secondly, the training I can give you will be tough. You will get hurt and you will at times hate what I make you do. If I train you, then you'll have to remember that you asked for it, she said while he grinned and nodded again as Eva drank her tea and waited for his response. Naruto gazed down thoughtfully. Thirdly, if I do train you, then I need to know what you're going to do with that power. I don't want you to abuse the strength you receive by taking it out on the people that have hated you as much as they deserve it. It's not what your parents or I would want. He began. Maybe, as he had an idea, he suggested, maybe I can use my power to protect the village, like my parents did. Evangeline perked up her eyebrows. That would mean becoming a shinobi. It would mean working under Sarutobi. Are you sure about that? She said, causing the boy to grimace and then sigh. He asked, well, can't I protect the village without the old man telling me what to do? Eva grinned. Quite possibly, yes. I've sent a message to a couple people, and if it pans out how I hope it will, then you can be a shinobi like your parents and Sarutobi won't be able to lay a hand on you. As the man reviewed his reports, The room was pitch black and only partially illuminated by candles. He had a small X-shaped scar on his chin and his left eye was bandaged. He was dressed primarily in blue and white robes, with his left arm typically holding the cane that was resting on the desk beside him and his right arm in a sling as he read about the mission his men were on. His lone eye darted over the words in front of him. This was Danzo Shimura, head of the alleged disbanded and covert root branch of the Anbu. He had been Sarutobi's opponent for the role of Hokage when he was younger. But the man had become resentful because the Neodaime had selected Hiruzen for the position rather than him due to Sarutobi's preference for the leadership style employed by the previous two Hokage and Danzo's preference for a more aggressive approach. There had been a sort of falling out between the two despite their ups and downs. Both felt their decision was the better one. As a result, they frequently disagreed on a variety of issues, such as how to raise and train Naruto from birth. It said, Danzo Shimura. Gripping his cane, the man narrowed his eye and looked around. He called out, "Who's there?" Instead, Chachizero emerged from the shadows with a scroll in her arms. As the small doll leapt onto his desk and put down the scroll, he demanded, "Who and what are you?" She explained, "Hiya, I'm Chachizero and my master asked me to bring this to Ya. She said she needs it delivered to Jiraiya of the Sannin immediately and are the only one that could get it to him fast enough." Danzo looked at the scroll, then at the doll. "Who is your master and why should I do this?" he asked, giving his shinobi outside his room a subtle signal to get ready to charge in and defeat the small doll if it turned out to be hostile and strong. The man was strong, S-ranked, actually, but as he grew older, he preferred to use his root shinobi to take care of things for him rather than put himself in danger. Chachizero informed him, "Evangeline, the Undying Mage, is my master. She lives in a cottage on the edge of the village. If y'all want to talk to her, she'll be expecting you within the week. Even cause of this says she's got a lot to talk to y'all about, like helping to train her godson." Danzo was a little perplexed as to why someone would send such an odd messenger into his secret base, no less, to ask him to play delivery boy and ask for assistance in training someone. Which would be who? He asked. The man's eyes widened when Chachizero said, "Naruto Uzumaki, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki." Ya see, the old monkey bastard lied to her and told her that the boy was dead. When she discovered him yesterday, she brought him home and is taking care of him now. Earlier the guy even came by and tried to take the kid back, but master made him back off and leave. He said some stuff about twisting Naruto into a loyal weapon for him alone and stuff. She doesn't want him to be a puppet for Sarutobi though. But she does want him to be strong like his parents were, so she plans on training him. The problem is master doesn't have chakra, so she can't teach him how to use his. Not only that, but she knows that Sarutobi will try to lie to Jiraiya about the kid to make him try and take him back. She can't leave the village or deliver this the normal way because the monkey would find out. That's where you and these rude guys come in. You can have a guy get the old perverter letter real quick and stuff, plus you can help train Naruto in how to use his chakra. In return, master will help ya with your plans. However, she can ya just gotta meet with her to talk about it all first. As he considered what the puppet had just told him, Danzo squinted at it. It seemed that his godmother, whom Sarutobi had deceived 5 years prior, now held the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Furthermore, the old cage was not pleased and would probably do something to win the boy back, perhaps turning the boy's godfather and his former pupil against her. Jiraiya would probably oppose Sarutobi's plans, which would benefit her if he were given the letter in advance to warn him about it. Danzo could have a potentially strong ally and help train the village's weapon if he followed through on the delivery and met with this Evangeline. Even though it was clear that he would not be able to brainwash the boy to his liking, it was still preferable to nothing. It would also be much simpler to remove Sarutobi so that he could introduce his vision of Konoha with the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and this supposedly strong, undying mage at his side. As Chachizero grinned and nodded, Danzo made up his mind, saying, "Tell your master I will have her message delivered and I will personally come to her tomorrow at noon with 2 of my more trusted guards." The doll got up and leapt off the desk, chirping, "Okie dokie. We'll see ya tomorrow, mummy man." Danzo stifled the twitch that wanted to come out at her name. As he gave the order for a shinobi to come check the corner for him, the doll moved back into the shadows. The man wondered how the doll could move through the shadows and how strong its master would be to have a servant with that kind of power after finding nothing. He was about to fulfill her request when he hastily ordered a couple of his shinobi to bring him the reports on Jiraiya, whether they were village loyalists or not. Danzo always had his men watch for strong shinobi so he could be ready for any attack on Konoha. In contrast to Sarutobi's approach of waiting for a spy report before responding, he would be able to deliver Evangeline's message in a matter of days and would be aware of Jiraiya's precise location. Danzo ordered one of his quicker agents to retrieve the sealed scroll the doll had left and deliver it to the man as the Jiraiya report was being discussed. He was to respond that it came from Naruto's godmother if someone asked. It made some sense to Jiraiya that he would think the woman was the one doing it since he was misled and told the boy was receiving good care. The elderly commander gave another agent instructions to find and spy on the cottage he was told about in order to spot any potential traps, and the agent nodded and went off to follow his instructions before their meeting. He would need to learn everything he could about this Evangeline in the long run. It could only be beneficial. Chachizero screamed, "Hey Whiskers, wake up," and then swung a knife down at the blonde's sleeping arm, pulling the kunai out from under his pillow. The boy deflected the attack into the bed, and his eyes opened instantly. The boy sighed, and the doll complained that there was no blood. As the green-haired doll took her knife from the bed and put it away, Naruto yelled, "Zero-chan, can you please stop that? That's the third time this week," and got out of bed to go to his bathroom to take a shower and get ready for the day. The doll chirped, "Master wants you ready for training in half an hour," and disappeared from the room while cleaning his hair in the shower. Naruto let out a sigh. She occasionally tried to stab him in the mornings, which irritated him, but it wasn't that he didn't love the doll like a sister. Eva forced him to learn how to sew in order to fix the blankets and sheets, which didn't help. He allowed the liquid to flow calmingly down his back while the blonde remained submerged. He turned it off after a short while, stepped out of the shower, and began using a nearby towel to dry off. After finishing that, the blonde wiped the steam from his mirror and looked at his reflection, noticing the changes that had occurred over the previous 3 years. Even though he was only 8 years old, he still had some baby fat on his face. Though not nearly as long as Jiraiya, who had been growing out his hair for years, he had also grown his hair a little and had adopted the same style as his father, letting a couple of bangs frame his face and tying any extra into a small ponytail behind his head like his godfather. His eyes were the only other alteration. They had turned grayish-purple with ripple patterns emanating from his pupils, replacing the vivid blue he had been born with. The Rinnegan is the dojutsu of the fabled Rikudo Sennin, who invented ninjutsu. Naruto started brushing his teeth while reflecting on how and when he had awakened his unique eyes a little more than a year ago. Evangeline had been training him in basic evasive techniques at her resort naturally. What was simple for Evangeline was harsh to everyone else. 1 year and 2 months ago, Naruto, keep moving, Eva yelled, throwing another ice spear at him as the weapon flew past his head. The blonde screamed and fled. When another frozen spear pierced the ground beside him, he halted and leapt to the side. Fearfully, the boy turned to see Evangeline forming a chunk of ice 5 times his size, and he was panting heavily. She said, "Don't you dare slow down, Naruto," as the vampire threw the ice at him with the ice crashing behind him. The blonde ran to the edge of the platform they were on and leapt down to the beach area. Eva flew out above him and started raining ice needles down at him, causing him to stumble as he landed and briefly clutch his ankle before running again. "Nice try, but you're still not fast enough, boy." Naruto cried out, "Ah, I'm gonna die," as the spikes began to appear and the needles ceased. Eva teased, "Damn right you will. I will not train someone so weak, and I will not have Kushina's and Minato's names be tainted by it either." As she formed another piece of ice, the boy slipped and slid across the ice until he collided with a big boulder. After she simultaneously frozen the ground he was running on, the young boy screamed in fear as Eva threw the ice at him. Eva felt something just as she was about to put an end to the boy's training for the day and prevent the ice from killing him. Opposition, her ice was being pushed back by something. The girl scowled as she flew down to see Naruto, the ice floating an inch away from him, terrifiedly holding out his hands while keeping his eyes closed. Naruto dropped his arms and began clutching his chest as he inhaled deeply, and the girl snapped her fingers as the ice melted away and broke into pieces. Naruto continued to pant as Eva asked, "How did you do that? How did you push the ice back?" Naruto opened his eyes, and Evangeline gasped, "What are you talking about, master? Didn't you stop it?" He asked. The blue she had known since she first met the boy had changed. They had a ripple effect and were a grayish purple. "What the hell happened to your eyes?" she yelled, causing Naruto to tilt his head sideways and blink in bewilderment. Huh? It would be an understatement to say that Danzo was shocked when Eva called him right away and invited him to visit. Despite his denials, the elderly man came dangerously close to having a heart attack. He informed them that the eyes were the fabled Rinnegan of the Rikudo Sennin, the man who created the shinobi world. The myths surrounding the eyes were as numerous as they were implausible. Danzo acknowledged that he had come across a single man with those eyes and that he had destroyed several of his trained agents as well as a possible ally he had been supporting. They had gotten in touch with Jiraiya for more information because he didn't know anything else. Though he was much more helpful, the Toad Sage had been equally as shocked as Danzo. He had some knowledge of what the eyes could do because he had previously trained a Rinnegan user, not realizing it was the same man Danzo had mentioned. To begin with, The user was given elemental affinity for each of the 5 fundamental elements. The second was that Naruto would be able to use some additional skills, like manipulating gravity, which he had reportedly used unconsciously to ward off the ice since he had left that student to return to Konoha after completing his training. Jiraiya said there was likely more that he was unaware of. The teen had been surprising him with a new trick every few months, he added. After finishing his preparations and putting on a black shirt with no sleeves and black pants with an orange sash around his waist, Naruto forced himself to stop daydreaming. He had wanted an entire outfit in the vivid hue, but Eva, Danzo, and Jiraiya rejected him, saying that bright orange was eye-catching and that a shinobi needed to blend. The boy had spent a day in the resort attempting and failing to locate Jiraiya in order to demonstrate that the man could blend in perfectly. As Naruto had pointed out that his attire didn't appear stealthy, he later complied and gave up attempting to get a full outfit in the same color. He had picked a sash to wear around his waist, though, because his godparents were at least gracious enough to allow him a tiny bit of his favorite color. Naruto came downstairs to find Eva eating her breakfast as another plate was already waiting for him before he could start asking questions. The blonde hurriedly sat down and began eating. "So what are we doing today, master?" A month after the incidents that brought them together, Naruto began training under Evangeline. After 2 weeks of frozen corpses being returned to him, Sarutobi had given up on trying to send in Anbu and had begun preparing something else that they were unaware of. The older blonde had started training the younger, beginning with physical exercises to improve his fundamental skills of strength, speed, and flexibility. After waiting a week to see if anything else was coming their way, he had also been told that until she deemed that he had completed his training, he was to call her master, something that took a couple weeks of painful reinforcement for him to remember. Danzo would occasionally stop by himself or send an agent in his place to teach Naruto the nuances of ninjutsu and chakra, demonstrating the effectiveness of their meeting. Naturally, Eva would keep an eye on things to make sure Danzo and his men didn't try to coerce the boy into doing something she didn't want, which had only happened once from a more fervent agent of the Warhawk, and to offer assistance where she could based on her personal experiences with Minato and Kushina. In return, Eva provided Danzo with constant updates on the boy's progress as well as allowing him to use Chachazero for the occasional spying mission within Konoha. As the doll was both lifeless and ran on magic instead of chakra, she couldn't be sensed by any shinobi, means making her the perfect tool for eavesdropping on secret conversations. The only actual restriction on Chachazero's use was that she also inform Evangeline of what she discovered. This was a straightforward request that Danzo was happy to fulfill. To be perfectly honest, Danzo and Evangeline had come to respect one another and each saw a comrade in disposing of Sarutobi. Occasionally, they would start discussing plans for Konoha over tea after giving Naruto an exercise. Although Eva appreciated the Warhawk's leadership philosophy, she was aware that Sarutobi's had advantages as well. In actuality, she had suggested to Danzo a combination of the two styles, which he found acceptable. Her plan was to use the darker and more devious tactics in the background while still having Konoha act as a compassionate and cooperative village. Both putting agents in place to strike at any time should that peace be rejected, as Danzo would, and first offering the olive branch for peace. As Sarutobi did, she also concurred that Konoha needed more stringent training programs to raise the caliber of their shinobi, though not as stringent as Danzo thought was required. Aside from the Anbu for the ninja who were supposed to be their shadowed elite, nothing was severe or powerful enough. "I'll be drilling you in your taijutsu for a bit before we go over your history and mathematics. The pervert will be coming by tomorrow to work with you on your ninjutsu and eyes," Eva said as he nodded. At first, working with Jiraiya had been a bit of a challenge. Sarutobi had, predictably, attempted to use the man against them in order to further his own interests. But since Eva had gotten to him first, he knew better and pretended to support his sensei, even though he was actually repulsed by the man for his deceit and lies. Although he continued to report his network findings to the Hokage and remained devoted to the village as a whole, he had lost faith in him and examined every directive from several perspectives before carrying it out or pretending to do so. So every time he visited the village, he had to slip over to Eva's cottage. The boy had welcomed him with open arms when he had first met Naruto, and the girl had warned him not to corrupt him. Since then, he has performed the same duties as Danzo, teaching the boy ninjutsu and sharing stories about his father from the time the man worked as a genin under him. But because Fuinjutsu was the Uzumaki clan's specialty and something both of his parents were proficient in, the Sannin also introduced Naruto to it. The blonde seemed to have been a natural at the craft, picking up on how things operated in a matter of visits and being able to see novel and inventive ways to combine pre-existing seals with others to create effects that were both distinctive and devastating. Jiraiya forbade him from creating any seals until his handwriting improved, which was the only issue he had. Eva had been working with him on that. In order for Eva to determine whether any of the information could be used against her or Naruto, the man had also started providing her with the same updates from his network that he had given Sarutobi. The woman felt that Danzo should also be aware of them, so she quietly shared them with him as well, just as Danzo thought Jiraiya was too optimistic and trusting. Jiraiya didn't trust the Warhawk much because he thought he was too shifty and militant. The tension persisted even after the two set aside their disagreements to train Naruto. Evangeline smiled slightly at the man he referred to, and Naruto remarked, "Cool, Ero Kyofu can see how I've come along with my ceiling too." Despite Jiraiya's cries and demands to alter it, he had changed from being just Kyofu to Ero Kyofu after learning about the human body and his godfather's habits last year. Eva also made things worse by always calling him the pervert rather than by name every time Naruto referred to him as a disrespectful brat. The vampire would rant about it, continuing to find great pleasure in watching him bitch and moan about it. Before they finished their breakfast and made their way to Evangeline's resort, the girl thought, true. The boy received a full day's training in just one real-world hour, making it the ideal training ground. Furthermore, Evangeline's magic allowed her to control it and fix it in a matter of seconds. She could even program it to mimic different patterns, like rain, snow, or even a sandstorm, which Naruto had once encountered. Eva would then review the fundamentals of geography, math, history, and politics that the blonde would need for the remainder of the day. Despite the fact that she had never left Konoha because of her seal, she had amassed a large collection of books about the world because she had always been interested in the third world, and Kushina's tales had never satisfied her curiosity. The blonde laughed a little as he recalled yesterday's training session and its surprising outcome. Now hurry up, I want you to work on that new power you discovered yesterday. The day before, the blonde asked, "Hey Zero-chan, what are some of the weapons from those other two worlds you and Master are from?" while lounging on his head following a strenuous workout. The boy rolled his eyes and she chirped, "Well, there's tons of knives and swords and sharp pointy blades that I like. There's also crossbows and regular bows, small exploding balls called grenades, and a few other things like guns." Guns? He inquired. These were not available in the shinobi world, and instead of the grenade objects she mentioned, they could use an explosive tag. Chachazero gave him a head shrug, then pointed forward while forming a L with her hand. "They're these metal things shaped kinda like this that people hold in their hands. By pulling on a trigger they can fire small metal bullets way faster than any kunai or arrow can go. There's also bigger guns that shoot explosive bullets called rockets, and then there's even a few guns that fired super strong beams of light called lasers," she exclaimed when Naruto realized he was imitating the shape that the doll had created. The boy thought guns sounded awesome, so he asked, "Really?" He closed his eyes and held his hand out to the side, visualizing himself holding a metal L device and blasting someone with an explosive kunai. Before Chachazero was gasping on his head and he felt a slight pull on his chakra reserves, he laughed at the image. The blonde opened his eyes and said, "Whoa, Whiskers, how'd ya do that?" His hand appeared to have turned into metal and folded apart to reveal a small lens that glowed blue with chakra and a revolving cylinder. Then the boy noticed a burned line on the floor where he had been pointing his hand. He pointed his hand out and directed his chakra to it, just as he had felt a moment before, asking, "What did I do?" As the cylinder surrounding the lens spun more quickly and a laser shot out, exploding when it hit the wall. The lens started to glow brighter. He looked at his arm and exclaimed, "Whoa!" His hand returned to normal after he severed the chakra. Chachazero was applauding the boy's transformation into what she referred to as a cyborg and his newfound ability to shoot lasers. "Someone want to explain to me why the hell there was a laser flying past my head not even 5 minutes ago?" Evangeline yelled, glaring menacingly as she stomped up behind them with a nervous laugh. The blonde held up his normal hand and Chachazero pointed down at Naruto. He said, I think I discovered a new power." But it sounded more like he was doubting it himself because he didn't seem to be very certain. Eva looked from him to the cracked and smoking wall, then palmed her face and muttered something as the doll began to laugh uncontrollably. When his assistant informed Sarutobi that someone wanted to talk to him, Sarutobi commanded, "Enter," as he put down his pen to take a beak out of his paperwork. The door was opened, and he suppressed the growl that was about to come out when he saw who had entered. When she left the cottage, Evangeline said, "Sarutobi." In her adult form he squinted as she sat down across from him. "What do you want, Evangeline?" she asked with a sly smile, knowing that he detested her for what she had done to Naruto and because she was stronger and therefore untouchable. The old Hokage raised an eyebrow but continued to stare at her as she began, "I'm here with an offer. Despite my being against it, Naruto wants to join the shinobi forces. I've told him of your treachery and about his parents, and while he doesn't trust you much at all anymore, the boy wants to make his parents proud by being a strong shinobi that will protect Konoha as such." I decided to come to you and set up how this will work, she clarified as the elderly gentleman was mentally smirking. He could try to acclimate him to his side and separate him from the vampire on the other side of him now that Naruto was part of his army. If he wants to join, then he must go to the academy and graduate like a normal prospect. Then he will be placed on a team with 2 other genin under a Jonin sensei. Eva nodded her head and raised her hand. She did not include Danzo and Jiraiya, stating that it would be better to conceal their support for her. I knew that, but I'm saying things are going to go a certain way. First off, I've been training and teaching the boy. Sarutobi suppressed a frown, saying, as such he doesn't need to go to the academy to learn. I'll send him the day of their graduation exams so that he can pass the test like the rest of the genin hopefuls, but he won't be going to learn as I've already taught him all he needs and more. This would have been an ideal opportunity to begin releasing the child from Eva's control. Secondly, I want reports on every C rank and above mission. He goes on, I don't care if it's an S rank, only you and him are supposed to know even exists. I will be told about it in full detail or he will not be joining your ranks, Sarutobi. The man asked calmly, stifling the growl that was about to escape, are there any other requests? As Eva got up and turned to go, the man waited patiently and said, yes, just one. Before she left, she threatened, if you try anything against the boy or myself you will learn what the Ice Age felt like. The Hokage growled as soon as the door shut behind her. He snarled, damn that woman, I will not be made a fool of, and returned to the paperwork. As Eva returned to the house and transformed back into her true form, Naruto chirped, hey master, I got dinner started. As Naruto prepared, the girl grunted and sat down at the table. The boy, who was now 12, was taller than her and had more muscle from his training. From the front, his hair now resembled that of his father, but from the back, the extra was pulled back into a tiny ponytail that reached the back of his neck. The boy had added 2 more items to his wardrobe, but he was still dressed in his black pants, orange sash, and sleeveless shirt. A sleeveless black cloak with orange flames, similar to his father's, was folded on the table and a pair of light blue wrist warmers were now on his arms. There was also a red Uzumaki spiral in the middle of the back of his cloak. So how'd the meeting with the monkey go? As he placed a plate in front of her and one for himself before returning to the kitchen to prepare the food, she explained, okay, you will go to the academy on the day of their final tests to take it and see if you're eligible to be a shinobi before you're placed on a team like the rest of the graduates. I also told him that I am to receive reports on every mission you do that isn't D rank. Those chores are not missions and I don't need to know what you do on them. The girl snorted in laughter as Naruto joked, I still find it hard to believe that they actually classify garden work or dog walking as missions. Chachazero, who was seated nearby at the table, laughed in agreement. So when is the graduation exam? 1 week. If you pass, then you'll have another week before being placed on a team with 2 other graduates under a Jonin who will act as sensei. No doubt Sarutobi is already making plans to try and choose a sensei that can subtly twist you to him. I wouldn't put it past him to even try influencing you through the genin if he can. Evangeline clarified as Naruto began to serve the nourishment. The girl was staring at him blankly when he said, okay, then you think I'll pass? She shook her head as Naruto sheepishly laughed. Jiraiya and Danzo both put you at high Chunin low Jonin level already and you're worried you might not pass a genin exam? If you're that worried, then I'll provide some extra motivation. Get the top score in class and I'll give you something I'm positive you'll find useful. Really? The girl asked, shrugging her shoulders. As Eva considered her options, the boy smiled and began to eat. To be honest, I was planning on doing it eventually. I'll just do it next week if you pass. Without magic, it ought to work for him. I hope it does. Anyway, as she ate, she thought, I never tried it with Kushina or Minato because they were plenty strong enough already. 1 week later, looking down at the slip instructing him to go to the class taught by Naruka Amino, Naruto thought, so this is the academy, huh? When the boy entered, he saw a woman passing by with a stack of papers, so he caught up to her and stopped her. Excuse me, could you direct me to Naruka Umino's class? I'm supposed to report there for the graduation exams. The woman paused, glanced at him, and casually noted how much he resembled the Yondaime before pointing behind her. Room 106 down that hall. Naruto chirped, thank you ma'am, and hurried down the hallway. He heard a few glimpses of the other teachers' conversations as he walked past the classrooms. The majority of that information was taught to me when I was younger, or those the early classes, perhaps? As he approached the appropriate room, he pondered after knocking on the door and hearing the word, enter. The boy opened it and entered. Hi, is this Iruka Umino's class? A man with a scar over his nose and brown hair pulled back in a spiky ponytail replied, yes it is, I'm Iruka Amino. The man with white hair who was introduced as the Chunin waved slightly from the side and said, this is my assistant Mizuki. Naruto also saw that almost every student was staring at him as Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Iruka questioned, and you are? As Mizuki handed Iruka his clipboard, he responded, "Oh, I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I've been tutored by my master back home, but the Hokage said that if I wanted to be a ninja I had to take the graduation exam here to see if I'm eligible." Before examining the boy, he joked, "Alright, I got a message that you were coming." As Naruto turned to face the students, he said, "Okay, introduce yourself to the class and then we'll get started with the tests." As I said, I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I like ramen and training, and my dream is to be a strong shinobi that can make my late parents proud and to protect the village. He began. Many of the other students started to form opinions and assumptions about Naruto as they gazed at him, but one boy, with dark hair and eyes, raised his hand. He was wearing a blue shirt with a fan on the back. The boy got up when Iruka pointed him out. Before explaining why he raised his hand in the first place, he introduced himself as Sasuke Uchiha. He questioned, "What's wrong with your eyes?" as Naruto looked perplexed and turned to face Iruka. The man nodded when he asked, "Did you cover dojutsu in this class?" He replied, and Naruto cocked his head to the side, "Yes, the two great dojutsu of the world, the Sharingan of the Uchiha and the Byakugan of the Hyuga." "What about the third?" He sighed, looking as perplexed as the entire class. As Iruka glanced at the clock and then nodded, he asked, "Would it be alright if I explained then?" Before turning to face the class, he said, "Well, okay. I'm interested in this myself. I've only ever heard of two dojutsu. Just keep it under 10 minutes. We do have a test to give, and don't worry, this won't be on the test for you." "Okay, you mentioned the Sharingan and the Byakugan. However, what I have is a dojutsu called the Rinnegan." Naruto started before going to the chalkboard at the front of the class and gesturing if it was okay as Iruka nodded. After drawing the three eyes on the board with a piece of chalk, Naruto drew a line that connected the Rinnegan and the Sharingan. "The only recorded user of my eyes is the Rikudo Sennin, the legendary man that gave the world ninjutsu and preached ideals of peace. He was also worshipped as a god for his many feats and unrivaled power that supposedly created the moon, though I don't know if that's true or not. Anyways, legends say the man also had two kids, one with mighty eyes and another with a mighty body. The one with power in his eyes went down the line until his descendants became known as the Uchiha clan, and the bloodline twisted and mutated from the Rinnegan to the Sharingan. I don't know where the Byakugan fits in, but essentially my eyes are a precursor to the Sharingan," Naruto explained before turning around while Sasuke narrowed his eyes in contemplation. Many of the students appeared stunned. A precursor to his clan's bloodline? Was that even possible? On a side note, he was pleased because if the legends were right, then Uchihas were descended from the strongest man in history. Now all three also have their own specialty. The Byakugan can see chakra the best out of all the eyes. The Sharingan can read body movement so well the user can predict and mimic their opponent perfectly, which is where their copy ability comes from. My eyes see chakra better than the Sharingan but not as well as the Byakugan, while I can read a person better than the Byakugan but not as well as a Sharingan. Also, the Hyuga have used their chakra sight to create a powerful taijutsu style, so their bloodline is more taijutsu focused. The Sharingan of the Uchiha, while known for its ability to copy ninjutsu, is actually genjutsu focused, as they can cast illusions only other Sharingan are capable of breaking. My Rinnegan though grants me an immense affinity for ninjutsu. For example, I have all 5 elemental affinities instead of just the normal 1 or bloodline 2. This means that theoretically, I can learn every non-bloodline exclusive jutsu in existence with enough time and training. Naruto finished before setting the chalk down and walking away from the board. There's more, but I want to keep some things to myself. Just like the Hyuga and Uchiha keep the full details of their eyes a secret as well. Iruka said, "Thank you for that, Naruto," and gestured to a seat that was available. "Now please take a seat and we'll start the exam." Iruka and Mizuki started distributing papers as soon as Naruto jumped into his seat next to a blonde girl wearing bandages and purple hair in a ponytail. "You all have 1 hour to complete the written test. Afterwards there will be an accuracy test, a taijutsu test and a ninjutsu test. Those that pass will be granted a headband. Those that fail will have to repeat another year and try again or choose a new career." Iruka proceeded to glance at the clock once more. "Okay, you may begin." Naruto turned his test over, glanced at the questions, and grinned. When he was 8 years old, he learned these simple things. The Rinnegan wielder picked up his pencil and started to quickly and accurately fill in his answers as she worked on her test. The girl next to him kept catching glimpses of Naruto from the corner of her eye. "He's very attractive. He resembles Yondaime-sama exactly. Additionally, he is practically shinobi royalty like the Uchiha and Senju because of his background in those eyes. How strong is he? I wonder." As she watched him complete his test and turn it over to prevent anyone from cheating, she thought, maybe he'll be super skilled like Sasuke-kun. Before returning to her test, she reflected, "Well, I guess he's smart." Naruto put his head on his hands, waited, and grinned. He was content to just unwind as he looked at the other pupils because he had completed his test in just 20 minutes. He saw that many of the girls in the class would look at him when they had a chance. Aside from the blonde girl sitting next to him, he saw Sasuke doing it as well, but he assumed it was for some other reason. Hopefully, as the hour drew to a close, more tests were completed before Iruka finally declared the session to be over. Iruka led the class outside for the accuracy and taijutsu portions while Mizuki collected the tests. The man said, "All right, behind me are 12 targets, each worth a different amount of points. You will be given 10 kunai and 10 shuriken. You will be scored depending on what targets you aim for as well as how many bullseyes you achieve. We'll do it in alphabetical order, so starting with Shino Aburame." He then called up a boy wearing a gray coat with a high collar, spiky hair, and sunglasses. The other students surrounded Naruto as he waited. One of the boys carrying a bag of chips asked, "So where have you been?" In addition, he wore a green jacket over a shirt with the kanji for food, had brown hair, and had swirls on his cheeks. "I was taken in as an apprentice when I was 5. I've been taught and trained by my master since we live in a house on the edge of the village cause she likes her privacy," replied Naruto. The blonde girl he was sitting next to said, "Since you were 5? You must be strong then?" Naruto shrugged. A boy with brown hair and red triangles on his cheeks smiled and said, "Master still kicks my ass all over the place with her eyes closed, so I can't really tell how good I am or not." As Naruto smiled, he joked, "Then maybe those super eyes of yours aren't that good. Y'all wanna face someone with the eyes of God?" "Eyes of God?" Sasuke asked again, then laughed. Naruto shook his head, saying, "The Sharingan is better. Didn't you listen earlier? The Sharingan is descended from the Rinnegan? And the last user of the Rinnegan was both called and worshipped as a god. Is it wrong to say these are the eyes of God then?" Naruto chuckled as the child continued to snicker. "Besides, each dojutsu has its ups and downs. Your Sharingan will give you a major advantage in genjutsu over me and just about everyone else, plus you'll be able to copy and predict the enemies you face. I however hold a better advantage in ninjutsu and my eyes have a few abilities the Sharingan will be useless against. That's why the Rinnegan is considered the strongest of dojutsu." "Troublesome. If your eyes make you so strong, why aren't you a ninja yet?" asked a lazy-looking adolescent wearing a light green jacket and spiked ponytail. When Naruto saw that Iruka was approaching the youths, he shrugged. "Master held me back. She said she wanted to both make sure I was fully trained and ready for shinobi life, and she wanted me to be placed into the village's forces among my own age group. She says I'm strong enough without a doubt. She just wanted to make sure." A girl in a red sleeveless shirt with pink hair and green eyes said, "Who is your master anyways?" Naruto grinned. "She likes her privacy, so I'm not gonna say. Maybe you'll meet her sometime if you're lucky. She's the strongest person in the village anyways." Shino, who had come over to find out more about the blonde after his test, said, "I thought the Hokage was the strongest shinobi in the village. Are you suggesting that your teacher is more powerful?" Naruto gave a headshake. "She's not a shinobi. She is stronger than the Hokage by a long shot actually, but she's not a shinobi and she never leaves the village." Naruto clarified his name was called before he could say anything more. Iruka handed Naruto the tools and stepped back, allowing Naruto to adjust them in his hands before grinning and scanning the targets with his hands outstretched. Naruto began tossing the shuriken and kunai with extreme precision, hitting the smallest and furthest targets with nothing but bull's eyes to earn the highest score. Iruka grinned as many of the students gaped. The boy grinned as Iruka complimented him, saying, "Very good Naruto, you matched Sasuke's perfect score." As the final few pupils stepped forward for their exams, the blonde boy returned to his place in the group. After a few minutes, Iruka escorted everyone to a tiny, enclosed space where the taijutsu section of the test would be administered. Iruka called out names in alphabetical order once more after explaining, "Okay everyone, for the taijutsu exam you will each spar with Mizuki-sensei in the circle. You must last 3 minutes or defeat Mizuki for a passing grade." Naruto observed, somewhat intrigued, how Mizuki would assault the pupils. He had learned from Evangeline that it was always best to observe how people move and react so that you could make appropriate plans. Mizuki was holding back, which was a clear move given that he was a Chunin fighting only genin hopefuls without any real training, as Naruto observed. Because they lacked the necessary experience and skill, the man was able to hold his own against the clan children, who were the only ones who could actually put up a skilled fight. Naruto smiled as he entered the circle when it was his turn. As Naruto assumed his stance, turning his body slightly to the side and putting his right foot forward, Mizuki yelled, "All right Uzumaki, give me your best." Naruto's eyes widened in surprise as he waited for Iruka to start the match before sprinting forward much faster than Mizuki had anticipated. The man twisted on his foot and disappeared just as Naruto was about to swing at him. The man asked stupidly, "Where'd he go?" As Naruto materialized behind him and gave him a forceful back kick to get him out of the circle, the boy smiled as Iruka and the students mirrored Mizuki's reaction as she stood up and gaped at him. Iruka gave a stupid nod, and Naruto joked, "I guess I pass, huh?" Mizuki stood up and gave the boy a back rub, and the boy returned to his seat. As he retreated into the circle to allow Iruka to call in the final few, he muttered to Iruka, "Kid's got a strong kick." Even though none of the others were able to defeat Mizuki, it was obvious that the man was in pain because he didn't fight as hard as he had. Iruka instructed Mizuki to go to the nurse's office to get some ice for his back after the last student was passed, and he would take care of the final test by himself. After leading the class back into the room, the man informed them that they would be called individually to another room for the tests. They would leave the room wearing a headband that identified them as ninjas if they passed the test with his head resting on his arms and his eyes closed. Naruto waited in silence, applying a small amount of chakra to his ears to hear what the other students were saying about him. "Oh come on Sakura, you've gotta admit how he beat Mizuki-sensei was amazing." "Well yeah, kind of, but Sasuke-kun is still better, you know that." "I'm not sure anymore. Actually, Sasuke-kun fought Mizuki off and managed to force him out of the circle, but it took him 2 minutes to do it. The new kid did it in 1 hit." "So what? Will you now pursue him rather than Sasuke-kun?" "I'm not sure. Perhaps he resembles Sasuke-kun in appearance and strength, so perhaps." "Akamaru, I'm still the class alpha, so I have no idea what you're talking about like that jerk Sasuke. This new kid is just an upstart. Hold on, I'll show them off, and the girls will fall head over heels for me instead. You just observe." "So, Shika, do you believe the new kid is strong?" To say that Choji is strong would be an understatement. That Naruto guy is a powerhouse, so it's troublesome. He appears to be superior to the Chunin instructing us and is by far the strongest student in the class. He says his teacher is stronger than the Hokage, so I'm just curious who she might be. As the others tried to figure out what to think of him or his master, Naruto laughed. His head was down, so he missed the fact that Sasuke was staring directly at him. It has to be his eyes. Although if his master really is stronger than the Hokage, then she has to be part of it too. He doesn't deserve that power though. I need it. I'm the one who needs power. I need it to avenge my clan, the boy thought as he got up when his name was called. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that, since it went against everything he had been taught. My clan's history says the Sharingan is an offshot of the Byakugan." "Really? Well, I guess you'll have to let your clan know that they're wrong," he said, knowing the girl was a Hyuga based only on her eyes. "I don't mean to offend, but my master poured over all of the information I had about them, both historical and mythical, when I woke up, and her research supported everything I had said. She also knew some of the clan's history because she was friends with Uchiha, which lends credence to it. The Senju and Uzumaki are the only other clans with this kind of information, but to the best of my knowledge, Tsunade of the Sannin is the only remaining Senju, and I am the only remaining Uzumaki." She shrugged, unsure if Naruto was correct. "I'm willing to bet that the Hyuga and Uchiha do have some sort of relation to each other, but if there is one, it's the other way around and your clan just got the facts mixed up as time went on," Naruto said. "I'll discuss it with my father." He shrugged and she said, "He'll probably want to talk to your master about it." When he heard his name called, he got up and moved past her. As he entered the testing room, he said, "I'll let her know a Hyuga may stop by." Iruka was seated at a table wearing headbands, studying his clipboard. "So, what do I have to do to pass?" he asked as Iruka gave him a small grin. "Please employ 3 fundamental ninjutsu techniques for me first. Perform a henge no jutsu, transformation technique." Naruto shrugged and made a ram sign as there was a puff of smoke, and when it cleared, Jiraiya was standing in the room. "Jiraiya-sama of the Sannin?" As Naruto poofed back to normal, he asked. "I've met the man before. Strong, but kinda perverted," Naruto admitted, keeping his true relationship with him under wraps. Evangeline had told him that talking about the Uzumaki clan in public was alright, but talking about his mother specifically as well as his father and godfather were forbidden until she allowed it. She actually agreed with Sarutobi's move on this matter in that his heritage had to be hidden until he was strong enough to protect himself from the foes his parents had. Info about the Uzumaki clan was the only thing that didn't fall under that rule, so he was free to talk about it, as Sarutobi had hidden that away from the general public out of shame for failing their old allies instead of to protect him. He had also hoped that by never telling the boy about his clan that he'd feel closer ties to him since he didn't have any family anywhere. Of course, Eva broke him of that and told him that a few Uzumakis did escape their home's destruction. They were just scattered across the nations, possibly under aliases to protect themselves. Alright, then now, please use a Kawarimi no Jutsu, body replacement technique. Naruto made a few hand signals before Iruka suddenly found himself standing and Naruto grinning at him from the chair. He joked, "Give me 20 push-ups if you want to pass." Iruka smiled amusedly and shook his head. Good attempt. As he walked back around the table and Naruto stood in front of him, he said, "Now give me back my seat. Last jutsu is to perform the Bunshin no Jutsu, clone technique." Naruto shook his head and grimaced. "I am unable to master claims that I have too much chakra and that I am incapable of maintaining the control needed for the Bunshin. However, I am aware of an alternative cloning method. Is that going to work?" Iruka nodded as Naruto clarified. "It's alright, the Bunshin is merely recommended since it is the most straightforward clone jutsus." Naruto nodded and crossed his fingers in front of him. "If it's beyond you but you know another one, that's acceptable." He yelled, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique," and 3 solid clones materialized beside him. Iruka shook his head to refocus his thoughts, but he was startled to see a genin hopeful employ a ranked Jonin technique. One thing he noticed, though, was that all of the clones had their eyes closed. As the original opened his eyes and Iruka gave him a headband, Naruto dismissed the clones and said, "Okay, you pass? Just a quick question. Why did you and the clones close your eyes?" "My Rinnegan allows us to all see what the others see when I have clones out, allowing me to simultaneously see things from several perspectives." Iruka nodded, and Naruto tied the headband around his head. As the blonde walked out of the room, he called in the next person for their test. "But it gives me such a bad headache that my clones dispel from the pain, so I don't like using them," Naruto explained. "I'm back, Master," Naruto called out as he walked in, new headband proudly displayed on his head. He walked down the hall until he found the woman sitting in her study looking over a book. "I passed, Master." "Well done. Which ranking did you receive?" Without taking her eyes off her book, she asked. The blonde smiled and gave himself a thumbs up. "First of all, as you challenged me to do, I stayed back to ask him about myself, and he informed me that I received the highest test score, even though the official rankings wouldn't be announced until team placements the following week. Since I wasn't in the class, I'm not eligible for the class rankings, but I received a perfect score on the final exam alone." Eva grinned and looked up as she put her book away. "All right, I would have kicked your ass if you hadn't. I'm guessing you want that prize I promised now, aren't you?" Naruto said, stifling the shiver. Her smile threatened to stir before following her as she stood up and escorted him to the resort. "No student of mine will be second best in anything." As she used magic to transport them inside the enclosed beach house, she inquired, "In a way, oh, and to refute the whole Sharingan comes from Rinnegan thing, a Hyuga might eventually drop by when a classmate inquired about my eyes. I gave a brief explanation, and then she informed me that her clan believes the Sharingan is descended from the Byakugan." Eva hummed to herself before dismissing the question as she led him to a side room where a magic seal had already been inscribed on the floor. "So what am I getting?" "What I'm going to be doing here with you is called a Pactio," Evangeline said, causing the boy to pause. How was she going to give him something she knew would be helpful if she didn't know what she was giving him? "In essence, we have a contract with each other. By the agreement, I will be able to use my magic to increase your abilities. We will be able to communicate telepathically, and I will be able to call you to me at any time. Additionally, you will receive a magical artifact that best fits your abilities and personality. I'm not sure what you'll get in that way. Even if you make Pactios with several people, each person receives a unique artifact. Some receive armor, some weapons, and I even know someone who received a unique magical book as a gift from his Pactio." Before pointing to the circle, Evangeline explained, "You will receive what best suits you, which is why it will always be useful." She then gave the order, "Now step into that circle and close your eyes." All right. As he stepped into the circle and closed his eyes, Naruto thought, "I wonder if I'll get one of those gun things you and Chachazero told me about." Eva approached him, pushed some magic into the circle, then grabbed him by the face and pulled him down into a kiss. His eyes flashed wide open the moment he felt the girl's lips on his own, and he only barely avoided pushing her away out of instinct. He trusted Eva with his life, but he had never expected her to kiss him. Even when he was younger and still somewhat of a whiner, she had at most hugged him, never kissed him, and now she had dragged his face down from above her and locked lips with him. The boy honestly didn't know what to make of it. After a few seconds, the circle flashed, and Eva withdrew as a card appeared in midair between them. The vampire took it and examined it while smiling at the photo. "Good, it worked," she said as Naruto was still in shock from her kiss. She said, I wasn't sure if it would since you don't have magic or any ability to use it. She quickly cast a spell to create a copy before giving it to him, saying, "This is proof of the Pactio. Simply place it on your forehead and say, Telepathia, to communicate with me via telepathy call out, Edit, to call forth the weapon, and then, a beat, to put it away you get it." The blonde accepted the card, examined it, and smiled at the photo. "Yes, this would be helpful to him, so you know what needs to be done. You will be assigned as the Jonin sensei to both Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki." Sarutobi inquired as a Jonin wearing a mask and silver hair stood in front of him. "Once it is unlocked, train Sasuke in his bloodline and give him and your third pupil your full attention. Naruto receives assistance from his own teacher outside of team drills. Additionally, try to control the boy with your Sharingan. If that doesn't work, make sure Sasuke is powerful enough to do it on his own. Naruto needs to be subdued, and a Sharingan is the simplest way to bind him." And the Kyuubi. Sarutobi nodded and explained. Madara Uchiha used Kyuubi against Hashirama Senju years ago to prove that. "Hokage-sama, I get it, they will subdue the demon, you can be confident of that." As he threw aside his Jonin, the man thought, "I hope so, Kakashi." He saw that Naruto had apparently received a perfect score, that he knew a B-ranked Kenjutsu, and that he was very fast for a Genin, allowing him to easily slip behind his Chunin. The boy was undoubtedly strong, but as long as Kakashi didn't assist Naruto and instead concentrated on Sasuke, he was certain that the other Genin would eventually not only catch up, but surpass him, especially since Sasuke would have a teacher who could teach him multiple jutsu and skills, while Evangeline could only teach Naruto. If only he was aware. The only thing that intrigued him was that Iruka had mentioned the peculiar dojutsu that Naruto possessed. It wasn't the Byakugan or the Sharingan, which were the only dojutsu in Konoha, and neither of his parents possessed dojutsu, so Sarutobi wanted to know what it was and how he acquired it. The newly minted Genin were waiting patiently for Iruka to come in and tell them which teams they were on in the class rankings. Some of them were expecting Naruto to win from last week's display, but the boy himself was silent, wearing the same outfit as before, but with his headband tied to his head with an orange cloth that matched the color of the sash at his waist. The blonde was also staring at a card that he wouldn't let anyone see, claiming it was personal. The boy put the card away as Iruka entered with Mizuki by his side. The man grinned at the Genin he had impressed him. "You guys are all very congratulations, you are all comrades in arms and Genin of Konoha. As of right now I want you to keep in mind everything you've learned, to be on the lookout for your allies, and to support one another during the challenges that lie ahead. Recognize that a shinobi is genuinely strong when they work together." The man gave his final lecture as Mizuki approached with a sly smile. "All right, class rankings will be revealed prior to team announcements first, though. Naruto Uzumaki had the highest score on last week's test. However, since he wasn't a part of this class and instead homeschooled, he's not eligible for the class rankings," the boy said with a smile as the other students looked at him. "You mean he scored better than me? Hold on a second." When Sasuke cut him off, Iruka nodded. The boy grunted in frustration as Naruto shrugged, not really caring if the boy didn't like that Naruto scored higher. He scored higher on the taijutsu and ninjutsu portions of the exams while the two of you matched the accuracy and written tests. It was a single test. The boy's irritated expression changed to a smug smile when Mizuki said, "Anyways, our rookie of the year is actually you, Sasuke." While the rest of the class either remained silent or complained about his attitude, some of the girls applauded him. Mizuki then revealed the rest of the class rankings. Some were pleasantly surprised, while others groaned at being lower than that. Thought only a few scored around where they actually thought they were. Team placements are next. Team 1 will be. Iruka started as the class waited for their names to be called. Team 7 will be Sasuke Uchiha, he said. Naruto Uzumaki, the boy said, smiling slightly at Sasuke because they were now teammates that the Uchiha sneered at. Almost all of the girls in the class were paying attention now because Sasuke was Rookie of the Year and Naruto was the hot new kid who demonstrated his strength during the test. Your sensei will be Kakashi Hatake. Naruto perked up at that because both Evangeline and Jiraiya had previously told him about his father's Genin team, which consisted of a Uchiha who had died on a mission and a girl who died a few months later. Since Kakashi was the only surviving member of the Yondaimes, Naruto was actually interested in him and wanted to meet him. Sakura Haruno, Shino Aburame, and Kiba Inuzuka will make up Team 8. Kurenai Yuhi will be your sensei. Shikamaru Nara, Shoji Akamichi, and Ino Yamanaka will make up Team 10. Since Team 9 is still in play, Asuma Sarutobi will be your sensei. Iruka concluded. Congratulations again. In an hour, your senseis will arrive to collect you before departing with Mizuki, Iruka said. I suggest getting to know your teammates better during the hour you have. Naruto stood up and approached Sasuke first because he was closer. "Now that we're teammates, would you like to go out to lunch or something?" As the boy stood up, he asked. Naruto frowned as he grunted and walked away, saying, "Just stay out of my way." Before finding Hinata and approaching her, he muttered, "Hey, want to go get something to eat since we're now teammates?" She nervously tapped her fingers together as he asked. Many of the girls in the class were staring at Hinata's back, so the girl trembled and got up to follow him out. Sure. The new hunk and Sasuke-kun. Why did she become so fortunate? Some mumbled. "So, where would you like to go?" Hinata nodded her head as she led Naruto to a small stand where a waiter came over to serve them. One nice thing about Naruto never going outside was that most of the village forgot what he looked like or thought he had died, so there was practically nobody who would hate him for being a Jinchuriki because they didn't know who he was. Word may eventually get out, but until then, he was just another genin. Naruto asked because he hadn't been out in the village much. Evangeline had kept him in the cottage. The girl nodded and tapped her fingers together nervously as Naruto gave her a little smile as they placed their orders. "So, I guess we should get to know each other better and also that we can work together better out in the field. I guess I'll start," Naruto said. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, as I mentioned. My parents perished in the Kyuubi attack, which also happened to be my birthday, so I'm an orphan. Before my master found me and took me in at the age of 5, I lived in an orphanage. I wanted to make my late parents proud of me, so she started my training a couple weeks later," Naruto said, closing his eyes for a moment before opening them again. "I activated my bloodline for the first time when I was around 6 during a training exercise where Master went a little overboard." He concluded, "For the most part, I've just been training and learning under her, so I haven't been around the village much." The two thanked their waiter before they began eating, but Hinata eventually made the decision to tell him about herself because it would be impolite not to after he did and because it would be best to learn about the other for teamwork and trust issues. "I am the heiress O of the Sea clan, and my name is Hinata Hyuga. Hanabi is the name of my younger sister as well. A short time after giving birth to her, my mother died. Since I was about 3 years old, I have been tea training, as is customary in the Hyuga Sea clan." As Naruto nodded, she said, "To be honest, I'm not well liked B by some of my clan B because I don't agree with a couple clan policies." He had heard that the Hyuga clan was rather strict and occasionally even seemed cruel or stuck in the past, but Hinata didn't seem to be like the rest based on how she acted and the feeling he got from being around her. Eva had called the Hyuga a bunch of egotistical asses who believed they were superior to everyone, much like the majority of the Uchiha clan. "Hey, did your family members comment on the information I provided last week?" Curious, he asked, and the girl shook her head. "My father wanted to look through it himself first after I told him about it. Depending on what he discovers, he might then ask to speak with your master for additional information about it." The boy nodded as she explained. "That's all right." For the remainder of the hour, they continued to converse and get to know one another. "I told Master and she said it was fine. Just set a time and a place and she'd be willing to share it all." He grinned in response, causing her to look down and tap her fingers together. "Where on earth is he?" The boy muttered. "You'd think for a student of the Yondaime he'd be more reliable." Naruto snarled as he sat next to Hinata in the classroom. And Sasuke sat at the desk in front of them. The three had been waiting for their sensei for almost 3 hours, and the other senseis had already arrived and left with their students. What was the Yondaime about? As he explained, Naruto sat up straighter. During her lesson on the Hokages, Master briefly mentioned this man to me. The Yondaime Hokage's 2 other students perished in the Third War, leaving Kakashi Hitaki as the only one still alive. Additionally, Kakashi is well known as the copy ninja because it is said that he has used his implanted Sharingan to mimic over 1,000 techniques. "Implanted?" the boy inquired, curious to learn more about a man who possesses the unique eyes of his clan but is not a member. One of the other 2 who perished was a Uchiha who, it seems, gave Kakashi an eye to replace the one he had lost on a mission before passing away. Many people believe that Kakashi was an unblooded Uchiha because of how much he has used the eyes since then. At that moment, the door opened and Kakashi peered in. Not only that, but he's one of the very few Jonin in the list of potential Hokages should the Sandaime retire again, Naruto said before closing his eyes. 7th team. Before examining them, he asked idly, "First impression, I despise you." Before disappearing, he said, "Meet me on the roof in 5 minutes. He didn't see the blonde opening his rippled eyes. How is it possible for someone so well known to be such a slacker? Naruto muttered as they got up and walked to the roof. The 3 came up to see Kakashi reading an orange book that instantly made Naruto face palm and start muttering about perverts under his breath. "Okay, we're here, what comes next?" The boy had picked up Evangeline's irritation at tardiness. Introductions come first. Why don't you share your hobbies, interests, dislikes, and future goals? Kakashi answered, wondering in his mind what was going on with the boy's eyes, which somehow reminded him of an old tale he had heard from his sensei. Alright, you can call me Naruto Uzumaki. I enjoy Zero-chan, my master, and ramen. I dislike those who try to control others or who pass judgment on others. My interests include training with a master and gardening, and my goal is to become a shinobi who will protect the village and make my parents proud. Naruto began as Kakashi nodded, scoffing inwardly at the demon's desire to make its parents proud, since he had killed them in his mind and it was an insult to them to act in such a way. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I detest too many things to list, and I don't like many things. I have no dreams and training is my only noteworthy pastime. I'm ambitious. The boy with the raven hair said, I'm going to kill a certain someone and revive my clan. Naruto narrowed his eyes and turned to face his only female student, who tapped her fingers together in what he recognized as a nervous habit with her. He was fairly certain Evangeline already knew about it, but he had never been told the clan was wiped out. He'd have to ask the vampire about that. Kakashi nodded, as it was exactly as he had anticipated, and his only objective with him was to add Naruto to the boy's kill list. Hinata Hyuga is my name. My sister, my sea clan garden, and I enjoy cinnamon rolls. I dislike the way some members of my clan are treated or those who harbor unjustified hatred. When he inquired about her clan, she didn't mention a seal, so Naruto turned his head to the side and quietly chalked it up as something else he'd have to ask Evangeline about. My hobby is pressing flowers, she said, and my dream is to unite the 2B branches of my clan and do away with the caged bird seal. Kakashi Hitaki is my name. I have a lot of likes and dislikes. The three genin all deadpanned at him, having only learned his name. Anyway, starting today, I'm your sensei, he said, adding, my hobbies are my own and my dream is private. I'm going to put each of you to the test tomorrow to see how strong you are and what needs improvement at 7 in the morning. Gather at the training grounds, okay? He told them before disappearing in a shunshin. The other three exchanged a quick look before Sasuke stood up and went off on his own, while Naruto bid Hinata farewell to return home and get ready for tomorrow's test. Hinata smiled slightly and followed their example, heading home to get ready. Once more? Perhaps he was late from a meeting yesterday, I reasoned. Naruto shouted as he paced back and forth in front of the three logs at the center of the training grounds. Sasuke was sitting on one of the logs while Hinata sat against the center one on the ground. Who the hell is 3 hours late twice in a consecutive day? When it's my turn to be tested, I'm going to kick his ass. This is absolutely absurd. Hinata tapped her fingers together, secretly agreeing with the boy but lacking the courage to express it, while Sasuke merely grunted in agreement. In the middle of the clearing, Kakashi chirped cheerfully, hello my little genin. Two people were staring at him, and one was attempting to do so but seemed too anxious to do so. So, are you all ready to be tested? Normally, he would ask them to pass a nearly impossible teamwork test, but Sarutobi had ordered this team to be passed automatically because they needed 2 of its members in the shinobi forces, so Kakashi's plan was to test each of them separately, 2 to see how he could help and the 3rd to see if the boy had any weaknesses. Ladies first please, he said, gesturing to Hinata, and the girl stood and walked off to the side after him, both boys watching. What am I supposed to do? As Kakashi briefly turned back to the boys, Hinata inquired. To make sure they heard him and were paying attention, he raised his voice at the end and said, the test is simple, and will be the same for all 3 of you. They nodded, so he went on, I want you to attack me with everything you have. Use whatever jutsu, techniques, and abilities you possess. I want you to give it your all. When you fight me I'll defend myself, but I won't aim for any lethal strikes. In order for me to see everything and accurately evaluate your abilities and determine where I can best assist you in improving, I need you to give it your all. You get it? The girl nodded, so she got into her clan taijutsu stance. Kakashi instantly noticed that her muscles were slightly strained, as if the position were forced. Not forced as if she is new to the style or exhausted and forcing herself to move, but forced as if her body was naturally trying to take another stance and she was refusing to let it. So the standard Juken naturally doesn't fit her. I'd bet her clan knows but refuses to see it. With how set into their ways they've probably tried to be stricter on her to make her fit the style rather than bending the style to fit her. Guess I'll have to see for myself, the man thought before nodding his head. Alright, begin, he yelled. Hinata rushed forward and attempted to strike his shoulder with her palm, but the man twisted out of the way and knocked her arm aside with a small tap of his hand. The girl didn't let that stop her, and she brought her other arm around to aim at his chest. Kakashi grabbed her hand by the wrist this time, flipped her over his shoulder, and tossed her aside, where she rolled on the ground before leaping to her feet. She made a few hand seals as she channeled chakra to her eyes, causing her pupils to stand out slightly among the light lavender while Sasuke remained seated on one of the training posts. Naruto stood off to the side, watching with his arms crossed, as the girl, her Kekkei Genkai active, rushed in once more and attempted to attack their sensei. The Uchiha grunted as Naruto pointed out something he had noticed. With her Byakugan and clan style, she'll become the taijutsu expert of the team. Naruto began by pointing to her, then pointed to himself as he continued, with my Rinnegan and naturally huge chakra reserves, I'll be the team's ninjutsu expert. Yano, if you take into account your Sharingan, Sensei's Sharingan, and my Rinnegan, you will then become the team's genjutsu expert thanks to your Sharingan and your clan's illusionary reputation. With the exception of dojutsu usage, we will cover all three of the major arts. This team has all the bases set, and that's not even considering if we decide to branch out into other subjects over the years, he concluded, grinning. Plus Hinata's Byakugan will make her the best at scouting. Your Sharingan will let you plan for enemies since you'll be able to predict their actions easiest, and my Rinnegan will flat out overpower whatever else we encounter. After giving it some thought, Sasuke nodded in agreement with Naruto. Naruto shrugged and the boy muttered, I guess that's what Hokage-sama was thinking when he made the teams. Since he hadn't seen the man since he was 5 and hadn't activated the fabled dojutsu until he was 6, he wasn't even sure if the Hokage knew about his eyes, unless Iruka or Kakashi had told him. Their thoughts returned to the present when Hinata landed on her back close to them and Kakashi ended their match. Alright, that's excellent. Like the rest of your clan, you concentrate on a taijutsu style that targets the chakra network and internal organs that your Kekkei Genkai allows you to see, he said, before going on to explain, I think I've got a good grasp on your skills, Hinata. I can assist you with it when we're all together because I understand some of the Jukin quite well. As she sat up and leaned against one of the training posts, exhausted, he remarked, I noticed though that it seems like you're forcing it, as if your body wants to fight another way. She winced when he mentioned that she appeared to be forcing herself to use Jukin. Oh, I take it you and your clan have noticed? The man hummed in agreement as she explained, they said IJ just need to T-train in it more, but and no matter how much I've T-trained it just doesn't feel right to me. Have you discussed that with them? I assume they waved it off? He asked, and she nodded. He hummed in contemplation once more after she nodded. Well, if they didn't assist you with it, then they must want you to conform to the standard Jukin regardless. She looked sad, and Naruto scoffed. And if that's the case then I can't really help with that, he said. Instead of helping her figure out a way to get stronger, they want her to use something she's not good at? Why in the world are they attempting to murder her? What if she embarks on a mission and dies because she was pushing herself to fight in a way that wasn't appropriate for her? He growled. Did they not think of that? Even though he agreed with what the demon said, Kakashi frowned at Naruto's outburst because he didn't think the demon had any right to talk about one of Konoha's great clans. As Hinata looked down and Naruto scoffed once more, he told them, they must have a reason for it, and as it's a family matter we all must abide by their decision. Sasuke simply ignored it because it didn't concern him as he got off the post and moved forward. My turn, Naruto shrugged because he didn't care, and Kakashi simply left so they wouldn't unintentionally catch Hinata in a crossfire. As soon as they were far enough away, Kakashi nodded, so the boy leapt towards him with a punch that the man batted aside before ducking under a kick and retaliating with a palm strike to push him back. As the boy got his bearings, he growled and rushed the Jonin again, leading with a kick from his free leg before Sasuke smirked and attempted to punch him. Grand Fireball technique for fire release. A Genin's elemental jutsu? Hinata appeared impressed by his ability to launch a fireball as Naruto whistled, and Kakashi gasped out before rolling to the side to avoid a large fireball that the boy spit out. Sasuke then pressed his attack by rushing back in as his teammates watched from the sidelines. Not too bad, the boy thought. He's definitely got skill, and then he looked down at Hinata. You were pretty good too, he told her, and she gave him a small thank you smile before letting it fall. She muttered, but I see can't use my taijutsu as well as I should. Naruto shook his head and sighed. He grunted and said, listen, clan ruling or not, they're putting your life at risk by holding you back like that. Hey, I've got an idea, he said. I will first discuss this with Master to see if she agrees with me, but if everything works out as I have in mind, you can accompany me to see Master at some point so she can help you with your taijutsu. You'll just need to find assistance elsewhere if Sensei and your clan refuse to assist, and I'm fairly certain she would be willing to do so. She claimed that your clan's fighting style reminds her of a couple she's seen while traveling, which has always piqued her interest. She simply left it alone because she had never had the opportunity to study it with a Hyuga before. Hinata stumbled out a question after looking shocked by the offer. I'm pretty sure she'd be willing to help you if y'all want. Why are you so careful? The boy looked back at Sasuke's battle with Kakashi and shrugged. I simply don't want a teammate to perish during a mission due to something that is so easily fixable. Additionally, we are expected to support one another as teammates, that's what that Iruka guy said, right? In the meantime, Sasuke had drawn out a kunai and was slashing away at Kakashi, but the boy had not yet hit him suddenly. Kakashi rose in a puff of smoke as hands seized the Uchiha from underground, and the boy was suddenly pulled down until only his head was above ground as Kakashi emerged from the dirt in front of him. Naruto responded as Hinata timidly nodded her head. Not at all bad. Sasuke gave him a stern look, but Kakashi ignored it and began reviewing what he had deduced from Sasuke's performance. You have a good grasp of taijutsu, specifically your clan style, which I can help with as I have lots of experience with it. As I'd expect from the Rookie of the Year, since I own a Sharingan, which is necessary to fully utilize the art, I even incorporated some of it into my own fighting style. You also demonstrate a strong command of ninjutsu by using a Kaiden jutsu, which was to be expected given that your clan was well known for its fire jutsu. I can assist you with that as well once you awaken your Sharingan. Your approach and your anger were the only issues I saw. You shouldn't have allowed your anger to control you, but you did. Sasuke, I am a seasoned Jonin, so there was nothing to be upset about because I never had a chance to defeat you. You had nothing to be upset about and weren't supposed to win. It was just for me to see your abilities as well. Fighting became sloppy and easier to defeat when you allowed your anger to control you. Before grabbing Sasuke from the ground, Kakashi lectured, you'll need to work on that temper of yours. The other problem was your tactics. My strategies? The man nodded, and he repeated. Yes, strategies. You approached it in a few different ways, but your ultimate objective was always to simply beat me to the ground. It's not always effective to beat someone that way, so you have to adjust your tactics. Try luring them to your allies or tricking them into falling into a trap. It would also be effective to sneak attack them while using a distraction. Additionally, fighting isn't always the best course of action. The man lectured, with a bit of work on some tactical lessons you'll be able to figure out what would work best and then utilize it for your advantage. Sasuke rubbed his wrists and reluctantly nodded. He had been fighting only to physically defeat Kakashi because he thought that the only way to exact revenge on his clan was to openly fight and kill Itachi. But based on the way Kakashi spoke, he might be able to defeat Itachi by using something other than his frown and turned to Naruto. The Jonin gestured for Sasuke to return to his teammates. It made some sense because he was growing tired of seeing them himself. Are you prepared, sensei? The Rinnegan user began by leaping up for an axe kick, but Kakashi sidestepped it and went to punch the boy in the chest. Naruto raised his arm to block and swung his other fist around to strike Kakashi, but the man caught his fist and pulled to bring his knee into Naruto's chest. The boy ducked by jumping over his leg and twisting his hand out of Kakashi's grasp as he rolled behind him and got up before leaping back when the Jonin spun around with a kick. As he flipped back and extended a hand towards Kakashi, channeling chakra to it, Naruto thought, well, he's better at basic taijutsu than me. To be expected since he's a Jonin. Time to bring out my jutsu. The man paused, his eye widening, when Naruto's hand split apart to reveal a spinning red lens with chakra building up behind it. Enerugi Taihao, he said, energy cannon, firing a blue laser at the Jonin, who switched with a log using a kawarimi before turning to the side and gazing at the ashes of the blasted piece of wood. What on earth is that? As Naruto's hand returned to normal, he made a demand. The boy briefly gestured at his eyes before returning to his stance. My Rinnegan gives me one of these abilities. I can use my chakra to mechanize my body for a variety of attacks with that specific ability. That is my most basic ability, which allows me to shoot a laser from my hand that is extremely explosive. Naturally, there's more to it, such as additional abilities bestowed by my eyes, but you'll have to wait and see as we battle Sensei. He could shoot out beams of pure destruction at will, and that was the most basic part of that one ability. How bad did it get? How many abilities did he have? Naruto clarified before jumping at the man once more while both of his teammates were staring at him with wide eyes from the sidelines. Kakashi ducked under a roundhouse before grabbing Naruto's foot and pulling on it to throw him to the ground. But Naruto smirked as his eyes flashed and he channeled chakra to his leg so that instead of pulling him and flipping him, Kakashi pulled his foot off as it detached, remaining attached to his leg by a metal cable, but attached to the cable were small silver orbs that sparked and ignited before flying off and striking Kakashi in the chest, where they exploded and shot both males away from each other. Flying metal explosives are part of that ability too, aren't they? The genin nodded as he snarled. Naruto's shoulders briefly protruded before two more sets of arms emerged from his cloak and sleeveless shirt, giving the boy 6. Anything mechanical from my body is part of that ability, as are these. While Naruto briefly flexed his limbs before pointing them all palm first at Kakashi, Sasuke and Hinata grimaced because they found the ability rather disgusting. As each hand transformed into its previous cannon form and started shooting tiny balls of blue chakra at the man, the boy yelled, "You might want to move Sensei Enerugi Danmaku." Energy barrage. Naruto turned to keep his arms pointed at Kakashi, who frowned as he started to run to the side. Kakashi eventually grew weary of fleeing from a genin and ran through hand seals before using the same jutsu that Sasuke had. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu, he exclaimed, launching a fireball that was much bigger than the genins. When Naruto withdrew his extra arms, his palms returned to normal, and he extended his hands. His eyes grew wide. The man halted and snarled as the fireball struck the blonde, but instead of burning him or causing any kind of explosion or pain, it spiraled into the boy's outstretched palms. He made a mental note to ask the Hokage about the dojutsu and inform him that Naruto was much stronger than they had anticipated based only on his versatility. "Another ability of you eyes?" he asked as the last of the fire disappeared into his hands. The blonde nodded and put them down. Before elaborating, he said, "Barakuho Ru Keke, black hole barrier. I can create a small layer of chakra over my body that will break down and absorb any chakra it comes into contact with, meaning if it is up, ninjutsu or useless against me. Furthermore, it adds the chakra it absorbs to my own reserves by touching someone and using the ability. I can even drain their chakra." "Are there any other details about your eyes that I should be aware of?" Naruto shrugged and Kakashi demanded. The boy honestly replied, "I have all 5 elemental affinities but currently don't know any elemental ninjutsu to take advantage of that fact because Master didn't know any." He also mentioned that he had some control over gravity, but he didn't mention that Danzo and Jiraiya wouldn't teach him any until he became a genin. "I have the ability to push and pull anything I focus on, but the jutsus have a brief cool-down period during which I am unable to use any gravity abilities. The gravity jutsu has a stronger effect and a longer cooldown the more chakra I put into it. I have a slight tug in the back of my mind that gets stronger just before I find out about a new ability, which makes me believe there might be more before taking out a card," Naruto said. "There's also this until that feeling goes away. I'm willing to bet there are more abilities to the Rinnegan that I haven't discovered yet." "What is that?" Sasuke and Hinata identified it as the card the boy had been examining in class this morning, but they were unsure of its contents and potential uses. Kakashi inquired, and Naruto grinned slightly as he glanced down at the card. "My master gave me what's known as a Pactio. I can use it to telepathically communicate with her, instantly be called to her side, and even slightly enhance my physical capabilities." As he held up the card for them to see what was inside, Naruto explained, "It also lets me summon out a weapon with a command phrase and put the weapon away with another." The card featured a picture of Naruto grinning with his 6 arms extended, each holding a blade, while his cloak appeared to be blowing in an invisible wind to the right. The words Secundi Adventus Creatoris, the creator's second coming, were written at the bottom of the image. "Excellent!" he yelled as the card disappeared and 6 tiny cylinders appeared on his sash. Naruto grabbed one and flicked his wrist to release the blade, which had a distinctive shape because it had the letters Dens Terre, Teeth of the World, etched into it. The blade had sharp metal points that came from the top and bottom of the cylinder, curved out slightly, then curled back in and stretched out to twin points that extended a foot over his fists. Consider a metal version of the beam sword from the Halo series. Each small cylinder functions as a blade, and since I have 6 of them, I can use all 6 of them simultaneously when I'm utilizing my full mechanical potential. I'm still relatively unfamiliar with them because I've only trained with them for a couple months." He admitted technically he'd only had the blades for a week, but thanks to the effect of Evangeline's resort he had a couple months training in how to use them. Nothing official, as Eva didn't use swords like that and rarely used blades to begin with, but she gave him combat practice by fighting with him while he was restricted to using just the blades and being forced to switch numbers and combinations every few rounds. From 1 in his right to all 6 to 3 on the left and 1 on the right, Eva wanted him to be skilled in any form with them so that he could be prepared for anything with them. "A beat," the blonde called out, making the blade and extras on his sash vanish as the card appeared in his hand again. The blonde put it away before looking to his sensei. "So do you want to keep going or should we stop?" "That will suffice since you might later discover a skill that makes my assistance useless. I won't be able to accurately assess everything you can do or how to develop your abilities." The man scowled and said, "All I can give you is a sparring partner to help you." He made a mental note to report everything to the Hokage because Naruto's skills were far above their expectations, and even though he had never intended to help him in the first place, it was clear that he didn't need any, which infuriated him. The boy's eyes also irritated him because he had never heard of this Rinnegan before, and the fact that he had some strange dojutsu. Then there was that card, a Pactio, he said, which allowed him to acquire strange blades, communicate with his master, and summon her whenever he wanted. If she could give him this, could she grant that to others, or give him multiple copies? The blonde chirped as he approached Sasuke and Hinata and sat down on the last post. The boy assumed that the man's frown was due to his inability to assist him, as he was still unaware that Kakashi detested him and that Sarutobi had not given him orders to try to control and hinder him. His teammates were staring at him with wide eyes because the skills he displayed were far above genin level. How much work would they have to do before they could even claim to have caught up to their teammate, let alone a higher-ranked shinobi? Hinata considered accepting his offer of assistance, while Sasuke considered going to receive additional training from his own master if she could make the blonde this strong. What could she do with him today, sensei? As Kakashi approached and took a position in front of the three, Naruto posed the question. No, the purpose of this was to find out where each of you stands today. In order for us to train and go on missions, we will now meet here every morning at 7. We are Genin Team 7 as of right now, and we are capable of serving in Konoha's ranks before disappearing in a Shunshin to report to the Hokage with the other sensei. He told them, I'll see you tomorrow. He was going to claim that his team had passed, without disclosing to the other sensei that he had been told to pass them, and then he would stay behind and explain everything to the elderly Cage. Perhaps he knew something about Naruto's eyes or how to counter them. I'm going to train some more. Sasuke grunted before he got up and headed for his clan compound, determined to work harder. Naruto had outclassed him, which irritated him and made him need to get stronger. He also felt inwardly that once he got his Sharingan, he'd be able to keep up and maybe overpower the blonde, knowing that if they were to fight right then and there, he'd lose. That last part really hurt his pride. As the blonde turned to face the girl who had not yet stood up, Hinata and Naruto bid each other farewell. So are you gonna head home too? Here, you're still exhausted from your fight against Sensei, so I'll help ya home, he said, and she nodded as she stumbled to her feet, observing her struggle. He put an arm around her waist and threw another over his shoulder. She blushed a little from needing assistance and from being held against his body, so the boy said, just show me the way. The girl stammered out the directions, hoping to keep from fainting. Master, I'm back. Naruto called out and got a reply to come to the kitchen, so the boy did to see not only Evangeline but Danzo sitting at the table having tea. Hi Danzo-sensei, how are you? Eva motioned for him to pour himself some tea if he wanted, and the blonde asked as he sat down. The man nodded his head to the boy, maintaining the stoic expression the two had grown accustomed to from him. I am doing well, Naruto, he replied amicably. While the man would like Naruto under his control, even he would admit that the combined training of himself, Jiraiya and Evangeline had turned the boy into a powerhouse of a shinobi despite only just becoming a genin. While the boy didn't follow the full ideals that Danzo believed a weapon and shinobi should, he was pleased with how Naruto acted. He thought things through and would take the choice that was best for Konoha as a whole, despite his own wishes. I had come over to speak with Evangeline-san about a few things as well as inquire about your team and Sensei. Naruto nodded as the man explained. I felt it would be best to hear it straight from the source, even though my men would undoubtedly inform me of such information later. I want to know how that went myself, Naruto. The boy nodded once more before he started talking. You described your teammates and Sensei last night, but now that you've taken a test with them, you should have a better understanding of them, Eva continued. Well, Sasuke Uchiha and Hinata Hyuga are my teammates, and Kakashi Hitaki is my sensei. Yesterday was just some small introductions to each other, while today's sensei had us each spar against him one-on-one so that he could get a decent grasp of our abilities. He first engaged in combat with Hinata, then Sasuke, and finally with me. He claimed he could assist Hinata in using only her clan's taijutsu. He also mentioned that she didn't seem to fit the taijutsu, to which Hinata responded that she agreed but that her clan was pressuring her anyhow before turning to face Eva. Naruto said. He said he couldn't help much in that case, which kind of pissed me off. I offered to talk to you about maybe helping her with her taijutsu, maybe help her learn or create a new style that she could use with her juken. I don't see a problem with that. Eva turned back to Naruto after glancing at Danzo and noticing his slight nod. Bring her around sometime and I'll see what I can do, she said. Evangeline clarified. I can't guarantee it, but if it's like you say, it wouldn't hurt to try. That girl will be more vulnerable than the typical Hyuga because she is the clan's heiress. Danzo clarified. The Byakugan is a highly sought-after bloodline in the world, and there have been attempts to steal it in the past, including one on Hinata already. To prevent them, the clan has been divided into the main and branch houses. The majority of the branch houses are in Konoha's armed forces. I even have a couple in my root division in order to keep the eyes out of enemy hands. The branch house is also required to wear a seal that will eliminate their bloodline upon their death. The girl is a prime target for kidnapping because she lacks that seal. Despite being the heiress and a main house Hyuga, she could be used by another village to create more Byakugan shinobi for themselves and, in the event that the clan tries to retaliate, to create a trump against the Hyuga. Even more justification to assist her in becoming stronger. Eva and Danzo nodded as Naruto summarized. Anyway, Kakashi-sensei next fought Sasuke. If the regular Juken isn't working for her, then she needs a new one to stay safe. The man displayed some impressive taijutsu and even threw a few fireballs. Sensei later stated that he can assist him with both his bloodline once it activates and the clan's fighting style because he has experience with it. In my opinion, he ought to try using some kind of weapon. The vampire shrugged and Danzo remained silent, so Naruto offered, he seems flexible and agile enough for a sword or something. They would have to wait until the boy grew before making any decisions. And then was my fight against Sensei. Before he insisted that I explain my Rinnegan abilities so he would know what I was capable of, I surprised him a few times. I told him almost everything because I thought it would be best if he knew, as he is my sensei and leader. When we go on missions, I simply omitted my knowledge of Fuinjutsu because I'm still learning it and didn't see the need to discuss it, as well as my Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique, which I dislike using due to the headaches that multiple vision causes me. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Naruto, you need to overcome that obstacle and become proficient in such a practical skill. Eva nodded in agreement as Danzo tapped his cane against the ground and told him, to be able to see everything from multiple points of view in a fight would be a valuable asset in any battle that could save the life of your comrades and yourself. The boy drank his tea and sighed. He's right, Naruto, and you know this. I know, it's just that headache really kills me. Then begin modestly. He nodded, and Evangeline said, now was there anything else? Practice 2 fields of vision, and once you understand how to fight with them, add a third, and repeat until you reach a limit. Naruto gave a headshake. Just that. Sensei said he can't assist me too much because my skills are too diverse and that I might acquire a new one that makes his assistance unnecessary or worthless. Eva dismissed it as Danzo nodded and got up to go. He's just going to stick with giving me a sparring partner and small stuff since he can't get in depth with me because of the Rinnegan. It's okay because even the pervert, who is the most knowledgeable about eyes, is unable to assist with everything in any case. You've developed the majority of those abilities through trial and error. When you practice a new power, just make sure that someone is present. Eva remarked with a small smile. I wouldn't want you to unintentionally kill yourself trying to make a moon like the sage supposedly did. Thank you for the information. Naruto, I just need to say that I agree with Evangeline-san about learning your dojutsu. I will now take a leave of absence because I have other things to do. Before he left, he said, good day to you both. Naruto said goodbye, and Evangeline simply waved. The Rinnegan. You're positive that's what he said? After the Jonin and other senseis had either passed or failed their teams, Sarutobi yelled at Kakashi as they were alone in his office. The silver-haired man stayed behind and initially made some remarks about Hinata and Sasuke before getting right to the point and outlining all of Naruto's abilities. Sir, that's what it called it. They were a grayish-purple with a ripple pattern extending from the pupil, Kakashi said, rubbing the bridge of his nose while Sarutobi cursed to himself. Kakashi, what do you know about the eyes? Hokage-sama, not much. The man sighed as he chose to fill in his Jonin about the fabled dojutsu. They sound familiar, like something Minato-sensei mentioned once, but I can't really remember. Kakashi, the dojutsu of the man who invented ninjutsu, Rikudo Senin, is those eyes. They possess unparalleled power, and according to legend, anyone who possesses them will be able to master every jutsu imaginable. He clarified as Kakashi's eyes widened. According to another legend, whoever controls those eyes will either save or destroy the world. We must exterminate the demon before it kills everyone. If that is the case. Sarutobi leveled Kakashi with a stern gaze and shook his head. No, this only makes it wiser for us to put him under my supervision. Nothing will stop the boy, and he won't ever obey me if he ever fully realizes the power behind those eyes. As Kakashi reluctantly nodded his understanding, the man said, we need to get him under my command so that I can make him use that power to eliminate our enemies and place Konoha as the strongest in the world. Now, I want you to focus on Sasuke while helping Hinata where you can, though for the most part leave her to her clan, he said. As Kakashi nodded and left the office, Sarutobi gave the order, in the meantime, I want you to report everything Naruto can do and every weakness you see to me so that I can develop a plan to force him to obey my rule. Aside from his eyes, however, the biggest issue he could see was the Pactio weapon he received from Evangeline. Not because of the swords or ability boost it supposedly granted, but because he could speak with her telepathically through it and that she could summon him. Sarutobi was certain that if he made a hasty move with Naruto, The woman would simply summon him away and never allow him near the boy again, and that he would be alerted at any time with just a thought. The man detested that woman to the core. After returning the dogs they had all taken for walks, Naruto complained as they left the Inuzuka compound, saying, "Man, that was boring. When will we get some real missions?" The boy asked. While Hinata tapped her fingers together on his left and Sasuke nodded to his right, Kakashi walked behind them, frowning and with his nose in an orange book. "These are the missions you can undertake as a recently established Genin squad," he explained, "until I deem the three of you a competent team. These are the only ones we'll be getting." In his mind, he felt that the demon should be grateful that it was being allowed to work for the village and happy that it wasn't being killed just on principle. Sasuke grunted in frustration as he and Naruto felt they were ready for the next level, while Hinata wasn't so sure and was okay with getting some more training in first. Although she felt that Naruto could definitely handle himself and Sasuke probably could as well, she didn't think she could yet and didn't want to drag the team down or make her teammates constantly protect her. Alright, then as the team entered the Hokage Tower to report their mission success, Naruto shot back, "Let's get some more training instead of these chores so we can go on the real missions quicker." Kakashi huffed but remained silent, and Naruto put on his blank, stoic face when the secretary smiled and welcomed them. "Oh, the 7th team, I take it that the mission is over?" Sarutobi greeted warmly with a smile, inwardly glaring at Naruto. While Sarutobi kept up the kind and grandfatherly facade, he had been planning over the past few months how to get Naruto back under his control. When he had first seen the Rinnegan himself, he had to suppress his growl at how powerful the boy was becoming under Evangeline. Yes, he needed Naruto to be strong, but only after the boy was indoctrinated to his views and was his loyal pawn. As such, he needed to find a way to get Naruto away from Evangeline and then re-educate him to his liking, but thanks to the pactio he had with the vampire, he was having trouble thinking of good ideas. Kakashi walked up and handed the man a scroll with the details as the Hokage took it and set it aside with a small sigh. "Would you like another mission, or will that be all for the day?" the man inquired while Kakashi briefly hummed. Once outside, Kakashi closed his book and turned to face his genin. "Alright you three, I'm open for training if you'd like, otherwise you're dismissed," the man said. "No, I think that will be it for today, Hokage-sama." The Hokage nodded and dismissed them, giving Naruto one final look before they left. "After that, I'll go train with Master. She was helping me with something about my Rinnegan that I've been working on anyhow." The Jonin nodded, glad that the demon declined his offer because he wasn't going to assist him anyhow. Kakashi nodded once more when Sasuke said, "I need some help with a fire jutsu I've been working on." "Alright, how about you, Hinata?" After giving it some thought, the girl shook her head, so he shrugged and said, "Alright, but if you want it, I'll be at our team training grounds with Sasuke." He then put a hand on the Uchiha's shoulder and used a shunshin to make them disappear. Hinata was about to walk away when Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder. He smiled and the girl turned to face him, saying, "Hey, wait a sec, Hinata. Why not come with me and meet Master? She's been wondering if you were going to come around for any help or not, and she's kind of curious and wants to meet you too," Naruto said to the girl, who fidgeted nervously for a moment before nodding her head and walking away. Sarutobi, who was above, frowned as he looked down from his window. He needed Naruto under control and for Evangeline to stop interfering with his plans. "Hey, Master, I've returned. I also took Hinata with me," Naruto called out as Hinata entered the small cottage and looked around. When Naruto had originally started taking her towards the training grounds, she had questioned him about really going to see his master. The boy had just chuckled but told her that she lived past the training grounds as she liked her privacy. Naruto grinned as he led Hinata through the house, noticing the girl was just looking around and eyeing the few dolls that lined the shelves placed around the walls. "Master likes dolls and puppets a lot," he commented as she silently nodded. "Hi, Whiskers. Welcome back. Who is your friend?" The doll chuckled as Naruto rolled his eyes at her antics, and Chachizero called out as Hinata jumped at the sudden voice. "Zero-chan, are you where?" In order to find the source, Hinata even turned on her Byakugan, but she was unable to see any chakra sources other than Naruto's and her own vast reserves, so he asked. "Come on, Whiskers." As the blonde sighed and raised a hand, she taunted, "You should know me better than that." The boy's eyes flashed slightly as the little doll was dragged from her hiding place and flew into his hand. "Ura Kyokusei. Reverse polarity," the boy called out as he concentrated on the tiny magical signature he had grown accustomed to from years of living with the doll. "Got you." "Cheater," she complained. "You used jutsu." Naruto smiled cordially at the doll before turning to face the stunned Hinata. He began to get back on track, saying, "Anyways, Hinata, this is Chachizero, or Zero-chan as I call her, as the girl shyly nodded to the green-haired doll he was holding. The boy said, Zero-chan. This is Hinata Hyuga. She's a special living doll master made years ago. She is among the teammates I mentioned to you and the master. Yes, the girl whose family is retarded is the one you pleaded with the master to assist with training, I recall. The doll chirped, then blinked and cocked her head sideways. So you're afraid of my white eyes? As Naruto rolled his eyes once more, Hinata asked, shaking her head a little nervously, causing the doll in the boy's hands to cry out. Avoid being offended by her names. She gives everyone a nickname, sometimes in an offensive way and other times not. This is like having whiskers. Yeah, the boy deadpanned when he was cut off, but Hinata leaned over to get a better look, her eyes wide. There's no chakra. She pondered, examining the doll closely with her ancestors. What powers her? Naruto shrugged as she asked, if it's not too much trouble. Power of the master. She uses something else instead of chakra. The boy held Chachazero up to his face and explained, it's a little different, but the end result is super strong techniques that are just like jutsu. Where is master anyway? By now, she would have emerged. At the resort. When I last saw her, she was unwinding. Naruto blinked, then glanced at Hinata before turning back to Chachazero. Do you think Hinata would be upset with me, or would master object if I showed her the resort? How was it possible that they were discussing a resort in the middle of Konoha? The blonde asked, bobbing its head back and forth before responding. Hinata appeared perplexed. I don't know, but I'm going to laugh if she's upset. She might beat you up once more. Naruto sighed, half expecting the little doll to respond in that manner. You think she might attack White Eyes if she is angry? The blonde shook his head right away. Master punishes only those who deserve it, so no, the boy replied. I guess I'll have to introduce you to master some other time, before giving it some more thought and turning to Hinata. It would be my fault if she gets mad about the resort, so I'm the one she'd punish. As Hinata shook her head, he apologized. It's all right, I'll just go home now. See you tomorrow, and Naruto-san, she said before heading out. Naruto sighed and went into the kitchen to prepare a snack for himself, placing Chachazero on the table in the process. You know that Zero-chan surprises me. As he picked up the bread for a basic sandwich, he yelled, you never once threatened Hinata. Are you serious? Already, she seemed afraid of me? I must hold off on doing that until she is accustomed to me. I can then continue to frighten her. The doll chirped as Naruto stopped to turn and deadpan at the magical creation before shaking his head and going back to his food. He honestly didn't know why the doll liked to have everyone scared of her, or why she liked blood and knives so much despite living with her for a little over 7 years. It had been one mystery the Rinnegan bearer had never figured out. So, are ya gonna bring her by again, Whiskers? I might approach master about allowing her to tour the resort first. The doll hummed in agreement behind him as the boy pondered. If she says no, we'll have to actually set a date instead of just bringing her by the next time I get the chance. Bring by whom? Both Naruto and Chachazero turned to see Evangeline walking up in her usual gothic Lolita-styled clothes, this time black. As she hopped into a seat at the table, both the doll and boy gave her a quick, "Hi master," that she waved off. Bring who by? As Naruto finished preparing his sandwich and took a bite, she repeated. After swallowing the food, he replied, my teammate Hinata. Eva shrugged. I just brought her by, but Zero-chan said you were in the resort and I wasn't sure if it was okay to show that to her or not, so I chose not to, just to be safe, and she went home. As long as she is reliable, I wouldn't mind if she eventually saw the resort. I mean, if word got out that I have an enclosed time-space under my control that operates on a slower but parallel flow of our time, can you imagine how much I would be pressured to let people use my resort like you do? Sarutobi in particular would be requesting that I either create another or allow them to use it however they please for training purposes only. It made sense, and after everything Sarutobi had done to them, neither of them wanted to assist him in any way. That's not even counting the people that would actually want to use it for its original purpose of relaxation, she replied, and the boy nodded. I've been wondering why you're unable to create another. He sat down opposite her and asked. There are 2 reasons. One is that I don't have the required supplies. A few of the materials were just things I had with me from the Mundus Magicus when I was sealed here, she said. It took me a few years to make this one-off memory alone, and I can't get access to some of the rarer materials anymore since they can't be found here. Additionally, it would be too mentally taxing for me. Your thoughts? I can usually overlook it, but maintaining the resort's flawless condition requires some focus while it's in use. How's your time with Hitaki coming? Evangeline asked, and Naruto nodded in agreement. But if I were to add a second, it would be giving me a constant headache, and I don't want to deal with that just for some random fools I don't know or care anything about. As Naruto sagged in his chair, she posed the question. Boring, when we're together, He just gives me a clone to practice my taijutsu with and has us do teamwork exercises or work with Sasuke and Hinata on what he can, he complained as Chachazero laughed. After completing random chore A for random civilian B, we end the day. After that, he occasionally offers training, but only Sasuke seems to accept since Hinata will return to her clan for training and I can simply get some better training here with you in the resort. 2 weeks have passed. I'm already so tired of this job. I would prefer to simply receive a legitimate mission, but Sensei consistently asserts that this is all we will receive until we are a capable team. The doll giggled once more as Eva grinned at Sarutobi's annoyance and insult. The old monkey's been acting all cheery and grandfatherly for everyone too, which is really annoying since he's just a scheming old fuck. Naruto, move on. In her genin days, just before war, Kushina told me she had to deal with the same bullshit as he moaned after being informed that he had to handle the missions. Eva reprimanded him. Those are the fundamental rules you live by in times of peace. I could just start stabbing you if you want whiskers. You would then experience some thrill. The doll cheered as Naruto just lazily reached over and tipped her to her side. Hey, no fair. Get me back up. Master? Stop laughing, Master, and charge me so I can exact revenge on him? Come on, this isn't amusing. Team 7, good morning. Are you prepared to go on another mission? We have plenty of D ranks available currently, the old man said as Hinata stood next to them, nervously tapping her fingers as was her habit, while Kakashi looked down at the three before facing the Hokage. Sasuke's aloof look turned into a frown, and Naruto's eye twitched before stopping. Even though Sarutobi was trying his hardest to make Naruto submit, the old man would admit that the main reason he loved giving genin their assignments was seeing them struggle to contain their anger when performing basic tasks. The man raised an eyebrow but nodded when Kakashi called, I believe my team is ready for a C-rank Hokage-sama. All right then. He pondered before glancing over a list of tasks that could be completed and giving Kakashi a scroll containing one that he thought they could complete. A bridge builder in the waiting room downstairs wants protection from bandits as he returns home to Nami no Kuni, Land of Waves, to finish his bridge. The group nodded as Kakashi reviewed the request. Your job will be to guard him until the bridge is completed and then return to the village, the man explained. All right, the man gave the order. Team, pack for a month and then meet me at the south gate in 1 hour. The genin nodded and departed. Kakashi put the scroll in his pouch and turned to face the Hokage, who looked at him and explained why he was sending out genin who were only a few weeks old on a C rank already. It didn't matter that one of the genin was a Jinchuriki and had received extreme training for his age. Personally, I believe Sasuke is progressing very well and will be able to do her part well enough to get by. I hate to say it, but the demon's skill level is already higher than Chunin's, sir. If problems arise, it will be able to take the appropriate action with the exception of a few occasions when Sasuke attempted to outsmart the demon and cost them the exercise. The three also get along well as Hiruzen lit his pipe and took a drag of tobacco, the man explained. That's why I've been training him harder on the side, to help him catch up so that he won't feel inadequate and won't accidentally cost anyone their lives on the job. I understand if the need arises. Kakashi, you have the same responsibility to protect Naruto as you do for your other two pupils. I understand that you dislike him, but the Rinnegan is too powerful to let go of, and Konoha depends on the Kyuubi's strength. Kakashi gritted his teeth and nodded, but the man said, yes, concentrate more on Sasuke's and Hinata's safety, but don't let Naruto die or be crippled due to your hate. Had he not been the ideal candidate for the position, he would not have had anything to do with the demon that took his sensei and the woman he looked up to. At last, an actual mission. Sasuke smirked and grunted as Hinata approached and placed her pack beside the others, while Naruto cheered while standing by the gate with his pack on the ground beside him. I concur, the boy boasted. Those chores were insulting to Uchiha, while Naruto rolled his eyes. Oh, Sasuke, don't begin with the powerful Uchiha material. Once more as Sasuke snarled and glanced sideways while Hinata glanced from boy to boy. Naruto moaned and then smirked, saying, the Uchiha were great and you're pretty skilled yourself, but you still can't match up to the eyes of God. Please refrain from fighting at this time. We need to be focused for the mission. She admonished timidly. Naruto scratched the back of his head as he apologized while Sasuke just sighed and nodded his head. This had become a normal occurrence with the three. Anytime Sasuke would start to get a swelled head about his heritage, Naruto would bring him back down by bragging about his eyes, which never failed to anger the Uchiha. Then Hinata would jump in asking them to stop and Naruto would apologize while Sasuke would relent because she would usually point out they had other priorities to focus on. So who do you think we're guarding? Naruto closed his eyes and Sasuke shrugged as she asked. Since Hokage-sama mentioned a bridge builder, He is most likely an elderly, powerful man to handle all the heavy materials used in construction. You really need to have some muscle. As his teammates exchanged glances and nodded in agreement, the blonde pondered. Do y'all think we're gonna have any trouble though? As Sasuke grunted and Hinata shrugged, he inquired. Now for my part, I hope we do. I want to test my skills out on someone. Their attention was caught when Kakashi called out to them from down the street, and they turned to see him walking up with a man wearing a sleeveless brown shirt and a straw hat. He was also drunk, as was obvious from the blush on his cheeks, the strong smell of sake coming off him, and the bottle in his hand. You were saying about someone strong? Sasuke simply laughed incredulously in response to Naruto's remark. Hello everyone, this is Tazuna. The man took a swig of his drink as Kakashi introduced him. He's the man we'll be guarding as he finishes his bridge connecting our two countries. Is this it? The man pondered intoxicatedly, then looked at Hinata and Naruto, asking, what's wrong with their eyes, huh? I thought I'd be getting someone older than these brats when you said you had 3 skilled ninja under your command. Is the girl blind? As Naruto face-palmed, Hinata appeared to shrink into her coat. Sasuke simply grinned at their suffering, and Kakashi dismissed the questions. And the blonde looks like someone hypnotized him. With, yet, circling around Naruto, he responded, she can see fine and the other isn't hypnotized. Their eyes are different due to a special brand of ninja techniques. Under my headband, I also have another eye, and with more practice, Sasuke might be able to awaken his own unique eyes. Before motioning for the genin to gather their bags, he said, don't worry, Tazuna-san, everything's fine. But let's get on our way, shall we? After all, Nami is a long way off. You take the lead, Sasuke, and I'll follow. Hinata can have the left while the right will be covered by the last member of our group. Kakashi ordered, so the genin nodded and got into position around Tazuna as they walked out of the gates, Naruto looking back to the village for a moment before getting a small smile and turning back to watch the path. Something wrong, Naruto? The blonde perked up at the question but shook his head when Hinata caught him looking back. She looked back herself to see if anything was there, but when she saw nothing interesting, she decided to ask the boy. No, I'm alright. I've never left the village before, that's all. It has some novelty to it, among other things. Anyways, let's just focus on this right now, protecting the client. Hinata nodded her head and glanced back at Konoha, realizing that it was her first time out of the village as well. I'll be alright, Hinata. The blonde replied as Sasuke scoffed ahead and Kakashi rolled his eyes. So what if it was your first time out of the village? As long as you do your job right, it won't be your last. So he's going on a C rank to keep Nami away from some unknown bridge builder? While the man didn't want to tell her anything and detested her, he knew that if he didn't comply with her demands, he would simply lock the boy up in her cottage and never let him leave unless she had to. Hey, looks like not only is he finally on a real mission like he wanted, but he gets to see another country, Evangeline thought as she read the note Sarutobi had sent her outlining her conditions for allowing Naruto to join his forces. Lucky brat. Master, are you envious? The blonde girl raised an eyebrow and then shook her head when Chachizero asked. Not at all. I'm accustomed to Kushina boasting about her missions because I had to experience the same thing. As she put the note down, she replied, I'm more worried about something happening and Naruto possibly freezing up or something. It's annoying, but I'll deal with it. Yes, we trained him to be ready, but this will be his first real-world experience. He knew during training that we would never kill him. Sure, come close, but he would always make it out alive even though it might not seem like much. Losing that one safety net could cause him to completely forget about his training when the time comes. Others have experienced it. No matter how hard you train or how realistic the situation is, you can never truly prepare for it. As Chachizero cocked her head to the side, Eva clarified, the real thing is always a shock and you may freeze up or forget what to do in those situations. So, would you like to see how he's doing? Eva shook her head in response to her question. The vampire thought, he will be fine with an experienced Jonin there. Oh, master? Are you there? Her eyes widened as Naruto's voice replayed itself in her mind. Before calling forth the Pactio card and holding it to her head, she muttered, then again I've been wrong before. What is it, brat? Through the link immediately following the threat, the girl could almost feel the boy's anguish and despair. I swear to Kami, if you're just bragging, then when you get back I'm letting Chachizero give you a 3-day-long torture session, she said. Master, no way. In fact, something came up. It turns out our client lied about the real danger he was in because he couldn't afford a higher rank team, she said, huffing at his hasty response. A couple of Chunin nobodies from Kiri attacked us, but we easily dealt with them before questioning them. Nevertheless, we discovered that the client is actually being pursued by a wealthy businessman who has no problem sending ninjas after him. This man's bridge will save his country, So it was decided that we would move forward. Since we were informed of the people these nobodies collaborate with, we simply wish to request some backup. Who would that be? Eva asked, feeling both relieved and irritated that something had happened that called for backup. She was relieved because they were astute enough to request backup, which also meant that no one was harmed, and irritated because this was supposed to be a straightforward protection detail, but it was now far beyond that. As Evangeline's eyes grew wide, Naruto acknowledged, a former Jonin of Kiri and part of the greatest generation of their famed seven swordsmen, Zabuza Momochi. Kushina had ranted a few times about Kiri's seven ninja swordsmen, primarily because she wanted to fight them and see how strong they truly were. When Eva had taught Naruto about Kiri, she had made sure to include the group in the bounty profiles on each member of the strongest generation. Zabuza was hailed as the Demon of the Mist for his actions at his graduation ceremony. I apologize, I'll let Sarutobi know about this. I'm a little surprised that you're facing him. She shook her head to get her thoughts straight before letting out a sigh. He will undoubtedly send it back up because he doesn't want his valuable weapon to be in danger. As Naruto thanked her and ended the call, the girl said, I'll also let Danzo know, and he might send an agent to keep watch from the shadows. Master, what's going on? Danzo and Sarutobi might send someone, but that didn't mean she couldn't, Chachizero asked, and Eva glanced at the doll before having an idea and smiling. The five of them traveled in silence, with Sasuke, eager to prove himself, looking around with a slight smirk in the hopes of spotting an enemy to attack. Hinata hoping to avoid a fight but keeping a close eye on things, turning on her bloodline every 5 minutes for a better view before turning it off again to conserve chakra, and Naruto keeping his own special eyes peeled as he had his Rinnegan active in search of chakra signatures. He had the chakra to spare, so even though he couldn't see the energy used by shinobi as well as Hinata, he could continue his search for a much longer. He was giggling every few seconds while reading a small orange book. So, how long have you ninjas been brats? With genuine curiosity and a desire to break the silence, Tazuna asked. Naruto kept his eyes open and gave the civilian a quick glance before returning to his search. We've been genin for a couple weeks, but we've all been training for years before this, the brunette admitted. I can't speak for them, but I've been training since I was 5. Sasuke, who was listening in on the conversation a little, grunted, same. Hinata said, I've been training lightly since 3? Tazuna gave her a shocked, wide-eyed stare. 5. 3. What on earth? You're only children, he yelled as Naruto shrugged and Sasuke grunted once more. The beliefs of civilians and ninjas are different. Your lives aren't centered around a risky profession that involves what you might think of as superpowers. They're ours. When Kakashi finally took his eyes off his book, Naruto called out, Hey Hinata, I think I'm picking up chakra ahead, but it's really faint, so I'm not sure. As such, it's best to get ourselves used to the powers and the hardships from a young age so that we can better handle them when we're older. Naruto then looked ahead and saw a small chakra. Naruto, that's a puddle, Hinata gasped, and Sasuke grunted, you must have broken eyes. No. People are lurking in the water. As Kakashi shushed them, the girl yelled. Be quiet. They might be after me for my reputation from the war, he growled, slowing down a little but continuing to walk. They might be waiting for someone else or pursuing our client. Act as though you don't know for the time being, but be prepared to respond if they attack. Tazuna is your top priority, right? The genin nodded as the Jonin gave the order, and Tazuna's expression changed to one of fear at the prospect of things becoming heavy in a matter of seconds. Tazuna sighed in relief when nothing happened, saying, for a second I thought. The group crossed the puddle with a little tenseness but otherwise seemed to be acting normally. Sensei. As Kakashi was abruptly bound by thorn-covered chains, Hinata yelled, keeping her eyes open to see what was happening behind her. Naruto whirled around and pointed a hand at one of the ninja who was holding the chains. Myaku Inryoku, gravity pulse, he called as his eyes flashed and the ninja was sent flying as the chain snapped. Sasuke quickly spun and tossed kunai at the other, making him leap back to his partner's side. The two ninja were dressed similarly in that they both had large black cloaks over themselves to hide their full appearance, while Hei wore large masks over their mouths meant to allow breathing underwater. Around their foreheads were matching headbands with four small wavy lines in a rectangle representing the village of Kiri. Who are they? As Hinata assumed her Juken stance in front of Tazuna, the blonde inquired, and Sasuke and Naruto advanced to stand in front of her on her right and left, respectively. How on earth were they aware of our presence? Even as Kakashi yanked the chains off of himself with a frown, one of the men asked, while the other stood up and turned to face the genin. At the moment, 2 of my genin have very special eyes. The 2 attackers grimaced but prepared for battle as Kakashi warned. It was foolish to try to hide from them. Naruto smiled and Sasuke smirked, both of them hoping to fight. No one needs to be harmed if you turn over the elderly man. Tazuna took an unconscious step back as they shouted together. Kakashi looked at the man and then at his genin. Noticing their eagerness to fight, the Jonin laughed as he turned back to the men. We decline as Naruto and Sasuke both grinned identically and charged in. The man calmly ordered, "Get them." Naruto ran beneath him as Sasuke made hand seals and then leapt to his feet. Kaden. Jutsu no Gokaku. Fire release. Grand fireball technique. He called as he hurled a fireball at the two, who split apart to avoid it, but Naruto raised his hands as they both moved to his mechanical form's rotating lens. Enerugi Taihao. Energy cannon. Blue beams burst from his hands, causing the attackers to gasp in shock. One of them was able to replace himself with a log, while the other was shot in the chest, causing him to be blasted back and crash against a tree before collapsing unconscious. With large burns covering his chest where the laser had struck him, the other reappeared and ran directly for Hinata and Tazuna. But the girl dodged his opening swing and stabbed him in the arm and side 6 times, causing him to collapse to the ground, clutching his side and howling in agony. The man gave 2 of his students a quick eye smile, ignoring the third, before returning his attention to their 2 captives. "Very good, you 3. Kakashi praised them as he walked over and knocked the whining one unconscious so that he would be quiet, then dragged him to the tree the other one was at and pulled out wire to tie them up. The fireball distraction and beam attack worked better than it had in practice, and Hinata, you kept your calm and disabled your opponent with smooth and precise strikes. Known as the Demon Brothers, Gozu and Maizu are Kiri's Chunin level missing nin. Why, then, would they pursue a mere bridge builder? Care to explain that, Tazuna-san?" The man asked, then stood up and gave Tazuna a chilly, blank look. "There's someone that doesn't want my bridge completed," the man said after flinching, looking down, and shaking his head as if he had recovered from the shock of the attack. With a sigh, he began, "You see, Nami no Kuni is a shipping country. I'd be willing to bet my life that he's the one who sent those 2 after me. We make a living by shipping our products all over the world. The docks and ships are our vibrant neighborhood because we are an island nation as well." A man named Gato appeared a few years ago. "I take it you mean Gato from Gato Corporation? Gato, one of the world's wealthiest men?" Tazuna nodded when Kakashi interrupted to ask a question. "Exactly the same. We were initially pleased when he looked at Nami. We believed that his company would help our nation grow even more. However, all of the shipping firms were gradually going out of business or being acquired, leaving only those under Gato's control. That was when it began. He began threatening those who refused to pay the new taxes he imposed and charging outrageous fees to use his ships. Publicly, anyone who refused was killed. Over the past few years, Gato has strengthened his control over Nami and turned my home into a nation plagued by poverty. We've been reduced to being unable to survive since Gato owns the ships that we need to transport our goods and stay alive. I eventually gathered enough resources and personnel to begin constructing my bridge. After all, we won't require his ships to ship our goods if my bridge is finished. We could get away from his tyranny. Gato obviously disapproves of that. When he began to threaten me, I put the bridge project on hold while I gathered up as much Ryo as I could and sneaked off to Konoha in an attempt to get some assistance. I lied about the danger because I couldn't afford a larger or better team." The man hung his head and said, "I'm sorry." The genin exchanged glances, indicating their desire to assist, and Kakashi sighed. However, the restrained brothers behind him began to stir before he could make up his mind. "What happened? You were defeated by my students. Well, who hired you to take out Tazuna, and are there any other shinobi working with you?" Kakashi teasingly said. Genin only a couple weeks into their careers beat 2 Chunin. In the same upbeat tone that drew the 2 brothers out, he asked cheerfully as they scowled, "Just know that if you refuse to tell me, I'm more than willing to use torture to get these answers." Gozu replied, "Gato hired us," Maizu continued, "and we work under Zabuza Momochi." Kakashi nodded, then struck the 2 in the head to knock them unconscious again. Zabuza Momochi? As he got back up and approached the genin and their client, the man pondered. "Zabuza Momochi, hold on, the Momochi Zabuza? The Mist Demon? A former Kiri rank Jonin? One of the 7 ninja swordsmen of Kiri? The Kabikirabocho's owner? Master of water jutsu and stealth? That Momochi from Zabuza?" Kakashi nodded as Naruto yelled. Naruto laughed sheepishly when the Jonin remarked, "You seem well informed about him." The blonde acknowledged, "Master taught me a bit about Kiri's famed 7, and I also kind of like famous swordsmen." Kakashi shook his head and returned to the subject at hand. "Anyway, this is an A-rank mission with someone of Zabuza's caliber on the job." The man looked at Tazuna and said, "I'd like to help, but we are not equipped for this mission. Genin are not supposed to touch any A-rank missions until they have at least a few years of experience under their belts. We must return to Konoha in order to get reinforcements. Why not call for reinforcements from here and just keep moving forward? As Kakashi turned to face him and produced his Pactio card, Naruto questioned, remember how I mentioned that I could telepathically communicate with Master using this? He looked at Tazuna and said, we have to help him sensei. I'll just get in touch with her and get her to tell Hokage-sama everything so he'll send people. What Gato is doing isn't right. Kakashi scoffed at the demon on the inside, pretending to care, but on the outside, he nodded his head, allowing Naruto to notify his master and the Hokage. The boy smiled and moved a few feet away, then put the card to his head and spoke to what appeared to be nothing. At one point, he even paled dramatically before shaking it off and explaining their predicament. After a brief farewell, he walked back over. All right. Kakashi nodded and turned to face Sasuke and Hinata after Naruto responded. Master said she'd alert Hokage-sama and make him send help. Want to return to Konoha or continue on together, both of you? Sasuke sneered at his question. Hinata nervously tapped her fingers together before turning to face Tazuna and nodding. I say we go. Well, that was to be expected. Our right is N. Naruto-san. The Jonin sighed and straightened up once more. Gato N needs tea to be stopped. All right, then resuming your position will allow us to continue. You are to reinforce Kakashi and his genin in defending the client from you arrive. Hand Kakashi this scroll as well so he knows I sent you, and with orders to tell the client we will be working out a payment plan for lying to us about the mission when it's all finished. The woman said, got it Hokage-sama. Sarutobi nodded, picked up the scroll, and walked away, stopping briefly at her apartment to gather some supplies before making her way to the main gate via the rooftops. She was only a few buildings away from her destination when a hand appeared out of her shadow and grabbed her leg to hold her in place. What the hell? She yelled, but everything went dark as she was dragged into the shadows. When the light returned, she discovered that she was in an empty room with a blonde woman in a black gothic-style dress in front of her. She was about to assume a combat stance when the woman snapped her fingers, freezing her. Don't worry, I won't harm you. I simply needed to get in touch with you before you left, and if I had actually run out after you, I wouldn't have arrived in time. What do you want, and who are you? A little assistance is what I need, but my name is irrelevant at the moment. You are the only backup. The old monkey is sending my apprentice and his team, so you are the only one who can help. Hitaki is your apprentice, right? The blonde shook her head and frowned as she asked. No, it's one of the genin. He is actually my godson as well as my apprentice. Before turning around and picking up something, she explained. He contacted me with the request for backup and I told Sarutobi now all I want you to do is carry her with you. She will take care of anything else that is required. Her? The blonde turned around holding up a small green doll with large eyes in a black dress and held her out to her. A doll? Really? What? The green-haired doll sighed as the woman's eyes widened in shock at its speech. Master, are you sure you need me to be carried by her? I know I don't look like much lady, but if y'all want I could start stabbing y'all. How come you can't just port me like you did to bring her here? Because my magic cannot leave the village for such spells because of the seal. However, we're stuck with just sending you power because that's within the allowances. Our shinobi is here to take you to Naruto because you need a guide because you don't know how to get there. Get back up. Whoa, I didn't promise to do it. You kidnap and surprise me first, then you somehow freeze me, and now you want me to do you a favor? As the temperature seemed to drop and she felt as though she would die in the most ruthless and humiliating way possible for another word, the blonde raised an eyebrow at her backtalk and then grinned. Lady, your people skills suck shit. I like that you're spunky. However, I didn't really say that you now had a choice, did I? Now you're going to bring my servant with you to my apprentice and his team, and you're going to do so willingly, she said, leaning in and placing Chachazero on her shoulder with one hand while teasingly tapping her cheek with the other. If not, I'll only let you leave now since I prefer Naruto to return here without incident. When you return, however, I will show you nightmares you never imagined existed, atrocities that humanity lost centuries ago, and things that will leave you permanently scarred and cause you to cry right there. Before she could react to the blonde's threats, she put a finger to her lips and said, and before you say anything, yes, I know exactly who you are and your history. And I promise that after I'm done, what happened to you will be a lullaby. You get it? The blonde smiled as everything seemed to return to normal and she snapped her fingers again. Everything went black before she found herself sitting on the rooftop where she had been first grabbed, and she shakily got to her feet trying to piece together what happened when she felt the doll poke her cheek. What? She asked, her mind seemingly flashing on images of shadowy figures and blizzards, with her being tortured and in pain throughout. She simply glared down at the doll before continuing her run to the village exit to support Kakashi and his genin, saying, hurry up lady, I want to see Whiskers again. You know that your master is a fucking scary bitch? The doll just nodded on her shoulder as she whispered to it. She is, of course. That's how she earned the moniker Dark Evangel. As the group approached the structure in the small boat they had rented to cross into the country, Naruto gaped, "Wow, that's a big bridge." Tazuna grinned and nodded proudly, and Naruto turned around, grinning as well. "So what are you compensating for, old man?" As he asked, Tazuna instantly fell with a tick mark on his forehead. Sasuke snorted stoically at the blonde's crude humor. Hinata flushed but shook her head, and Kakashi just appeared bored, constantly scanning his surroundings for potential attacks. "All right, now be silent." Zabuza is an expert at killing silently. The blonde and his teammates nodded their heads in agreement, and he became serious about protecting Tazuna. "We may not hear him coming, and we don't need you talking and making it even harder to hear him approach," he said. As the Jonin nodded and the boat pulled up to a small pier, he muttered, "Thanks again for not leaving me behind. This is how my house is. Follow me," he said, pointing ahead of them as he began to move while the ninja formed a basic defensive formation around him. The genin were keeping a close eye on him, with Hinata and Naruto both activating their eyes, and Kakashi using all of his senses to try and locate their assailant in case he was close. "This missed, S-sensei." As they went inside, Hinata said, It's unnatural." Kakashi turned to face her with a curious expression, and Naruto added his own thoughts. When they landed, it was just a simple covering that blurred distant objects, but now it was getting to the point where even though Sasuke was on point only a few feet ahead of him, he could hardly see past the boy. The Jonin took that into consideration as well and motioned for them all to stop after realizing they were correct about it getting thicker. "Yeah, it's full of chakra and it's only been getting thicker as we've gotten further along." "Kirigakure no Jutsu, hidden mist technique," he muttered as it came to him. He was familiar with the jutsu and had seen it before. The user used their chakra to fill the air with water to create a mist in which they could hide if there was a nearby water source, as there was throughout the small nation of Nami. They could draw from the source to thicken the mist. Zabuzas nearby. As the genin positioned themselves around Tazuna, Kakashi gave the order, "Manji formation and stay on your guard." He channeled chakra to his ears, hoping to identify the assassin when he heard something. Something big can be heard by the sound of metal slicing through the atmosphere. Everyone is down. His genin dropped with him as he ducked, and Naruto and Sasuke pulled Tazuna down with them just as he was about to do so. A huge spinning blade flew through the air where the man's head had just been, and it kept spinning until it lodged itself in a nearby tree. The mist cleared enough for them to see that a man was standing on the handle of the blade, looking down on them from above. Well, if it's not the well-known copy ninja." As they all got back up and Kakashi gave the man a fierce look, he mockingly said, "This is an honor." Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the mist. Zabuza had spiky dark hair, a kiri headband tilted to the side of his head, bandages wrapped around his face from his nose to his shoulders, a large leather strap across his chest, light blue arm warmers around his wrists, and blue camouflage patterned pants that led into his shinobi sandals. "I doubt there's any way to avoid this, is there?" he said. "You could hand over the old man." Kakashi just lifted his headband to show off his Sharingan eye. "Or not, to be honest, though, I kind of expected this to happen." "Ya no, you aren't listed as having genin in the bingo book though," the man said before jumping off the blade, pulling it out of the tree at the same time, and landing on his feet at the base of the tree. "I want to see which one of us is better," he said to them. "That's good," he said, pointing out that they must be new before laughing as the mist thickened once more and obscured him as Zabuza gradually increased his intent to kill. Hinata and Sasuke started to tremble a little. "Did you know that there are 8 points in the human body where you can deal a pinpoint fatal blow? It's so much fun to freak out the rookies." His voice reverberated through the mist before Naruto snarled. He asked in jest. He muttered, "This damn mist is too thick for me to see his chakra through." Then an idea occurred to him, and he grinned slowly before opening his palms and saying, "Barakuho Rukeke." Black hole barrier, so that Zabuza wouldn't see. This killing intent is so strong. Hinata thought in terror as her eyes were actively searching the mist for the Kiri Jonin, but she was unable to see past the chakra in the air. "He'll kill us for sure." Her terrified mind screamed before she noticed something happening to the chakra filling the mist. It was slowly being drawn to a point on her left, and when she looked down, she saw that it was being pulled into Naruto's hands and added to his reserves. "Naruto is absorbing the chakra. As he is doing what he can, so I will too." She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and concentrating on finding the stealth specialist. On Naruto's opposite side, Sasuke was equally terrified as Hinata, but unlike her, he had not yet awakened his Sharingan, so he was unable to see what Naruto was doing to try to help. As a result, Sasuke was trying very hard not to shake in fear as his eyes darted back and forth across the landscape. "I cannot die here. I still have to accomplish my goals," he yelled in his head, his hands trembling a little as he held a kunai in his right, but his fear was beginning to overcome him as he started to raise his kunai to his throat as the man turned to look back over his shoulders. Kakashi's voice interrupted. "Don't worry, I'm not going to let you die," he said, allowing Sasuke's anxieties to fade away at the reassurance. "Kakashi, are you certain about that?" The genin had their eyes widen in shock and fear as Zabuza's voice came from directly behind them. They spun around to see Zabuza already swinging his sword down towards Tazuna's neck. "I win." "Myaku Inryoku, Gravity Pulse," Naruto cried on reflex as he tried to grab Tazuna. However, as he hadn't aimed his jutsu, the end result was a blast that went out in all directions with himself at the center. He had only managed to grab Tazuna's hand to keep a hold of him as everyone else, and the mist included, were shoved away by the attack. Hinata and Sasuke were thrown to the ground a few feet away on either side as Kakashi skidded back a couple feet himself, managing to remain standing by channeling chakra to his feet. Zabuza though was thrown back the farthest as Naruto's jutsu had been focused mostly towards his front. Even though he hadn't aimed it, as a result the Kiri Jonin flew back until his back crashed against a tree, cracking it as he let out a grunt of pain and fell to a knee, panting lightly from both the scare and the reflexively used jutsu. Naruto took up position in front of Tazuna as he gave Hinata and Sasuke a quick glance. "Sorry about that, guys, are you okay?" When Naruto had blasted most of the mist back, Hinata simply nodded and turned to face Zabuza. Kakashi glared at the back of Naruto's head for a moment before focusing on Zabuza, whom he considered to be the greater threat. "Fine." Sasuke spat out as he stood up again with a frown. As he prepared a kunai and charged the standing swordsman, Zabuza muttered to himself, "The demon is lucky." I could tell that was reflex and that he protected Tazuna. Zabuza was wondering what Naruto had just done, and he barely noticed Kakashi approaching in time to raise his blade and block the stab. Kakashi twisted into a sidekick, which Zabuza leapt away to avoid, and then swung his sword down on the silver-haired Jonin, who parried with his kunai as the two drew face to face in their weapon lock. "Kakashi, that blonde of yours has a really good trick." As they strained against each other, he growled, "He's just lucky it caught me off guard." Before they could push apart, Kakashi responded, "Yeah, that one has lots of tricks to use." Kakashi tried to kick Zabuza, but the man brought his blade down and used its large flat surface to block before shoving Kakashi back and trying to cut him in half vertically. The Konoha Jonin had only a moment to gasp in shock before he was split in two, but before anyone could say or think anything else, Zabuza had a kunai sticking through his stomach. "Luckily, so do I." Zabuza grunted, "Kawarimi, body replacement," and fell into the water. "Mizu Bunshin, TCH, water clone. He's still out there, so keep an eye out." Zabuza's laughter reverberated around them as Kakashi called out to his students. "You didn't really think it would be that simple, did you? Come on." Kakashi, as Hinata and Sasuke had repositioned themselves around Zabuza by this point, he taunted. Naruto narrowed his eyes and then produced his Pactio card. "Adit." The blonde positioned himself to fight as Zabuza's voice reverberated through the air. He called as the card glowed and disappeared and the 6 handles of his collapsible blades appeared on his sash. Naruto grabbed 2 of them and flicked his wrists to spring the blades out. "Well, those are intriguing now, but tell me, young person, do you really believe you can match blades with one of the world's greatest swordsmen? Why don't you come out of hiding so we know?" Naruto yelled back, straining his Rinnegan in an attempt to locate Zabuza. The man had not yet replenished the clearing with mist after Naruto had blown it away, which all the Konoha ninja were silently grateful for, so his eyes were raking over the trees all around them. Suddenly, Hinata gasped, and they all turned to see where she was looking. The mist cleared further, revealing Zabuza standing on the nearby water with his sword on his back while going through hand seals. "You're a feisty child. I almost feel sorry for you because you will die. Sweden, Jutsu no Suiryuden. Water release. Water dragon projectile technique." He sobbed as a glowing yellow-eyed dragon of water emerged from behind him and charged directly toward the group. Naruto once more responded instinctively, leaping forward with his arms spread wide as his Rinnegan eyes briefly appeared to puzzle. "Keke, Burik Kuho Ru." The dragon struck Naruto head-on, but instead of crushing him, it appeared to shrink and completely disappear into his chest. The only indication that it ever existed was that the boy had become somewhat drenched from the excess water in the jutsu. What the devil? Zabuza was unable to give it much more thought before Kakashi reappeared behind him, trying to hit him with his kunai once more. Naruto turned back to his teammates as the silver-haired Jonin engaged the assassin in close combat. "Do you possess any mid to long-range jutsu, Hinata?" he asked as she shook her head. Damn okay, then what say you, Sasuke? Every time Zabuza gets too far away from sensei, we should shoot him. The blonde offered as the Uchiha grinned at the idea. Returning the grin, both boys ran towards the water's edge as Naruto put away one of his swords and morphed his hand into the mechanical lens he used for his jutsu as Sasuke ran through signs for his own jutsu, Enerugi Taiho. Cannon of Energy. Kaden. Jutsu no Gokakyu. Fire Release. Grand Fireball Technique. Zabuza had barely retreated to gain some space to swing his sword when he and Kakashi both sensed the incoming chakra, and he ducked to avoid it, only to see the fireball trailing behind him. With no other way to avoid the ninja, Zabuza dropped below the water as the burning ball crashed into the spot he had just held, the water instantly becoming unbearably hot and steaming. Zabuza resisted the urge to gasp at the sudden change and let the water rush into his lungs, but as he turned back to the genin, he cursed and ducked underwater once more as another fireball was already approaching him. Hinata had followed him with her Byakugan and had told the boys where he was going to surface. Sweden. Daibakufu no Jutsu. Water Release. Great Waterfall Technique. Damn it. That blonde has some weird as jutsu that I've never seen before. The girl is a Hyuga with their damn all-seeing eyes, and the other brat is going to boil me alive in my own fucking element. Well, hell no. I am not going to be punked by some damn brats. The Jonin raged through hand seals underwater while concentrating on the location of the genin. As Hinata observed Zabuza swimming underwater to evade the boy's jutsu, she informed her teammates, I think he's readying a jutsu. Well, if he is, Sasuke can hit him with another fireball while I simply absorb it once more. Honestly, this is fairly simple fun even, Naruto admitted as he kept his eyes on the lake where his Rinnegan let him know there was a strong chakra under the water. He frowned when he saw the chakra spread to the water and begin to mold it for a technique. Yep, jutsu step back you guys, the blonde commented as he held up his free hand and the other two stepped back, making sure Tazuna stayed behind them as well. Suddenly a large torrent of water came spiraling up before crashing into the ground and rushing them. Seeing the size of the jutsu, Naruto's eyes widened for a second before he brought up his barrier and began to absorb most of the technique. However, the jutsu was wide, so instead of completely taking it in like he had with the dragon, he instead parted it down the middle, his teammates huddling close to single file behind him to avoid getting caught by the twin steams rushing past them that the blonde didn't absorb. Damn, watch him out, Hinata. Does he remain in the water? As the flow started to slow down, Naruto asked, and before the girl could respond, everyone heard a shout. No, I'm not a brat. Zabuza shouted as he came down with his sword raised. Naruto pulled a second blade out quickly and raced both in a cross guard to block the attack, but thanks to both Zabuza's strength and his momentum he was forced down to his knees, barely holding the blade back as it lightly tapped the metal of his headband. And I'm done getting played by a bunch of genin. When the man turned to face Hinata, she gave a little cry of fear, then turned back to Zabuza and assumed her stance. Naruto coughed up blood as Zabuza drove his foot into Naruto's chest and sent him back, knocking Sasuke down as well as he was caught in the blonde's path. Zabuza, forget about me. Kakashi taunted as the Kiri Jonin found himself being kicked hard in the side of the head and sent flying to the side before Zabuza could get back up. He found both shoulders pierced by kunai and Kakashi standing over him with his hand charging Telf with electricity. You should never have taken this mission, Zabuza. Fuck Kakashi. Fuck you. A young masked ninja in a green battle kimono was crouching in a nearby tree when Kakashi released his jutsu and looked up to see a young ninja wearing a mask with the symbol for Kiri at the forehead and a few red waves rising from the bottom. And your brats too, the man gasped, and the Konoha Jonin was about to bring his hand down to pierce Zabuza straight through his head when two Senbon flew out and struck him in the side of his neck. As Kakashi sighed and covered his eye with his headband once more, the gentle-sounding ninja apologized. My apologies, Konoha-san, for taking the kill, but I had been tracking Zabuza for some time now, and when I saw the chance I took it. Hinata also deactivated her Byakugan as Sasuke and Naruto staggered back to their feet, the blonde holding his stomach as he silently put his swords away and put his Pactio card away. With another sigh, the Jonin got back up and began to walk back towards his genin and client. That's fine, Hunter-san, Kakashi said before squatting down to check Zabuza's pulse and finding nothing. Well, we'll let you do your job then, the man said dismissively as the hunter lowered himself and picked up Zabuza's body. My thanks for wearing him down, Konoha-san. The ninja then disappeared in a swirl of water, taking Zabuza and his sword with him. However, Kakashi narrowed his eye at the newly vacated spot because something was bothering him in the back of his mind. For the time being, he ignored it and focused on his genin instead. Well, All three of you are doing well. Before turning to face Naruto, he complimented him, saying, you worked together wonderfully and held off Zabuza with excellent combinations. How are the ribs? As Naruto grimaced and kept holding one arm to his stomach as though cradling them, he asked flatly. He answered, hurting, but I don't think anything's broken. Then, as he attempted to inhale deeply, a sharp pain shot through his body, causing him to cough. God. He complained as Kakashi grunted. He hit as hard as Master did that time. She forgot to hold back. Well, think of it as karma for hitting you teammates with that jutsu of yours. I apologized. To be honest, I did it out of reflex. Either way, don't let it happen again. The blonde whispered, yes sensei. Kakashi merely nodded and assumed command of their group. All right, then if you could point us in the direction of your house, Tazuna, we'll resume transporting you there securely. Oh, I see this way, the man began, startled that after such a battle, ninja bodyguards were returning to what was considered normal. The man had been on the verge of a heart attack several times in the last few minutes due to how close he had come to death in such quick movements, and it had been humbling to watch the kids do what they had done. Since when could children use powers beyond comprehension in life or death battles? I'm home, Tsunami, and these are the awesome ninja that protected me, he exclaimed as Kakashi and the genin came in behind him. Tazuna called as he opened the door to his house, and a woman with long hair and a sweet smile emerged from the kitchen. Kakashi nodded slightly and said, hello ma'am. The woman gave her father a hug and bowed courteously to the ninja. As she straightened, she noticed Naruto holding his stomach and said, thank you for protecting my father. Oh, are you okay? The boy nodded his head and gave her a slightly forced smile as she asked, if I get some sleep, I'll be fine. I heal fast. Of course this was not the right thing to say to a mother as her maternal instincts kicked in and she ushered him instantly into a chair as she went to get her first aid kit. Really? I'll be okay. He whined as she came back and asked him to lift his shirt. She simply stared down at him with the look. It was the stern look all mothers knew, the one that would make their children obey instantly. Now while Naruto never had a mother, the look was a powerful thing. He sat defiant for a few seconds before lowering his head and raising his shirt up. Tsunami gained a victorious smirk before she started checking him over. Naruto heard snickering off to the side and glanced over to see Sasuke smirking and Hinata giggling lightly behind her hand. Traitors. Sasuke grunted, still grinning, we don't know what you're talking about Naruto. Hinata just continued to laugh. Naruto crossed his arms and started muttering to himself before Tsunami jabbed him in the ribs. Ow. Sit still please, she admonished, getting Hinata to giggle again. Naruto just pouted at the treatment as a young boy walked in. Unknowingly echoing his grandfather, he called, Mom, I'm home. The boy approached and was about to give his mother a hug when he noticed the ninja and how his mother was bandaging someone's stomach. After finishing with Naruto, Tsunami turned and gave the boy a hug, which he returned before returning to staring at the ninja. Tsunami introduced, Hinata nodded courteously, Sasuke grunted, and Naruto waved a little and grinned as he lowered his shirt. Oh, Inari, these are the ninja your grandfather hired to protect him while he finishes the bridge. They ought to simply return home, he said to her. They'll just die otherwise, as though it were well known and everyone knew it. The others' reactions varied. Tsunami and Tazuna sighed, knowing what had made him this way. Sasuke and Kakashi frowned, Hinata gasped at his demeanor, and Naruto stood up and glared down at the boy. Why do you say that, child? We have already defeated a few assassins who were pursuing your grandfathers. Why do you suppose we will perish? The boy merely frowned as he asked. Because nobody can beat Gato, and if you think you can, then you deserve to die. Before leaving for his room upstairs, he shouted, and his family both sighed again at his attitude. Tsunami waved her hand slightly ahead of her to signal that they should follow her upstairs, and she led them into a spare room that she claimed was theirs for the duration of their stay. Apologizing that they didn't have another to give them more space, Kakashi assured her that it was enough, and she nodded, saying that dinner would be ready soon. The Jonin then turned to his genin. Alright, let's start with the basics. Well done for going out there earlier. Zabuza is not someone to be taken lightly, so holding your own as well as you three did is an accomplishment. He praised, mainly looking at Hinata and Sasuke. Now, as for our actual plans during our time here. Tazuna is not allowed to be by himself when he leaves the house for any reason. Outside of this household, one of us will always be by his side, the man commanded, his genin nodding. Next, training. It doesn't matter if it's a simple run into town for groceries or going to work on the bridge. Since ninjas are trained to rise early, we might as well use that extra time in the morning to prepare you for anything else Gato might send after Tazuna. Although the training will be gentle enough that you can still defend Tazuna in an emergency, it will be rigorous enough to be beneficial, the man added, considering his plans. Plus, I'm pretty sure you don't know what I plan to teach you, and it's a useful skill to know. The Jonin narrowed his eye and nodded when Naruto said, Sensei, I've got a question. Well, it's been bothering me ever since our encounter, but protecting Tazuna was more important, so I didn't mention it. Zabuza's body was taken away by that hunter, correct? Are the hunter protocols of Kiri and Konoha different, then? I mean, our hunters are expected to burn the body on the spot after severing the head. Does Kiri approach things in a different way? When the hunter left, Kakashi's eyes widened as he realized what the little nagging had been about. Naruto asked. Oh no, Kiri doesn't do things differently, he said, cursing as the three students became immediately alarmed at what it meant. Hunters, regardless of their village allegiance, are expected to do the same thing everywhere. Therefore, that person was not a hunter at all. Zabuza remains dead, though you verified it by checking his pulse yourself. That's accurate, Hinata, but a proficient ninja can use pressure points to temporarily kill someone and then bring them back to life. It is even more likely that the hunter was Zabuza's accomplice, given that the hunter used Senbon needles, which are not intended for killing. Looks like I'm going to have to push you harder than I thought, Kakashi cautioned them, which means he might be alive to come back and try again. The three genin were standing in front of Kakashi the following morning, in the woods close to Tazuna's house. Alright you three, he began, the skill I'm going to teach you is a chakra control exercise that will also become a crucial part of your shinobi careers later in life. I'm going to teach you to climb trees. The three teenagers gave him perplexed looks as he turned around and headed for a tree. Without hands, he continued as he ascended the tree without stopping. Hinata was tapping her fingers nervously, Naruto was just bored, and Sasuke appeared somewhat intrigued. By channeling chakra to your feet, you can provide the stick needed to walk up vertical surfaces and even walking upside down when needed. Theoretically, you can master any jutsu by performing this exercise and the ones that follow, as the feet are the hardest part of the body to channel chakra to. The Jonin explained this while standing upside down on a branch and observing his students. As Sasuke and Hinata gazed at him, Naruto called out, Sensei, I already know this. Oh, the blonde shrugged and walked up another tree with his hands in his pockets until he was upside down like the Jonin, as Kakashi had instructed, then demonstrate. As if standing upside down were no big deal, Naruto explained, Master taught me this when I was 7. She also taught me water walking after I could fight on a vertical surface as well as I could normally, so I know the next step too. I see, Kakashi sighed as Hinata timidly added, Sensei, I've also learned this exercise already. I can do this to my clan standards, but haven't started the next step yet. Alright Sasuke, and I will remain here and assist him with the exercise. Hinata and Naruto nodded as the white-haired man explained, you two can go and he can show you water walking. The blonde then cut the chakra flow and flipped down to his feet, and the two left while Sasuke was growling in the back of his throat. Kakashi threw a kunai between his feet, saying, don't get so angry. One has received private instruction since the age of 5, while the other has the support of her entire clan. You would have at least gotten this step down like Hinata has, I'm sure, if your clan had survived. However, that's the reason I decided to stay with you rather than go with Hinata. We'll meet them at the water after I give you what you need to catch up in this area, using that kunai to record your progress each time you fall. Channel chakra to your feet and ascend the tree, the man said. It's best to get a running start when you're first learning it. Sasuke narrowed his eyes at a tree, picked up the kunai, flipped it in his hand into reverse grip, focused his chakra, and charged it. Kakashi wondered what else Naruto's master had taught him while he worked. Alright, Hinata, in that you can channel your chakra to your feet, water walking is identical to tree walking. As he stepped off the pier onto the water and stopped 5 feet away, Naruto explained, only now you have to constantly monitor the chakra flow to go with the flow of the water beneath you. Too much chakra and you'll be pushing yourself off the water, which if done correctly can lead to skating on the water, something master taught me about and said was good for high-speed battles on water. However, if you do too little, you'll simply sink into the water, just as Zabuza did when I and Sasuke fired a fireball and laser combo at him. If you'd like, you can practice the skating trick later. Let's just concentrate on walking for the time being. Try to contact me by channeling your chakra, okay? Naruto finished, so Hinata nodded and placed her hands in the ram seal for a focus and was about to start when Naruto remembered something. Oh, wait, you may want to remove your jacket and other clothing. You'll get soaked if you fall in, and I doubt you want to wear wet clothes all day. Hinata thought about it and nodded as it made sense before something else occurred to her and she blushed. she'd have to take off her jacket at the very least, which meant showing off her rather well-grown chest. Part of the reason she wore the baggy jacket was because she wanted to hide how her body had already matured somewhat more than other girls her age, partially because unlike the Uchiha-obsessed classmates she had, Hinata didn't diet but ate a healthy mix of foods ensuring proper growth. Had the girls known Hinata was stacked, so to speak, they might have mocked her for it, or asked for how she got that way. But with her shy personality, she had wanted to avoid all of that and started wearing a large coat to hide her figure. Now Naruto was asking her to take the jacket off, which would let him see the only reason she didn't faint from the idea was because it was obvious there was no perverted reasoning behind the advice, it just made sense. Another thing that occurred to her was that if she fell into the water and got wet, clothes would hug her figure even more. The boy may not have any perverted notions in his mind, but that didn't mean he wouldn't get any from seeing her. He was at that age after all. Going over all of that in her head, Hinata sighed and began to unzip her jacket slowly, realizing that getting the technique down mattered more than hiding her figure. Besides, it wasn't like she was getting naked or even stripping her shirt off. After setting her jacket down next to her, revealing she wore a short-sleeved black V-cut shirt underneath, Hinata again channeled chakra to her feet and hesitatingly took a step down onto the water. When her foot began to sink into the cool liquid, she pulled back and increased the chakra flow before setting her foot back down. This time it stayed so, pushing the same amount into the other foot. She stepped down completely. The girl wobbled on her feet for a second and went to take another step when a breeze blew through, rippling the water and making her current chakra flow insufficient. Hinata let out a gasp as her feet slipped underwater before she lost control and fell in, entirely breaking the surface. Let her know Naruto was chuckling as he walked over and grabbed her hand. With a grunt of effort he lifted her out of the water and sat her back onto the pier with her calves still dangling in the water. The blonde told her, still laughing at her failure, "Yeah, that'll happen a lot at first. Just be glad this water is only a little cold," he said. Master made me attempt to walk on ice when she gave me this task. As Hinata shivered at the thought, he smiled and took another step back, saying, "I'm not going to be that mean though. One slip and I was shivering and could hardly think, but she just told me to get up and try again. Go ahead and take your time. We'll go through some exercises until you can stand without difficulty, okay?" After nodding and getting back up, Hinata refocused her chakra and returned to the water. A few hours later, after Hinata had fallen in several more times, Naruto was sitting on the pier while the girl took unsteady steps in a circle on the water, not wanting to go too far out so that if she fell in, it wouldn't take her so long to reach the pier again and pull herself out to restart. Naruto was also having a conversation with Hinata to teach her how to distract herself from the real world without falling in, and Master was yelling at me for hours afterward. She also made me endure some rather severe training as a form of discipline. Hinata stammered out, that doesn't sound versus very nice na Naruto." The blonde simply shook his head and grinned, her stuttering worse than usual from trying to concentrate on staying atop the water and from being cold from being soaked. It was merely a harmless joke. In addition, Zero-chan found it amusing to see Master with green hair for a week. He acknowledged this as Hinata paused and looked up to him to say something before her eyes widened and Naruto sensed something was wrong. Suddenly, he leapt off the pier onto the water, spinning around as he did, causing Hinata to lose concentration and fall into the water. He was fortunate to move because a big butcher knife had now been stabbed into the wood where he was sitting. "Oh, once more, I missed hello, Whiskers." As Hinata pulled herself back to the water's surface, Chachezero cheered as she extracted the knife from the wood and grinned broadly at him. Naruto was preoccupied with staring at the doll, stunned by her unexpected attack as well as wondering how she got there in the first place. "How in the world are you here, Zero-chan? Holy shit, Dolly. I didn't think you'd actually do it." The genin's attention was drawn to a woman with purple hair pulled into a spiky ponytail behind her head and pupilless amber eyes. Her outfit, however, attracted more attention due to how small it was. She was wearing an orange miniskirt, Anbu-style leg guards, and an open tan trench coat with a mesh shirt underneath that was the only thing covering her well-developed chest. "Hubby-chan, I promised to try to stab him." "Yeah, but I thought you were just talking shit." Zero-chan really does mean it when she says she wants to stab someone. That's how crazy she is. The doll simply nodded wisely in agreement with Naruto's assessment as he yelled at the woman, "Who the hell are you anyway?" Before jabbing a thumb at herself, the woman stopped spinning the kunai and flicked it at the blonde, causing him to lean aside as it flew by. As Naruto helped Hinata out of the water and onto the pier, Chachezero was sitting with her small legs hanging over the edge and bouncing her head back and forth as if listening to some music that only she could hear. "I'm Enko Mitarashi Kid, Special Jonin and second in command at Konoha INT. she introduced herself, and oddly, the knife she had just moments earlier was gone, leaving no evidence that it had ever been there except for the hole in the pier where she missed Naruto. INT, the blonde asked with a small tilt of his head as he recalled what Evangeline had taught him about the group in Konoha's forces, interrogation and torture. Why is there a member of that group in Nami? And with Zero-chan, Naruto continued, looking down at the doll, who merely waved cheekily and continued to bounce her head. I'm your backup child. Naruto was sitting on the pier between Hinata and Chachezuru when she explained, and that freaky chick of a godmother of yours caught me before I left and asked me to bring Dolly here down to you for some reason. Oh, my first real mission, and Master doesn't even trust me. Did she send you down to keep me safe? The little knife lover shook her head, but she was still grinning normally, and Naruto groaned as he looked down at the doll. No, Master has faith in you. However, Zabuza Momochi is your opponent. She wasn't sure you were ready for someone like him, despite how wonderful you are. But Zabuza was already driven away by us as Anko moved up behind him and placed a hand on his shoulder to get him to look up at her. Naruto noted, maybe even killed him. We're still not sure yet. She had a serious expression on her face when she mentioned fighting the A-rank missing ninja. What? Where's Kakashi? Kid, I have to catch up with him and let him know I'm here. Hinata pointed to the woods where they had previously come from and said, he's helping Sasuke-san learn tree walking over that way. Alright, thanks, sweetie. Perhaps you two should get ready and return. Anko said, I'm pretty sure he'll have new orders for you after we talk. They nodded, and she disappeared in a Shunshin body flicker, to go talk to the silver-haired Jonin. Naruto sighed but got up, grabbing Eva's doll and placing her on his head, which was her favorite spot. Alright, Hinata, get your jacket. We'll return to the house to wait for Sensei and Sasuke while you dry off. Furthermore, Tazuna ought to be preparing for work by now. As the two began to walk back to their client's house, Hinata nodded in agreement and picked up her jacket, but she didn't put it on yet because she was still wet. Instead, she held it over her arm. Perhaps there will be breakfast as well. So you've already engaged in combat with Zabuza Whiskers. That's awesome. Give me the play-by-play, please. What about his sword? Was it as large and sharp as the photos showed? Naruto smiled and started to describe how the four of them had repelled the demon of the mist when the doll asked. After speaking with the woman, Kakashi began, well then, with Anko here I can relax a bit and change my plans for the day. His genin, Hinata still drenched and Naruto still holding Chachezuru on his head, stood in front of him. Anko will scout around town for any info that can be useful in protecting Tazuna, Kakashi said. If things worsen, we'll actually go after Gato and eliminate him. While the remaining two members of our group guard Tazuna today, I will remain here with Sasuke to assist him with tree walking. We'll meet you at the bridge once Sasuke has mastered this exercise. You get it? He asked as his genin nodded. Good, you two might want to go back now since Tazuna should be awake and getting ready. Anko will go with you to introduce herself and learn about our current residents before she heads out on her mission. The woman sighed, but she began to follow the two as they departed. Kakashi had asked Anko about the doll Naruto now possessed, and all she had told him was that she had been grabbed by the boy's godmother/master before leaving and instructed to bring it to him. The doll was also alive and powered by something other than chakra, a power that isn't chakra. Why does that sound familiar? As they made their way to the building, Anko began, alright kiddies, let's make one thing clear. I ain't gonna be polite and I ain't gonna even try and hold myself back if the old fuck tries hitting on me. Before continuing, I simply rip into their flesh and maybe their ego, the woman told them. Warn him in advance if you guys don't want a maimed client on your hands. Hinata was taken aback, and Naruto raised an eyebrow in perplexity. Hubby-chan, you have my undying affection. The woman laughed, and Chachezuru cheered, can I watch if you start cutting this guy? Lovely, with blood on top. As Naruto snatched her from his head, Hinata shuddered at the images the doll conjured up. Zero-chan. The client's grandson is only about 7 or 8 years old. I don't mind if you want to talk or not, but please don't get into the gory stuff like you do at home, he begged, but the doll shook her head while continuing to smile. He's already depressing enough as it is without you actually giving him nightmares and crap. I don't promise anything. I'm not scared to admit that I enjoy stabbing. Hinata went pale at this point and moved away from Naruto, who was holding the doll, while Anko burst out laughing. I adore this tiny item. Is it possible for your master to create a similar one? I'd like one. No, I take great pride in being unique. Some weak little wannabe sister is not what I want. Before Naruto could respond, the doll yelled, and Anko pouted before snatching her from the blonde's hand and placing her on her own shoulder. I'll just take you in that scenario. The original is right here, so why buy a copy? Naruto and Hinata exchanged a look as Chachezuru started arguing with Anko about how her master wouldn't let her go, a discussion that inexplicably veered off topic to discuss the best knives for skinning a victim while they were still alive. Is this how the D-doll always looks? Naruto hung his head and sighed as she asked. Yes, unfortunately. The response is yes. She scared me just by talking. When I first met her, she then made fun of me by saying she had nothing to attack me with when I was a little too shy to approach. She was playing with my head like that when I was only 5 years old. She's been a problem for me for the past 7 years. The little doll is a real threat, but I love her like a sister. The boy complained, and Hinata, unsure of what to do, merely gave him an awkward pat on the back. The three arrived at the bridge, where Tazuna immediately went to work with his men while Naruto and Hinata stood off to the side and watched. Naruto said, "You know, we are near some water. You could probably get some more water walking training in while I keep an eye on Tazuna." Hinata shook her head in response to Naruto's brief warning not to hit on Anko and to stay away from Chachezuru. "I left my towel back at the house. In addition, shouldn't I stay here so that we're both prepared in case something goes wrong?" After giving it some thought, Naruto nodded his head. "And what if I got into trouble during training? I wouldn't have any assistance because you would be up here." Naruto told her to stop thinking along those lines, saying, "Actually, I would have sent a clone with you. I actually can make real flesh and blood clones of myself instead of the illusionary ones the academy teaches too, so they would have been able to help you." Hinata looked surprised, but he just nodded her understanding without saying anything else. After a moment, however, Naruto frowned and said, "Come to think of it, I should probably get some training of my own in too. But you already know how to walk on trees and in water." Sensei stated, "He wouldn't be able to help you much with your eyes. And mentioning my clones has given me the perfect idea to work on." He snapped back, saying, "I know, but I still think I should get some kind of training in." Without providing an explanation, he made a cross with his fingers. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Shadow clone technique," he called out as a copy of himself appeared in a puff of smoke. And both Naruto and the clone grimaced slightly, with the clone turning around and positioning itself at another part of the bridge to keep watch. Hinata was perplexed, looking from the original next to her to the clone. How is this instruction going?" As he grimaced once more, she added, If that's alright to ask." Naruto briefly considered telling her, but decided that, as another dojutsu user, even though their eyes were different, she might have some insight. "Well, let me start by asking you, what is the main issue that all dojutsu practitioners encounter when they are first learning how to use their eyes?" he inquired while Hinata paused to reflect. "Or enhanced sight. Usually hurts the mind at first because we're taking in so much more than normal. That's right, until we get used to it. Our unique eyes give us headaches from seeing too much." The blonde added thoughtfully to their other teammate, "Normally, if you make a clone, then there's no problem. You and the clone just have to deal with what you see, and that's that. The Sharingan faces this too, so Sasuke will know what we're talking about when he awakens his own eyes." Hinata attempted to piece together what Naruto was referring to, but he interrupted, rubbing his eyes once more, saying, "But I have to deal with more, and multiple clones would only make my problem worse." "Are you able to see what your clone sees?" he smiled as she asked. "I see everything my clone can see, and they see what I do in turn." Naruto nodded in response. "Got it. In one. The drawback of this is that the human mind isn't designed to process this much information. Chakra is a great tool for helping people transcend their natural boundaries, but even in that case, they can only gradually improve without breaking. I can't even create a single clone at the moment without getting a headache. I don't use my clones very often because my headache is so bad right now that I'm sure it would throw me off too much in a fight. I know I can create more clones, so it's kind of a bummer. I created about 100 clones in a straightforward test with the master before I woke the Rinnegan. However, the stress of seeing so much put me in a coma for a week in a row when I did it again after my eyes activated." He remembered that because it had actually scared Eva at first, as he had literally just called out the jutsu when him and all his clones screamed in pain, clutching their heads before dropping and dispelling the real Naruto unconscious from it. Eva had taken him to bed and sent for Danzo and the best medic the man had at his disposal. When the medic proclaimed that he was physically fine, Eva had been confused, which prompted Danzo to ask what had happened. She explained, and the man had told his ninja to do a very thorough check of the boy's eyes and mind, which gave them the answers. The nerves relating to sight were very nearly fried from sensory overload, while his mind was heavily bruised from the strain. That's what had given them the idea that somehow his clones had something to do with his new sight and the coma they caused. When he had finally woken up and been cleared to train again the next day, Eva and Danzo asked him to make a single clone to see what effects it would have. The result was a major headache that left the boy so drained he actually asked to ditch training that day for a nap, but also explained exactly what had happened. Both his teachers had shied away from any clone usage since, other than the occasional notice for him to try and master his newfound ability in time. That is absolutely awful. The only time the Byakugan has ever caused something like that is one time in the C clan's history they tried to get a 2-year-old to activate his eyes, Hinata sobbed, refocusing Naruto's thoughts. However, the child was only unconscious for a day at that point. Yes, I suppose that stronger eyes translate into stronger retaliation. Although the headache is still a significant drawback, consider the advantages. If I had a clone out and we were able to see each other, what could I do? As she considered it, he asked, I could have the clone cover my blind spots in a fight so that I can see all around myself in the battlefield, he said before she could respond. I could dispatch the clone to spy on a target and provide my superiors with real-time information. I could collaborate with my clone to launch precisely timed attacks that would be more effective than ever working with a partner. Imagine now that I could manage multiple clones simultaneously. What good would it do if I had said at 4 clones? That would provide me with 5 perspectives to exploit. Every clone would put more mental strain on me, but if I could overcome that, I would gain a greater advantage, Naruto said, her eyes widening at the prospect. That's incredible. Yes, but I'm going to have to take it slow because the one hurts so much right now. I'm receiving some training because the sooner I can manage only having 2 perspectives in my mind, the sooner I can practice fighting like this. Even though all I'm doing at the moment is having a clone watch a different section of the bridge than us. Naruto grinned and rubbed his eyes once more, saying, then I'll work on another clone and just rinse and repeat until I have my limit, but that's a long ways off. Ow. You'll see some really entertaining stuff if you just keep quiet, Dolly. Chachezero nodded and remained silent as Anko used a simple henge transformation to disguise herself as a simple civilian girl. She had picked this street because it had a bar 3 buildings down that was full of thugs having a good time, and the bartender was cowering behind the counter. It was obvious that the men were with Gato, and the tender was only serving them out of fear by passing herself off as a pretty but plain girl. A couple of the drunks might get the idea to grab her for some fun, in which case she would go so far as to get somewhere private before knocking them out and dragging them off and enjoying herself. Numerous people had told her that she loved her work as a specialist in torture and interrogation too much. It was entirely reasonable that a young girl would be afraid around thugs like these, so it wouldn't raise any suspicions, and the woman had to conceal her smirk as Anko shuffled past the windows, discreetly keeping an eye inside to see if she was noticed. 3 of the men were getting up to leave, and whether they noticed her or not, they would once they were outside because she would, accidentally, fall in place scared to grab their attention. That was the plan, anyway. Until she was startled by a stray cat that ran out from the side of the building, causing her to stumble back and actually trip. She was already weighing the advantages and disadvantages of hunting down and skinning the cat when she heard the thugs talking behind her, and landing on her rear in a huff, barely able to focus enough to keep her hinge up. What have we got here, then? One inquired. Another slurred out, looks like tonight's entertainment. Boss. Anko tensed up appropriately as she made sure to quickly get back into her act. Large, terrified eyes, check. Tense, slightly trembling body, check. And finally, the terrified over-the-shoulder glance that always gets stupid thugs. With her flawless acting, this was by no means the first time Anko had pulled this prank. Please no, she stammered out as she had a good look at her new friends for the evening. 2 of them looked like twins, with short brown hair and dark eyes, while the last one was bald and had bright green eyes. Either he wasn't drunk and was playing the role of responsible, which meant that he was likely assigned some sort of responsibility in Gato's work here in Nami, or he held his liquor well, but either way, it wasn't something a trained special jonin like her couldn't handle. They laughed before the bald one stepped up and grabbed her by her hair to get her to her feet, which was a little painful, but she felt worse. Anko weakly kicked and screamed as her part required, and the man released his grip on her hair before grabbing her hands and holding them behind her back with his own. She a looker, boss. The boss of the trio simply laughed and kept her arms pinned with one hand while tilting her head up to his with the other. Since he was a little taller than her, he smiled and then slammed his lips down on hers to kiss her, much to the amusement of the other 2, while Anko continued her token resistance while he pulled back and roughly groped one of her breasts. Oh yeah, we go a beaut tonight, said the twins. How about we show our friend home and enjoy ourselves, boys? As they passed the alley, Anko kept Chachezero in the woman's act while she started begging them not to just have the man pick her up and throw her on his shoulder to carry her back with the other two. She was able to use her disguised form so quickly that she was able to hit the man carrying her in the back of the neck with enough force to knock him out, and he fell to the ground, dropping her too, but she was ready and landed in a slight roll that put her directly between the twins. Anko jumped to her feet, grabbed both by the heads, and banged them together to knock them out as well, dragging the three men into the alley and tying them up with metal wire. "Dolly, do you like the show?" Anko asked as she let go of her hench, picked up all three men at once with a chakra surge, and put the living doll on her head to carry. "Hubby-chan, there was no blood." As Anko laughed, the doll grumbled. "Don't worry, friend, it was time to learn more about Gato's plans," so the two of them started laughing together as Anko crept into the woods. Naruto and Hinata were following Tazuna back to his house when he complained, "Guard duty is so boring." Naruto smiled while the elderly man moaned, "Well, sorry, construction work isn't exciting enough for a ninja." "Don't worry about it," as Tazuna nodded in agreement. Hinata said, "Boring is usually a good thing since it means nothing bad happened." "Well, I hope it remains dull, indicates that everything is going well at work and that Gato is not having any issues." "Yeah, I guess," Naruto muttered as his thoughts turned to what might happen if Zabuza actually survived. The man had been hired to kill Tazuna, so if he was actually alive, he would attack them as soon as he was combat ready. Since they had already discovered his potential accomplice with the hunter ninja, he wouldn't bother keeping them in reserve to kill him again for a rescue. Instead, he would use their talents in the battle, and that was only if Zabuza was the only person they had already failed. Hinata said, "I wonder how Sasuke-sanai is doing with his tea training." She noticed that Naruto appeared to be lost in thought over the Gato issue, so she changed the topic. The blonde quickly brought his thoughts back to the present before shrugging his shoulders and putting his hands behind his head. "I don't know, but I'm willing to wager that he has already achieved success and is merely trying to make it a habit." As they arrived at their client's house, Naruto remarked, "Just being able to reach the top doesn't mean it comes easily yet. He's got to be able to do it at a moment's notice before he can claim to have mastered the skill." Both Naruto and Hinata saw Inari glaring at them before going upstairs to his own room, while Tazuna went to the kitchen where his daughter was. "I'm back, Tsunami." Not taking her eyes off the food she was preparing, she replied, "Dinner will be ready soon." Since there was nothing else to do, Naruto went back outside to the porch while Hinata sat at the table. The blonde merely looked around before heading out to the nearby pier to sit down, just like he had done that morning when he was teaching Hinata how to walk on water before Chachezero and Anko arrived. "I have to admit, it's a pleasant location. It must have been even better before Gato started screwing it over," the blonde thought as he closed his eyes and relaxed. He had nothing to do until Kakashi or Anko returned with orders, so he was going to take some time to unwind. However, that was not to be when he heard footsteps and turned around to see Anko approaching with Chachezero perched on her shoulder. Both of them had the same smile on their faces as Anko spun a kunai by its ring and Chachezero appeared to have a tiny red spot in her hair. "Hi, Blondie the Cyclops are where? I have some information to share," she inquired. "Well, since he's not in the house, I assume he's in that same clearing or one close by." He pointed to Chachezero and said, "Why is there a red spot on her hair?" Tazuna and Hinata are inside with Tsunami and Inari just waiting on dinner. Before he grabbed the doll and held her in front of her eyes, he asked Anko to blink. "I guess I overlooked a bloodstain," before tossing the little death lover to the blonde. She said, "Sorry there, Dolly, I ain't cleaning her up anymore." Blonde and the doll said their goodbyes to Anko as the woman departed, and Naruto dipped his hand in the water below before raising it to rub the blood out of the doll's hair. "You take care of that while I go talk with your sensei, kid." "You got bloody, then. Am I truly interested in learning how?" As Naruto cleaned her, the doll briefly humped. Naruto's eye twitched, but he remained silent. "Well, since you're still such a squeamish baby, I guess I can spare ya the big details." It wasn't that he was squeamish. Rather, it was her insane obsession with gore of any kind. Hubby-chan tricked some slimeballs into following her, thinking they'd get laid or whatever, before she went all ninja on them and knocked them out. She then began torturing them after tying them up and dragging them into the woods. It was also a lot of fun to watch. "I'm going to ask Master if I can watch a couple more of those when we get back, especially since Hubby-chan is working." Naruto rolled his eyes and interrupted her because he could predict what would happen next. Either Anko indulged the doll and intentionally made it bloody for kicks, or Anko's methods were rather bloody and some spilled on the doll. In any case, he no longer needed or desired to hear. "You got to see Anko at work," and it seems that she had some information worth sharing. A little blood spilled on you, at least one of us found today amusing. Working as a guard is boring. Zero-chan, understatement of the year. I'll be damned before I like it, even though I know that boring is a good thing. I'm an active man. Let me loose and give me a target. Knowing exactly what he meant, Naruto yelled, "This waiting stuff just irritates the hell out of me." After checking the doll's hair to make sure the area had been cleaned, he placed her on his shoulder and sat at the pier, waiting for Anko to return with Kakashi and Sasuke. So, without either of us present to bother her, what do you think Master is doing? Naruto raised an eyebrow in contemplation before shaking his head in response to Chachizuro's question. Dunno, probably something boring like sleeping. Knowing her. I win again, pervert. Evangeline, how in the world do you always come out on top? As he gazed down at the go board between them, Jiraiya snarled. It turned out that Eva was not sleeping, but rather repeatedly defeating the Gamma Sennin at whatever game he selected. The poor man had been traumatized and would never again touch cards if his life depended on it, so he wasn't stupid enough to choose strip poker after Minato told him what had happened after he played that with her and Kushina. A couple of reasons. First, I'm superior to you two, I'm more experienced than you three, you're just awful, and fourth, I'm superior to you. You said that twice. It needed to be repeated. The Lolita smirked in response. Jiraiya had arrived earlier this morning, and after reporting to Sarutobi with some news, he sneaked off to Eva's cottage to check in on Naruto and share some news with her. It was nice to learn that the boy was on his first C rank, but Eva informed him that things had already gone wrong and told him what else had happened. The only reason he didn't rush off to find and help was because she informed him that Anko and Chachizuru had already been sent, the latter without the Hokage's knowledge, so he decided to leave it to them. He had yet to defeat her in any game they played, which irritated his nerves and pride. In any case, Danzo promised to have an agent watch them from the shadows as well, but the agent wouldn't step in until a Konoha life was in jeopardy. Eva started, then shook her head. You know how strict he is in that terminology, so don't expect the guy to help until the guillotine is coming down. To be honest, it shouldn't have been necessary in the first place. Zabuza would be handled by Kakashi and Anko, and everyone else should be simple given the training we gave Naruto. The boys' team can compete well enough, and Zero can also assist. There should be no problems. Yeah, but I still worry, you know. Both Jiraiya and Eva had grown to care for Naruto over the years, as evidenced by their lighthearted nods. Chachizuru used to tease Eva about losing some of the dark edge that gave her all of her title in the past because she had lightened up after befriending Kushina. Eva had become cold again after the death of her and her husband, but finding and taking in Naruto quickly reversed that. Jiraiya cared for the boy as well as he found him to be the best of both his parents but still uniquely himself. He was strong, intelligent, hard-working, humorous, and an all-around fun guy. They'll be all right, I am aware of it. Yes, Eva scowled as the man joked. I kind of look forward to hearing the kid brag about it when he gets back. I had overlooked that when he returns, he'll be just as annoying as Kushina was, she muttered, making the man smile. Is Eva upset that she is unable to leave the village? Well, maybe if you'd grow up I can show you a few things I learned in foreign countries, he said, teasingly, before raising his hands and making grabbing motions. Oh, or maybe we can just play another GG game. He stopped when he was surrounded by dozens of spears of ice, half pointed at his face and the other half at his manhood. He made a shaky suggestion. All right, Team Anko has located Gato's headquarters. Tomorrow, while the rest of us watch over Tazuna, she will infiltrate and attempt to undermine him from within. Sasuke has improved enough on the exercise that I believe he can begin water walking. As the genin nodded during dinner, Kakashi explained, Hinata, you'll be practicing it as well. Our last will keep Tazuna under watch and alert us if anything comes up. Anko grinned cheekily off to the side while Chachizuru sat comfortably on Naruto's head. Depending on what Anko finds, we may be able to simply take out Gato and end this instantly, or we might wind up organizing a home invasion tomorrow. We'll find out and make plans for that. Sasuke and Hinata both nodded silently, and Naruto said, "Got it, sensei." The man didn't respond because his point had been made, and he simply returned to eating as some small talk started between the genin and Anko, who wanted to learn more about their new help while she just wanted to figure out how to play with the new rookies she was stuck with for the foreseeable future. Tazuna interjected with a comment or joke here and there, usually directed at Anko, and only smiled at their compliments about her cooking. Inari was the only one who appeared to be in a bad mood, as evidenced by his dark frown. So, until your sensei and your teammates emerge from the water below, we're just going to stand here and watch the old guy. With her form now resting on Naruto's shoulder rather than her usual head position, the doll asked as he nodded. Yes, it's dull, but whatever it takes to get the job done to at least get in a little training. I created a clone to watch from the other end of the bridge and to help me get used to the double sight as well. Yeah, Master and the mummy have been getting on her case about that trick. As they waited, Kakashi was down below at the water with Sasuke and Hinata, introducing the former to the exercise and giving the latter some tips to master it. Although he hated to admit it, he had to give the blonde credit because he had gotten her pretty far in just one morning. Although water walking was not a particularly difficult exercise after learning the tree walking, it usually took more than a few hours to complete. The latter was more likely. Not that he would ever discuss it with the blonde. After breakfast, Anko had disappeared, promising to return the following morning unless something serious came up, leaving Chachezero back with Naruto since her new favorite buddy was off doing true stealth work. The doll was initially upset, but she quickly got over it when she realized that she could bug Whiskers all day without him being able to get away. Much to Naruto's dismay, he had considered leaving her at the house but ultimately decided against it because he didn't want to torment Tsunami and Inari with Chachezero's gore-loving humor. Do you think you'll actually be facing Zabuza once more in the near future? Naruto nodded with a serious yet slightly excited expression on his face as the doll inquired. Yes, if Sensei is correct, the men are still alive, so he will return to try to complete his work. The blonde added, smiling, Sensei and Anko will probably end up dealing with Zabuza while me and the others deal with the Hunter. Plus, since we know about the Hunter this time, he'll actually bring them out as real backup and not just an escape plan. I'm genuinely excited about it, even though I know it's kind of wrong after how we handled ourselves against first the Demon Brothers and then Zabuza. I want to see if we can take care of this guy on our own too. Yes, we must check to see if Master's training was successful, the doll cut in, so he nodded. Yep, because she will bring you back to punish herself if you lose. You know, Masters don't train wimps. She chirped, causing Naruto to go a shade darker before frowning. Zero-chan. Way to ruin my happiness. I now have to worry about that as well. Whiskers, welcome. That night was pretty much the same as the previous one, except for the absence of Anko's jokes and Kakashi's report, since the former was still out gathering intelligence and nothing had changed for the latter to issue new orders. While Kakashi finished his meal and took out his Ika Ika book to read, Naruto asked Hinata and Sasuke how they were doing with water walking. Tazuna and Tsunami were silent as they ate, but it was finally getting on one another's nerves. Why even try, any of you? In any case, you're going to die. Inari yelled, slamming his hands on the table and glaring at the ninja. Tazuna and Tsunami sighed, both anticipating something along these lines eventually but hoping against it. While the ninja stared at him in bewilderment. In Kakashi's case, the man quickly returned to his book as if the child hadn't even spoken. What are you discussing? We've already prevailed in one battle. Sasuke grinned in agreement as Naruto boasted, there's no way we can lose now. Don't worry. Nothing's going to happen to your Gramps, and then when his bridge is finished this whole country will be back on its feet. You have no knowledge. Gato is just going to kill all of you. Inari retorted, there won't be any changes. What gives you the right to say that? Gato is powerless to harm us. Naruto scowled and retorted, and things will change, just wait and see. He's too weak, always hiding behind other people to fight his battles for him. No, they won't. You have no idea what life is like here. You have no idea what suffering is like. Inari yelled as Naruto's face fell into a furious scowl, startling both of his teammates because they had never witnessed him get upset over anything before. Are you unaware of its nature? From my perspective, you're not suffering at all, so you're unaware, kid. Naruto interrupted Inari as he opened his mouth to speak, saying, don't say a damn word. Do you really believe that we are unaware of suffering? We all three do. Hinata is hated by her own family, he yelled back, pointing to his teammates. Only Sasuke remained after his entire family was killed. And until I got lucky at the age of 5, I had no one to grow up with. We've all three suffered, and yet you talk about suffering while sitting here in a comfortable, loving home with your mother and grandfather. Have you ever seen the homeless orphans? You think you have it bad, but they have it worse than anyone I've seen. What on earth is wrong with you? Naruto yelled, got up, and walked out the front door, slamming it behind him. Inari was taken aback and only looked at the other people in the room before bolting upstairs, where they all heard a door close shortly after. Is he being truthful? What about everyone? Sasuke grunted and Hinata nodded shyly as Tazuna asked. I ought to beat the living daylights out of him for that, the Uchiha muttered. My business is my business. Before returning to his meal, Hinata, who was no longer particularly hungry, glanced at the door before lowering her eyes to the table. Yano, The mummy would be angry with ya fair losin'. You're cool like that. Chachezero tauntingly reprimanded Naruto as he repeatedly punched a tree. The doll was perched on his cloak, which he had placed on the ground after entering the clearing to decompress. He had put the clothing down, placed the doll on top of it, and then simply began punching a tree without stopping. The tree now had a large cracked dent, and Naruto's knuckles were bleeding, but he didn't care. He answered without pausing, I know. Master wouldn't like it either. I know. The blonde, who was panting heavily, simply walked over to the doll and sat next to her. The two remained silent as he continued to punch the tree, but at last he put chakra into his fist and punched as hard as he could, causing the tree to tip back and then fall over completely with a loud crack that reverberated throughout the clearing. Are you all right, Whiskers? For once, she asked without her typical smile. The blonde took a few deep breaths and then nodded his head. Zero-chan, I'll be fine. I just got mad at Inari. He believes he has it so bad, but he doesn't even care that people down the street have it 10 times worse. She nodded, having been irritated by his complaining as well. It just really made me mad, but I'll be alright, he explained. I could frighten him a little if you want. He would learn from that. Naruto laughed, crossed his hands behind his head, and lay back as she offered. Thanks, but no, the child is already depressing because of Zero-chan. However, it would be enjoyable. He pulled a hand out to place the doll on his chest and then put it back under his head, pointing out, for you. That's right, that's what matters, isn't it? The blonde simply continued to laugh, delighted that the doll could lift his spirits. He let out a sigh and then looked around. It's not too bad out here, you know. Zero-chan, would you like to just stay the night here? As the doll tipped back to lie on his chest rather than sit, she bounced her head a few times before he asked. Why not? Is it okay for me to kill anything that bothers us? Yes, animals, but if it's human, wake me up. It will work.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.